Welcome back to the Director Dossiers. This episode is a deep dive into the history behind the production of James Cameron's Titanic. For more on James Cameron, check out our episode on his entire filmography. We also got episodes on Kubrick, Nolan, Leone, Paul Thomas Anderson, and Scorsese. I had to say Paul Thomas Anderson's full name because Anderson isn't really recognizable.
Yeah.
Of course, Titanic was called the unsinkable ship, and one of the ironic lessons of that tragedy is, is beware the dangers of overconfidence and learn humility and recognize your vulnerabilities, let's say. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things I realized doing all the research that we poured into the Titanic, into the movies that depict Titanic, I can truly say that this podcast will not suck. It's impossible.
Yes. You learned your lesson.
I learned my lesson from Titanic. Also, this episode is sponsored by Amber & Key, the film club and clothing brand inspired by the cinema of the VHS era. Their collections of clothing and accessories draw inspiration from movies like Fight Club and Eyes Wide Shut, and are manufactured in Portugal and are evidently very high quality and very comfortable because we're wearing them right now. Danny's doubled up over there.
I'm doubled up right now. I got two of them on right now. They're so comfy.
Yes, I got the Fight Club sweatshirt on. I've been calling it a sweaty for years.
Yeah.
Wait, sweatshirt.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is really, I like this a lot. And the material is it's like heavy cotton.
Yeah.
And it's really comfortable, especially for winter. I really like it a lot.
Yeah, it's perfect for
They had hats that I wanted to get because I'm a hat guy. I want to get one of the Amber & Key hats because they're really cool.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. The viewers are going to be like, why does Johnny look kind of stylish this episode? He usually just wears
I usually just wear the shittiest clothes. Yeah.
It's smart. Give you a whole makeover.
Yeah, exactly. So if you're tired of dressing like me and you want to wear some Amber & Key clothes
and look actually cool for once.
Yeah, and look cool for once, then visit amberandkey.com and get yourself some clothing and accessories, son, bro, or sis. We got some sisses watching this probably.
Nice. The writing/researching of Titanic. The arc of director James Cameron's film career first intersected with Titanic after September 1st, 1985, when an expedition led by Jean-Louis Michel and Robert Ballard discovered the long-lost wreck of Titanic.
So the reason it says it was the first time the arc of his film career touched Titanic is because when he was younger, he had been exposed to Titanic through a movie called A Night to Remember. He watched it on TV. That's from 1958. That was also about the sinking of the Titanic. And there was also a book called A Night to Remember that he read as well, right? And of course, he was never a Titanic guy growing up. He said it wasn't a perennial interest for him. The way that people studied Titanic back then, the way they studied something like the moon landing or the JFK assassination. Now there's like a sort of an industry of hobbyist researchers around that. But in terms of his film career, this was the first time where the fallout of finding the wreck affected his films in terms of like The Abyss, because he saw the ROVs that they were using when they found the wreck, right? And he was like, I got to use this for The Abyss. So he contacts Robert Ballard, who discovered the wreck. And Ballard, that expedition that they led, I think it was a French-American? Yeah, because Jean-Louis Michel, he has to be French. How funny would it be if Robert Ballard was French and Jean-Louis Michel was American?
We're just saying his name completely wrong.
It's John Lewis Michael.
John Lewis. Yeah.
Anyway, so their original mission was they worked in tandem with the Navy. And the Navy said, hey, there's these two nuclear submarines that we lost in, World War II. No, not World War II because they're nuclear. How did they lose nuclear submarines outside of World War II? What? In the North Atlantic Ocean. There was no war. What? I just realized that. If you know why, tell us, because I just realized, what the hell?
There's an explanation.
Are they just losing nukes like that all the time?
Dude, I'm pretty sure they are. That's the scary
How
part.
have we not gotten blown up?
They're just losing nukes at the bottom of the ocean.
Okay. So anyway, they go, you have 14, the Navy goes, you have 14 days to find the goddamn things and photograph the wrecks for us, okay? And they go, got it. And in 6 days, they found the wrecks and photographed them. And then they go, John Lewis goes, yes, maybe we should try finding the Titanic.
It's just John Lewis. He's not even French.
And Rob Ballard goes, yeah, we should find the Titanic really quick. And they found it.
Quick, yeah.
And that was a big deal because nobody knew if the wreck had snapped in half. Like, if you look at all the movies before 1985, they all depict it just going in as one piece. Mm-hmm. But that was the first, oh shit, there's two pieces? Holy shit. But there's two stories from the Abyss that I thought were so goddamn good that I found in researching for this. And it's just a good introduction to who James Cameron is on the set and as a character. Maybe not as a whole, but like how he can get. So at one point, the Abyss was sort of like the prototype version of the disastrous production of Titanic. It was sort of just the Titanic, but with a $40 million budget, right? And the studio guys are just like, fuck, we gotta wrangle this in. Like, we gotta do something. We gotta send a guy in there. And they would just send studio guys in. And it was like, imagine like, a kid gets sent to the principal's office and the kid comes out crying. It's like that, but with James Cameron as the principal and the executives are coming out crying.
Yeah.
So the first guy who went there was this guy, Harold Schneider. And he walks in, he's like, dusting off his hands. Like, listen, guys, here's what we got to do. We're going to cut this scene. We're going to cut this scene. We're going to cut this scene. Don't even worry about it. Jimmy Cameron, don't worry about Jimmy Cameron. I'll talk to him. And as he's talking, James Cameron walks in. And he goes, what the fuck are you doing here? And he goes, Jimmy. And he goes, don't call me Jimmy. If there's anything I hate more than being called Jimmy, or if there's anything I hate more than fucking executives on my set, it's being called Jimmy, pal. He's like jabbing him in the chest. And he goes, he grabs his arm, like the Harold Schneider guy grabs James Cameron's arm, the executive grabs his arm and goes, like, Jimmy, don't worry. He goes, if there's anything I hate more than being called Jimmy, it's being fucking touched. Don't fucking touch me ever. Get the fuck off my set. You stink. I want you out of here. And the guy was like, okay, fine. Like, fuck.
He just knew what that guy was there for.
Right, but they also had a big tank that used to be a nuclear power plant. It was a big giant, hemisphere in the ground with those filled with water. And James Cameron takes the guy by the collar and like hangs him over the side of it. And he's like, I don't want you here ever. You hear me? You motherfucker.
As the Abyss.
Yeah, and he kicks him in there. So then the guy leaves. He's like, oh fuck. And all the crew are like, holy shit. And then the guy leaves, and James Cameron turns around and just goes, sometimes you gotta send a message. I don't know.
Hell yeah.
So yeah,
that's baller.
And then this isn't even the craziest thing. And then later, like let's say a month later, they send another guy, Roger Birnbaum, to go in there, and he's the same thing. He's like, he's not cocky. He's more like just excited and naive to like try to wrangle in the production. And he comes up to Jim on the set, and this is so we talked about this in our filmography, James Cameron's filmography episode, where he almost died on the set of The Abyss. He almost drowned. So they're filming way at the bottom of the tank, and they're filming for so long, James Cameron it slipped his mind, and all of the oxygen in his tank ran out. So he goes, all right, there's nobody like near me that can get to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to ditch the tank and try to swim up. And that's very dangerous because if you swim up too fast, you'll decompress in a way that's not the most. I don't know how the whole decompression thing works, but
healthy,
what they had to do was like sit at the top of the water for like an hour before they got out, so the oxygen, the condensed oxygen in their lungs wouldn't fucking
I think
explode.
your lungs can like collapse.
Yeah,
or
something like that, right? But he just swims straight up, and a safety guy, one of the lifeguards, sees him going up there and goes, "Oh shit, he's gonna die." So he swims up to Cameron and puts the air nozzle in his mouth, but he puts it in upside down, so Cameron gets half water and half oxygen. So he has water in his lungs now. Now he really can't breathe, and he punches the guy in the face, and then swims up and goes, "Oh!" and he doesn't die, and he fires the safety guy.
Yeah.
And then that night, just 2 hours later, he's like, "I almost croaked. Holy shit!" And then the Roger Birnbaum shows up, and he goes, "Listen, Jim, I'm really trying to get these scenes out of here." And he goes, "Yeah, I understand." He goes, "Roger, come here for a second. I want to show you something." And he takes like the collar, the lock collar that locks their air helmets over on their neck, and he puts it on the Roger guy, and he goes, "Watch this." And he goes, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Just don't worry about it." And he puts the helmet on the guy. So it's not hooked up in it. The guy can't breathe. So he goes, "So yeah, I let him gasp for air for like 25, 30 seconds. And then I took the thing off of him, and he goes, I almost died earlier today. That's what it feels like. And that's what it feels like even more so with you fucking idiots coming on the set while I'm trying to do shit." Dude. And the guy's like, "Oh," and he ran away. Yeah. That's the type of shit he gets up to sometimes.
I think I'd cry if that happened to me.
That would be pretty traumatizing.
You would cry because you're like, James Cameron's not a nice guy.
Well, I'm not. I don't know how much of it is like. I'm sure he's. Yeah, it could. A lot of his intense behavior is prone to sometimes him acting like an asshole like that. But I never met the guy. I'm not gonna sit here and go, "What an asshole" or "What a hero." But also, we don't have a lot of. Because usually this section of the podcast is called the writing of blank, but this is called the writing and research because there's not a lot of documentation on him writing it. There's some, but a lot of it just has to do with researching the Titanic and the wreck and getting the submersibles to go film it. That's a lot of what we'll talk about here. But I do have the notes that he wrote down. In 1987, he wrote down some notes for his Titanic movie, and I'm going to read them right now. He goes, due story with bookends of present-day scene of wreck using submersibles, intercut with memory of a survivor and recreated scenes of the night of the sinking. A crucible of human values under stress, a certainty of slowly impending doom, in parentheses, metaphor, division of men doomed and women and children are saved by customs of the times. Many dramatic moments of separation, heroism, cowardice, civility versus the animal aggression. It needs a mystery or driving plot element woven through all of this as the background. And then he said the title Titanic was added to his development slate. I hope the title was Titanic. Anyway. So yeah.
I feel like he hit all those points.
Yeah, it was pretty much, there's not a lot of major changes that we see from his original notes to the final product of the movie. But in 1992, he was, after he just made Terminator and he's sort of trying to get True Lies off the ground. But he starts taking down some more notes on Titanic. And he goes, yeah, maybe I should do a movie on that. Like, well, let's see. And then he goes, I haven't seen that in a while. He goes, I'm going to watch A Night to Remember. And he watched it. And then 2 days later, he gets an invitation in the mail from this guy, Al Giddings, who was the director of photography, I think for either just the underwater scenes or both the underwater scenes and the regular set stuff. For The Abyss. And it was an invitation from him, Al Giddings, inviting James Cameron to a screening of the Titanic footage, a documentary about the Titanic wreck. Now, I found conflicting stuff, because in the Charlie Rose interview, Cameron describes this moment as, I got an invitation to go see the IMAX footage of the Titanic wreck called Titanica. But then I saw in the book, it says that he invited him to a screening of Al Giddings' documentary about the Titanic wreck called Treasures of the Deep, Titanic. So I don't know which one is true. I don't know which one because Al Giddings directed that one, so it would make sense that he was getting an invitation to go see that. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Nobody cares about this. But he saw that, and it's just sort of a funny coincidence that he just was considering the Titanic movie a couple days later. He goes, "Whoa, a message from the ether, man." That kind of thing.
Oh, dude.
Yeah.
It's a sign.
He was still on his LSD trip from 1981 or whatever it was.
He did? He did that?
Remember we talked about that in our filmography episode. There's
10 months ago.
That's true. For those, there's like a 10-minute video, maybe it might be like 20 minutes of James Cameron describing his LSD trip where he almost got shot in the head. If you want to listen to that, but make sure if you click off of our video, make sure to come back.
Yeah, don't actually.
Yeah, don't go. Wow, it's crazy. They'll just leave. Let's see. So Al Giddings, the BSDP, he spent a summer on the Keldysh, which was the Russian Marine research ship. And he was sort of Cameron's in to try to get the Russian crews to work on his movie, because Giddings worked with the Russian submarines for his documentary, and he goes, maybe I can get those submarines for a Titanic movie, and then we actually go down there and fucking film the actual wreck, and then we can use that as a marketing thing, where it's like if you come see Titanic, you can actually see footage of the wreck. Also, the Titanic Treasures of the Deep documentary that was directed by Giddings. That was also narrated by Walter Cronkite.
Walter Cronkite?
Yeah, so he goes, the Titanic wreck is still down there, and that's the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a transition going on at Fox, and because Cameron was trying to get True Lies off the ground, and then Fox this happens all the time in movies where like a executive's like, yeah, we'll make the movie, and then like a month later that executive gets fired, and then you have to go, and you have to start all over and try to commit. So there was a transition going on at Fox for True Lies, and there was sort of a hiatus in pre-production, or if it wasn't pre-production, it was just getting the movie off the ground, right? So Cameron goes to Russia and meets all the guys on the Keldysh and the Mir sub. They were called, it was Mir 1 and Mir 2 were the Russian submarines, the submersibles. I think Mir in Russian means peace. And this is right after the Cold War. The Cold War ended in 1991, and this is 1992, and now it's Americans and Russians kind of working together for a research thing.
That's cool.
The guy, one of the submersible pilots was Anatoly what was his name? Segalovich? I think it was Segalovich or something. Anatoly Segalovich was one of the submersible pilots. And he goes over there and sort of drinks with them. He didn't go under yet, but he goes in the Keldysh with them, and they all just drink. And he sort of did it, like he tried to just get drunk with them to get them on his side.
Yeah,
But the problem is Cameron's a light drinker, and also Russians, they were drinking all the time.
Yeah,
I'm not saying all Russians are alcoholics, but like I feel like a Russian guy would wipe the floor with me in a drinking
these ones
contest.
are tough guy, like researcher, you know.
Yeah, well, and also we'll get to the parties that they had when they were actually filming the Titanic wreck, which is crazy. But yeah, they got hammered and they're all like laughing at Cameron. He's like curled up in the fetal position on the ground, like trying not to throw up. And they're like, and then they got the Sagovillage or whatever the guy's name is. He clinks his drinks with all the other guys. He goes, "We make Hollywood movies." Cameron's like, "Fuck yes, dude." So yeah, but he didn't tell anybody because he didn't want to publicize because he knew he might have to make another movie first, and he didn't want anybody to make another Titanic movie before he could. He didn't want to get Stanley Kubrick or anything. So, and also we talked about how in the filmography episode how James Cameron was friends with Guillermo del Toro, who did The Shape of Water and the Hellboy movies and another great movie called what's it called? He did a good ghost movie that's really good in like 2003.
Ghostbusters?
The Devil's Backbone. That's a great movie. But he was friends with Guillermo, and he told him sort of around the time he did Terminator and True Lies, he goes, "I just want to make like a love story or something. I want to make, like a genre piece, not like an action movie." And he goes, "I want to make something smaller." And then one day, Cameron calls him up and he goes, "I found my love story. It takes place in the Titanic." And Guillermo's like, "Well, there goes your little love story or whatever."
I was gonna say, and then it kind of transforms into a bit of an action movie too.
It does, and even more so, there's deleted scenes that make it so much more of an action movie.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, there's one scene that they deleted that cost $1 million to shoot, and they deleted it.
That's rough.
Yeah, and also Cameron had it was called a script mint. So there's the script, right, which has all the dialogue and the action stuff, and then there's like a treatment, which is sort of like a scene outline and like plot outline. But I guess he sort of did both, where it was a plot outline and it had dialogue, but it also it would be like exterior, the Titanic wreck, and the submersibles go through the Titanic, and then it has dialogue, and then he goes, and on April 14th, 1912, the Titanic went down, and now we see the bow of the ship here, and and then he does like sort of information that's not action or dialogue, so it's like a script mint, right? It's like a mix, and it's sort of like a book script, and it's 400 pages long. This collector's edition, I think my dad found this for me. Like he does garage door stuff, and sometimes people give him free movies.
Yeah.
When he tells them I'm into movies, and I got this collector's edition. It's fucking awesome. I spent the whole morning. I spent like 6 hours watching everything on it, and it has all these production. There's 100 behind the scenes things, but then it has all these production stills. That there's like 1,000 of those. There's one that was 641 pictures, and I clicked through all of them on the Blu-ray, and then there was the script mint. And I go, it's 400 pages. And I go, holy shit, I'm not reading this thing.
Yeah. And then you read it?
What?
Did you read it?
No, I read the first 2 pages. I couldn't read the whole thing. But also, he had to make True Lies first. So he goes, let me put this on the back burner for now. I'll go make True Lies really quick, and then I'll come back to this. And then I also have for context of, him making the Titanic movie in 97, let's say. I want to, just list off all the previous Titanic movies that were also made, because some of them have pretty crazy stories. So the first one that I found, that was called Titanic. Actually, no, there was one there was a documentary from back in the day, like one real document, like say 15 minutes. It was about this lady Dorothy Gibson, who was a survivor of the Titanic. It was called Saved from the Titanic. It was released months after it happened, and it was like narrated by her and just talking about her experience. And you can find some stills from it, but it was destroyed in a studio fire in like 1915. Let's say. So it just doesn't exist anymore.
You can't watch it at all.
No,
that's terrible.
Then there was Titanic 1915, which starred Mario Bernard. Do you remember that name?
No.
In our Sergio Leone podcast, we talked about how he worked as an assistant director a lot before he became a director, and that director that he worked for as an assistant director was Mario Bernard. He was the guy where he was simulating the boat passing to all the crew or to all the extras at the bottom. So he goes, "Look at me, I'm the boat, everybody, I'm the boat, look at me." And then he walked off the platform and fell into the water, and he couldn't swim.
Oh no!
And they had to jump in after him so he didn't drown. There was a Titanic in 1943, and it was made by Germany. Do you know who governed Germany in 1943?
No.
Do you know?
Adolf Hitler?
Yes. Who turns out, big jerk.
Yeah, huge jerk.
And the guys who worked for him, too, were jerks.
Yeah, apparently.
And so they made this movie. It was a German propaganda movie. It was spearheaded by Joseph Goebbels, or Goebbels, however you say his name.
Yeah.
He was the minister of propaganda for the Nazis. And he goes, we got to make, what they were trying to do is take these historical events and insert Germans into them to make Germans look sick as fuck. So there was so in Titanic 1943, the whole premise of it was like, oh, it was this American and British greed and capitalism that did it. And our German hero was on the ship saving people. Like the protagonist is a German officer who was just saving people.
He's just in an SS. He's in an SS uniform, just
probably
saving people.
I'm a good guy, actually.
Yeah,
you know?
That's nuts.
And but the thing is, a week into shooting, they had this guy his name was Herbert Selpin, who was the director, and they had the Kriegsmarine, which were these Marine officers, naval officers, Nazis who were hired as Marine consultants for the movie. But after a week, they weren't helping as consultants at all. They were just molesting and raping all the women on the set, as if those guys couldn't get any worse.
Yeah.
And so, what's his name? Selpin complains to his friend, like, these fucking guys, I can't with these guys. They're not even doing anything. They're raping ladies. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And his friend reports him to the Gestapo. He's like, how dare he besmirch their name? So he reports him to the Gestapo. The Gestapo comes and arrests him. And Goebbels is like, take it back, bitch. He's like, nuh-uh. And he goes, all right, fine. And then the next day they found him hung in his cell. They fucking Epsteined him, dude.
Yeah.
And then they hired another guy, Werner Klingy or something like that.
Matter.
And they finished the movie, which is pretty insane. And they also use clips from the German Titanic in A Night to Remember.
They did?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Like some footage that they filmed.
Oh, wow.
They used it in A Night to Remember because it was just broken up and sold for like stock footage to other I guess studios after World War II.
Oh, I guess. So it did end up releasing. That movie did end up releasing.
I think in Germany, yeah.
And I'm sure it's hard to distribute their movie other places.
Well, the thing when they were filming it, there was all these lights because it was like a giant fucking movie set. So there was all these lights. They're like, we're gonna give away our position. They're gonna bomb us, thinking we're like some kind of military installation. So yeah,
it's kind of nuts to be like full out war. Almost towards the end, losing a war and be like, let's make a Titanic
it's insane.
movie,
It's insane to do one of the like what they were doing, and in the middle of that, going, you know what we should do? Make a movie.
Yeah, let's make a movie.
What else we got here? There was a Titanic in 1953 with Barbara Stanwyck, which was I didn't watch it, but I seen clips from it. You know, it's what you'd expect a Titanic movie from 1953 to look like. Then of course, A Night to Remember I watched, which is actually it's very good. The ship doesn't break. It's one piece as it goes in, and it's basically as facts based as Titanic, let's say, but there's no single protagonist. It's sort of like, you know, just following like let's say 8 different characters, right? Cool. But the problem is they all look the same. Like if you look at a guy from like the 1950s back then, if they weren't wearing a different colored suit, you're fucked. Try watching the original Ocean's 11 and try to recognize anybody outside Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin. You're screwed. Yeah. And Sammy Davis Jr., I guess. Like, yeah, they all look like they're about to have a heart attack. One of them does have a heart attack in the movie. In the movie, he just is on the middle. They pull off the heist, and then they're like, all he needs to do is walk across the street with the money, and he fucking has a heart attack in the middle of the road. Anyway, back to the Titanic. Yeah. But in A Night to Remember, it was frustrating to me, even though it's good, because I'm like, there's a subplot in the movie where there's this. It was the RMS Californian, let's say. I don't know if it was the RMS or SS. And it was this little boat that was 10 miles in the movie. It was 10 miles away from the Titanic, and they could see the Titanic, and the Titanic could see them. And the whole movie, they just don't like their Marconi guy, the telegram wireless guy, goes to bed, so they don't get any telegrams from the Titanic. And the Titanic's shooting flares, and they're like, oh, they're lighting rockets tonight. Right? Yeah. And I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm like, is that real? And then I look at deleted scenes and with the commentary from James Cameron on the collector's edition Blu-ray or the DVD, and he goes, so we filmed this scene and this actually happened. So this is true. So what fucking happened is that this is in real life. The Californian was at least 15 miles away from the Titanic, right? And they were stopped because there was so much goddamn ice. But since it was the Titanic and it was the maiden voyage, the two Marconi guys, guys, the wireless operators, were just swamped with messages. And they were like trying, like, oh my shit, okay, writing it down, Morse code, okay, next one. And they're really backlogged. And the Californians, since they were so close, whenever they would message the Titanic, it would spark so loud because they were so close. And he goes, oh, listen to the spark on that thing. He goes, tell this idiot to be quiet. So the Californian guy messages them and goes, hey, there's ice out here, like, be careful. And the Marconi guy in the Titanic doesn't even,
He's like,
he goes, ah, fuck. He doesn't read it and just messages him back and goes, shut up.
No way.
He goes, shut up, I'm trying to work.
And then the Titanic guy's like, yo, we need help over here. And the Californian's like, shut up.
No, he's just catching Z's, dude. So he goes, fuck them. And the guy in the Californian, and he turns off the machine and goes to bed. And then they did see the Titanic fly rockets in the air.
Bro,
and we're just like, oh,
crazy.
I wonder. But there's some controversy over, like,
that.
Could they actually gotten to them because the engines were cold because they were stopped? It would have taken a while.
Yeah.
There's some looseness in the facts there but it's like that is true. He did tell him to shut up.
That's wild.
And that's the thing. What's one of the most tragic things about Titanic is because there's 1,000 things that happened or didn't happen, where if they happened differently, if one of them happened differently, nobody would have died.
Yeah, it would have been.
Right. Like there's a scene in the movie where they goes, oh, we forgot the binoculars for the crow's nest up top. If they fucking forgot the binocular, if they didn't forget them, they might have seen the iceberg sooner and they wouldn't have hit it.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many things.
Do we know how real that part is?
No, that's true.
The binocular.
Mhm.
That seems like the craziest part because they're talking about, they know there's icebergs.
Yeah.
And they're just like, the most important people to have binoculars don't have binoculars, but they're so nonchalant about it when they're walking on the deck or wherever wherever they are on the
it's
on the poop deck.
Yeah,
or
it's
whatever.
basically starting a Scooby-Doo mission without Velma's glasses.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Why? And nobody's looking for the binocular.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, I'll get him next time.
Yeah, yeah.
But also in A Night to Remember, the guy in this Titanic, James Cameron, who's like, I say order here, and he has the gun. That guy, he's great. And that actor, I think his name is Joey Phillips. He's great. His character's name was Lightoller, and he sort of ends up being sort of the protagonist in A Night to Remember, where he ends up getting on a overturned collapsible boat, with everybody else, and they stand on top of it. And he's like, all right, go to the left, go to the right, go to like leaning. And there's like 30 of the guys in the back. That actually happened, and they filmed it for the movie. There's one shot of it at the end that they cut out in James Cameron's Titanic as well. There was a movie in 1964, The Unsinkable Molly Brown. I forget who that's about. There in 1979, there was the SOS Titanic. And the thing about SOS is 1912, there was with the introduction of wireless, the emergency signals and communications were in a time of change. So SOS was a relatively new thing. So it is possible that maybe there was a miscommunication between the Californian and Titanic because of those changing regulations around, emergency communications. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But also David Warner was in the SOS Titanic. David Warner plays Lovejoy, who is Cal's right-hand guy who has the gun.
Oh, yeah, okay.
That guy. He was also
like
in
his
that.
loyal servant.
Yeah, exactly.
Cal, yeah.
So yeah, there was also Raise the Titanic in 1980, which I think was a $40 million budget maybe in 1980, and it bombed. It's about them getting the wreck out of there, which is like, why?
Would take it out.
Yeah, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, it's just going to fall apart probably.
Yeah.
That makes no sense.
There's also a Titanic miniseries that came out in 1996, like a year, because I think what happened was they heard Cameron was making Titanic and they fast-tracked the miniseries to sort of like cash in on it. Mm-hmm. But it has a great cast. It has Peter Gallagher, who's the villain in Mr. Deeds, the Adam Sandler movie, not the Gary Cooper one. There's George C. Scott from Strangelove. They'll see the big board. That guy, that's where he knows from. Tim Curry. You know Tim Curry? He plays the head butler in Home Alone 2. There's a crazy man with a gun. He's also It. He's also the Rocky Horror Picture Show. He was in Clue. You know Clue, like Clue the game? I watched the movie with my parents. I loved it. He's also in that as well. Tim Curry's great.
Is that a series, Clue?
No, it's a movie. Okay. They filmed 3 different endings. At the time, there was A and B and C endings. And then when they released it with each screening had a different ending.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Catherine Zeta-Jones and Eva Marie Saint were in that miniseries as well. Eva Marie Saint was in North by Northwest. Mm-hmm. And then in 1997, there was The Chambermaid on Titanic, which was released, I think, maybe like right before or after. It was a Spanish movie. and it's about this guy who maybe has like a one night stand with a chambermaid who works on the Titanic, and then she gets on the Titanic, and he's like, "All right, see you later," and then she dies, but then it sort of gets around town that he cheated on his wife with her, and the whole thing is like, did he do it or not? I haven't seen it, but I skipped through it a little bit then there's, of course, they made a million Titanic stuff, Titanic things after the movie came out. I remember seeing Titanic 2 when I was little. It was when Netflix was sort of only for straight to DVD like Sharknado ripoffs. Right? And I saw Titanic 2 made in 2010. And they're like, trust me, guys, this one's definitely unsinkable. And then they go out and a tsunami hurls an iceberg at them. And they cut to one action shot the whole movie because it's low budget. Yeah. The only action shot they have, they do it like 5 times, they cut back to it, is like people going up the stairs and they trip on the top step.
Mm-hmm. It's funny on like YouTube, if you look up Titanic, if you scroll down far enough, it starts reaching like trailers for Titanic 2, and it's just like an edited picture of Leonardo DiCaprio like still hanging on to like a piece of wood with like long hair. It's like, it's not how it would work. They wouldn't just pick the story up from like him surviving still floating in the water.
Like, I showed that to my parents last night. I thought, because I saw the same thing and I laughed for so long. Because first it's 40-year-old Leonardo DiCaprio with a beard and long hair still hovering like on like a wooden door, as if he would be alive. Yeah, for 40 years.
He's still just hanging on.
It's so funny. I love it. That. So yeah, I think that's all I got for the writing and researching. We'll get to the actual filming the wreck.
Cool.
Sorry if that was long, but I want to get everything. This is the last time I'm going to research this movie and watch it for a while, so I want to get everything in this podcast.
I think the one thing that we might have missed was how it's kind of crazy. I think I heard this. Maybe it was the 1953 one. They actually had a bit of an advantage over James Cameron in filming because they still had some of the boats, like the steamboats, that resembled Titanic if you shot it from the right angle. So there were parts where they could just repaint the side of the boats, like these real boats, and they could redesign some of the rooms to just look like the Titanic. So they didn't have to rebuild like a whole boat. Right. They could just use the boats that were still there.
Well, back then they were using miniatures anyway, right?
Like for the sinking and stuff, but for some of the scenes, I'm pretty sure they had an advantage where they could actually use real boats that were already a thing. They didn't have to go and build a whole brand new boat.
Interesting.
Filming the wreck of the Titanic. After finishing True Lies, Cameron was unsure if the Russians were still interested in letting him use their subs. So, he returned to Russia and made a proposal to the Shirshov Institute, explaining how the expedition will have scientific value. He got the green light.
Turns out they were the Shirshov Institute.
Oh my dude.
Also, we're like, 30 minutes in? So if you're still watching, you're obviously enjoying the podcast, or you're just hate watching it.
Yeah,
in both cases, like or dislike the episode, and comment, subscribe, and recommend to any friends who are interested in film.
And if you're hate watching, just keep watching.
Yeah, throw some hate comments down there.
Yes.
And recommend this to more friends who would also hate it. And also, we're gonna have a movie coming out soon. Me and Danny made a feature film that's gonna be releasing in March, April 2025. So if you're watching this after that, it's available to watch. So you should go to the website. I'll have it linked down, and you can watch it on Amazon or buy the Blu-ray. So in March 1995, Cameron and his the president of Lightstorm Productions, which is his production company, Ray Sancini, they go to Peter Chernin, who worked at Fox. He was a big guy at Fox, and they pitch him Titanic. They went in without a pitch. He didn't have anything, right? And Cameron, his pitches are sort of famous because he went into to pitch Aliens 2, and he goes Alien on a white. I think we talked about this. He writes Alien on a whiteboard, and then he writes an S, and the guys are still like, and then he puts a line through the S and makes it a dollar sign, and the executives just lean forward and go, "Holy shit!" And then he got the role. He got the job.
Smart.
So that's apparently that's true. And so he goes into this pitch without anything and just goes, "It's Romeo and Juliet on the Titanic." And they go, "Okay, Jim." And they're not as enthusiastic as they were with Aliens 2. Because they're like, so let me get this straight. You want to make a 3-hour costume period piece, and it's a love story, and you're known for Terminator. And he's like, yeah, And they're like, great, when can we shoot? He kind of had to convince them for a while.
And how did because True Lies wasn't like a super big hit, right?
Well, the budget for True Lies was 120 million, and it made somewhere around like 420 worldwide.
Oh, okay.
So it would be like a $250 million movie making 800 million, adjusted for inflation. So it was a hit. So Cameron asked them, he goes, just give me $2 million to fund the dives to go film the Titanic wreck. And they go, what? And they're like, are you crazy? $2 million? And he goes, think about it this way. He goes, you guys would spend the same amount of movie slotting the movie anyway for like the schedule and actually committing to making it. And he goes, and think about this as a marketing thing as well. Like, this is going to be a great marketing campaign for the movie where, oh, James Cameron and his film crew went down to film the Titanic for their movie Titanic. And they're like, God damn it, he's right. Like, we're probably going to have to make this movie now. But they didn't officially greenlight it yet. That would come, much later. So this happened. So Fox agrees, all right, fine, we'll give you the $2 million to fund the wreck. And so now he has to put a team together to go do it with the Russians. And he calls his brother, Mike Cameron, who's an engineer. And Mike Cameron recounts, he goes, yeah, I'm like, I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden I get a call from Jim and I answer it. And Jim's like, holy shit, we're going to make Titanic. We got to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. And then you're going to be on it. And then we're going to do this. Holy shit. And he says, like, slow down. And he goes, all right, so what you're going to need to do is you're going to need to make an arm attachment for the camera that can, attach to the submersible. And we need to pan and tilt with the camera. But also the camera has to withstand, 5,000 pounds per square inch of pressure. So make sure you build a good housing unit. You got 5.5 months. And he's like, okay, Jim, God damn it.
Just change the course of film history in 5 months,
exactly.
Please.
So Mike Cameron's housing unit that he made, it was basically made to support 2.3 times the depth of the Titanic wreck. So let's say the Titanic was 2 miles down, his housing unit would still work down to 5 miles, right? And that amount of pressure, if you put it, just to visualize it, take 20 semi-trucks and then stack them on top of each other, and then stack them on top of the housing unit for the camera, and it would be fine.
That's crazy.
I don't know how they do that.
Yeah, I don't get it either, actually. Like that, I don't know. Let's move on.
Let's try to figure out how physics works.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I'm sure that'll take us 5 minutes tops.
Let's move on before I say some stupid, even more stupid thing.
So they're preparing to do the wreck, and Mike Cameron, is making acquaintance with the Russian guys. Anatoly Salgolev. I'll get his name right later. I'm sorry, because I have it in my notes somewhere, but I can't find it. And so he, sends a memo to the Russian team, and goes, it's like a 30-question thing of like, hey, I need the electrical schematics for this. I need the electrical schematics for this, because if I'm gonna make a camera, I need to know how much electricity the whole thing can support. And so Anatoly Segalevich writes him back, and just with just like a fucking faxed note, and it's like a whole piece of paper, and on the top, and it's just 4 words or whatever. It said, Mike, Mir has big power, no problem. After 30 seconds of 30 questions, he has like a whole 2 pages. He just goes, no problem, don't worry about it. He's like, these fucking, I can't with these fucking guys. But also it was still right. I don't know how much of it was the fact that the Cold War ended like a year or a couple years before this. So I don't know if they were still we don't know if we want to give away this.
Yeah.
Right, you know what I mean? And I'm not saying Anatoly was like, fuck Americans, but maybe just from habit, they were like, I don't know if we should give out the schematics for this. You know what I mean? But also the Kildish, which is the ship that they used. That was also the ship that they used in the movie for the whole operation for diving into the wreck. It was one of the largest, ships that was strictly for marine research. And they basically spent a month on that. They started September 1st was their test, where they did a test where they just put the submarines in the camera housing unit in the water like 400 feet down for just a few hours, and did, all the motor controls and stuff. And the night of that test, Linda Hamilton was there, James Cameron's wife. He was married to her. She played Sarah Connor in Terminator 2 and Terminator 1, evidently. And that night, as she was leaving, he asked her to marry her.
Nice.
And she goes, no, she said, yeah. And then September 8th, they did their first full dive, where they went down all the way to the Titanic and started filming, right? But it turned out to be a total shit show, because, of course, all of a sudden, hurricane season hit.
Oh,
And now they're trying to do all this shit with hurricane season. So all the currents at the bottom were sort of unpredictable. They're like, we don't know exactly how the weather up there impacts. Nobody's spent any time down here. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's scary to think.
And so they go down there, but also because first of all, these subs, the pressure's insane. They explain how the camera rig that Mike Cameron built, where since it's so close to the submersible that if anything on that, because it's supposed to pan and tilt as well so they can get moves, like camera moves. And they go, we're basically holding a shotgun that was pointed right at us the whole time, because if that thing like explodes,
oh yeah,
or like it's gonna send it, we're fucked. And so they were walking around with that, or driving around with that, but also they had to get all this framing down because there was no room for them to like fuck up the framing. Because if you look at the movie, anytime you see two submarines with the wreck, it's a miniature, and anytime you see one submarine with the wreck, it's real. So they had to correspond with the other guys, be like, all right, go this way a little bit. You're almost in the shot, okay? And they brought a light tower down there, and the light tower cost like $160,000, and it wouldn't work.
It just couldn't handle the pressure.
Yeah, it turns out the company rated it for a pressure that it couldn't reach.
Oh wow.
So those didn't work. So now they were just strictly trying to do it with the lights on the subs. And but it's so hard because they're looking through these 6-inch peepholes, and they're filming a submersible to like 20,000 feet under the water, whatever it is, 10,000 feet. And so what they started to do is, because they did like 12 different dives, right? And also this thing's 6 feet wide, 7 feet wide, and there's 3 people in it. And going down takes like 2 or 3 hours, and going up takes 2 or 3 hours. But then they're down there for another 12 filming.
Yeah,
so they're in there for like 16, 17 hours a day, like laying down and curled up and shit. It's fucking horrible.
Nuts,
also, it's freezing. So what they did on the surface on the boat is they made miniatures, and they got the lighting down. They went in the dark room and got a miniature of the wreck, and they had these submersibles. And Jim's like, all right, so for shot number 2, we're going to do this, and you guys are going to come in here, and then we'll still be here. And they would try to choreograph it that way, but sometimes the currents would just come in and fucking.
That's scary to be near a ship or near the Titanic on the bottom, not knowing if a current is just going to come and smash you up against the side of it or something.
Well, they did crash into the Titanic at one point.
Did they really?
Where because this fucking crazy current came, and they're like fuck, and they're like they realized that the arm for in the housing unit of the camera was about to hit into the ship first, which again is a shotgun getting pointed right at them. So they had to turn. I think it was at starboard side when you go to the left. So they had to turn really quick to not hit that, and they just made sure the submersible hit the Titanic. And they they didn't crash. It wasn't like they just kind of bumped into it, but it still crashed. Yeah. And then at one point, James Cameron and Anatoly are, Mir 2 goes, all right, we're gonna get out of here, guys. We're gonna go back to the surface. Holy shit! Holy shit! I'm so sorry for anybody listening. I did not mean to do that. I'm very sorry. Excuse me. So they go back to the surface. I wish I could cut that out, but I don't feel like redoing everything I said. I'm sorry. That won't happen again. But they go up to the surface, and then James Cameron and Anatoly are like, "All right, sick, let's go." And they go up there, and all of a sudden the fucking thing stalls out, like 200 feet up from the surface, and then they go back down. And Anatoly goes, "Oh no!"
Oh no!
And Cameron goes, "If we hear a Russian guy say, 'Oh no,' you're fucked."
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, they were low on power, so they turn everything off. They even turn off the communications, and they're like, "Shit! Like what's going on?" And they go up again. They come back down. Go up again. Come back down. And then they realized that they were in sort of like a downstream from that was unique to being in front of the ship, where all the stream was pushing them down. So they would get to the top, and then they couldn't get to the top of the stream, and they couldn't get any further. They go back down. But every time they got pushed, they were getting pushed away from the wreck, which eased up the whatever current was affecting them. So eventually they were able to, they went up, and then they stopped, and then they kept going up. But the rate they were going up, because they were still low on power, Cameron's like, how long until we get to the surface? And the guy's like, 7 hours, 8 hours tops. And he goes, is there a way we can get there faster? And he goes, yeah, if we release the emergency ballast. And he goes, we had that the entire time. And we're fucking sitting here for 2 hours trying to get out of that stream. Mm-hmm. So that, yeah.
Like it's something, if they release it, they just shoot to the top. Okay.
I think it's weights. I don't know what a ballast is. I'm sorry. Probably should have looked it up.
It's funny you being like, I don't know, they turned to the starboard side, like to the left. We don't have to use. We're not on a boat right now.
We're gonna use it later when we talk about the Titanic, because I learned all the boat anatomy for this.
Okay, all right. You just wanted to say
The
poop
bow.
deck. You the bow. Poop deck.
I just wanted to say poop deck without laughing. Oh yeah, but also when they're on, it's funny that because Cameron was sort of writing the script while they were doing this. He had the script mint, so he knew sort of like how the bones of how the present day subsequences would go. So he already had those storyboarded. They were filming the Titanic without a shooting script essentially, right? But he was doing sort of like they talked about how he was doing soul searching on this because he went in trying to accomplish this on a technical level. And it just wasn't fucking working. It was just nothing was happening. And he goes, I started to look at this and he goes, I realized I was trying to doing this on a technical level where I should have been filming this wreck on an emotional level. And he goes, I had to appreciate the Titanic for what it was and try not to make it, cater to what I needed. And his character arc was actually very similar to what Brock Lovett goes through, Bill Paxton goes through in the movie. And maybe some of that bled into the script. Not that James Cameron was trying to steal anything from Titanic, not to as an extreme extent as Bill Paxton's character does in the movie, but sort of like a soft version of that he went through in real life. And they talk about how I mentioned that the Americans and the Russians were having these parties. They were doing like cutting edge technology with the wreck and getting absolutely fucking hammered every single night.
Yeah, every night.
So Cameron's like in his room, like, man, I don't know. What does life mean, man? I got to film this Titanic. And outside, everybody's getting hammered, drinking their drink. It's like in fucking The Master. They're cracking open the torpedoes and like drinking the ethanol out of them or whatever the fuck it was. There was one guy, he woke up, he was like in the fetal position on his bed and he wakes up the next morning and he's what happened? And he goes, I drank laser coolant, like shit like that. They were so hammered. They started the arms that get the submarines out of the water, and they were like, oh, playing with them and shit. And they almost caused like an international incident.
Oh my, how?
Like with doing it, because that's what the book says. There's all these
rules.
regulations around using those arms and stuff, and they're using this research vessel, and like maybe the what do they call them? The partners that were funding the mission were like, what the fuck are you guys doing?
It's funny to think about like James Cameron waking up drunk at the wheel of he's like pulled over by another submarine and he's at the wheel of the submarine and he's like, officer, what did I do? And you're like, you submarine drunk.
Yeah. Don't sub drunk. He goes, officer, there's nothing in the book that says that I can't drive a submersible drunk. He's like, damn it, he's right.
Yeah.
We haven't thought of that yet. I wonder if that's actually a law.
It has to be.
Maybe now.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's with any, you got to get your license. Well,
yeah.
if you're going to pilot any
Also,
of
I don't want to
these
say that any of these people were being irresponsible. I'm not like trying to slander anybody that way. I'm just saying that what I said is true.
You're just saying that they were using $1 million cranes drunk.
So September 30th, 1995, Cameron stepped off the kill dish and immediately got on a plane to promote Strange Days, which is what Catherine Bigelow, his wife before Linda Hamilton, she directed that movie. He wrote the script for that. So he did that for a month and was like, fuck, I'm so tired. Then he had to go promote Strange Days and be like, I was drawn into the story. I mean, what was the moment I wanted to make this movie? Like that, the worst questions ever. I thought that was interesting. But then after that, there was only Titanic. After that interview, he would spend the next 3 years of his life making the Titanic movie.
The pre-production of Titanic. Impressed with the footage of the wreck, Fox allowed further development of the movie, tasking Cameron to estimate a budget and start hiring a team, which included Ray Sancini, production designer Pete Lamont, and physical effects supervisor Tommy Fisher. The most notable hire was producer John Landau, who would go on to produce the Avatar movies with Cameron.
So Landau was the executive vice president of feature production at Fox, and at the Strange Days premiere, he either met Cameron, he met Cameron and was like, yeah, I'm thinking about getting back into producing. And Cameron's like, oh yeah, I'll let you know about that. And then he became a producer on, Titanic, obviously. And he was the guy that basically figured out everything with Cameron, where there's some producers who are like sort of the middlemen between the money, the executives and whatever. But this guy, he was there with Cameron going like, well, how do we film the boat? Like, should we build a big thing? What the fuck do we do? And they considered making like pieces of the set. So they would make the bow, the poop deck, the starboard side, whatever. the port side. The port's on the right and the starboard's on the left.
Okay.
Because what they did is when they saw the iceberg, they turned. They go hard over starboard side, whatever. And then when they started grinding against it, they go, if we just keep turning left, we're going to keep scraping against this thing. So Murdoch, he goes hard over port side, and then they turn right so that the back of the ship wouldn't touch the iceberg.
Yeah.
Which is very smart. But they also considered getting a container ship that was analogous to the size of, or similar to the size of the Titanic, and like dressing it, like something similar to what you said earlier about all the old Titanic movies. It's like, imagine like with I remember in Suicide Squad, right? There's a scene where they're driving Joker's Lamborghini, but a Lamborghini costs money, and they want to spend the least amount of money as possible. So what they do is they take like a Toyota Camry, and then they call it like a kit, where they get basically the facade of a Lamborghini and just put it over the car, right? And that's something similar they would have done with like a container ship and just made it look like the Titanic. And they also considered filming in Australia, Czechoslovakia, Sweden, Poland, Caribbean. And they were like, we might build this, like we might just rebuild the Titanic and put it on the water. And then James Cameron goes, well, how many times can we sink it? And they go, once. And he goes, well, what if I want 2 takes? Like
Yeah. What if?
And they had art departments building shit, like making chairs and stuff, and they were not knowing where they were going to send the stuff yet, right? And then John Landau went to Digital Domain, which is the company that James Cameron helped start with Stan Winston and a couple other fellows that we talked about in the filmography episode we did. And they go to John Landau and they go, dude, we did it. And he goes, we did what? And he goes, we cracked the water physics of, the white water coming off the boat. Because they were doing water physics on the Abyss, right? And then they finally got it. We're like, we can convincingly do water, where you can just film the boat and we can put water in and it'll look convincing. And it still does to a certain extent. And John Landau goes, great, that means we can just build a fucking thing and not have it. We don't need to have it in the water anymore. We can just build it on land and landlock it and then just insert the water later. So that was like sort of the key that made them go, all right, we can just build what they ended up building, which was, basically the right half of the ship. That was, it was a 1-to-1 scale, but lengthwise it was a little bit shorter. Where imagine they were going to make a loaf of bread. They were recreating a loaf of bread. They just cut out pieces like 5, 8. The slices 5, 8, 11, and 24.
Yeah.
So it was 10% shorter than the actual Titanic, just to save a little bit of money. And so they decided to build it in Mexico because Cameron's like, it's still close to the production centers in Los Angeles, where it's not, the cost of labor will be, cheaper, right? But it won't be too far away. Let's say where we have to like send everything over by boat, we could just drive down right to the set. So they ended up going to Mexico, I think it was the province of Baja, Baja, and it was outside of this town, Rosarito, Mexico. And it was right on the water, and they bought this land. It was just this dirt patch, and they bought like 40 acres and just built a giant set. But also, they had to buy the land. Fox had to buy the land to do it. So they're like, well, this is originally going to be like a temporary thing. But then they just said, all right, screw it. Why don't we just make this a permanent studio?
Yeah, they use it still, I'm pretty sure.
They used it for Master and Commander, Far Side of the World. A lot of boats, a lot of water stuff. All is Lost with Robert Redford.
It's cool too because when it comes to the boat stuff, when they're filming, when the boat's supposed to be moving, that section they know the wind pattern is consistent, so they know basically which way to point the boat when they build the boat in the water. They point it in a certain direction, so when they have the smoke, they don't have to control it. All they have to do is just put the smoke out, and the wind. The natural wind pattern takes care of it.
Yeah, it like pushes it back so it looks like the boat's moving.
That's like, when I heard that, I was thinking, that's like one of the things. I would have built it in the wrong direction. I'd have been like,
well, they did build it in the wrong direction in another sense. Like, not on purpose. Mm-hmm. We'll get to it. What else we got next?
In 1994, before Cameron filmed The Wreck, Cameron estimated the budget would be $80 million. After 2 years and 2 script passes later, in April 1996, he put forward an estimate of $125 million, a number that excluded the Baja Studio construction budget. Fox executive Steve Chernin told Cameron to get the budget down to $110 million, so Cameron cut 80 VFX shots.
So Chernin, is talking with him, And he goes, we don't have any summer 97 releases. He goes, we don't have any summer movies for 97. So like that would be a good thing for Titanic. And Cameron's like, well, what about December? And they're like, nah, we don't. We'll move forward on the movie if you do it in for summer. And they go, how when do you need to start production for it to release July 4th? And he goes, 2 months ago. And at that point, he was like, am I going to say no to making the movie? I've been working on this movie for 2 years for free. I might as well fucking just make the movie. I don't care. I'll fucking release it in the summer,
Yeah.
So he went out and said, all right, I'll do it. And he had trouble cutting the budget to $110 million. So what he did is he goes, I'm going to give back my salary for directing the movie, and I'll just keep the back end. And that lowered the budget of the movie, and the movie was greenlit on May 28th, 1996. And it was greenlit with the intention that it would release in the summer of 97. Okay? Remember that later. And but Fox goes, hey, we want a finance partner. Meaning like what?
I wanted to say, remember what? Like you said, remember that later. I'm like, remember what?
Like, oh yeah, will you remember what I told you to remember? Yeah, something about like the Alamo. Yeah. So Fox goes, we want to take some of the risk out, so we want a finance partner where, like, let's say they'll put in, fucking like $100 million, and Paramount will put in 60, right? And James Cameron's like, fine, do whatever you want, I don't give a shit, right? So Fox would end up keeping the worldwide, like the international shit, the international release, and then whatever studio they'd partner with would get the domestic release. So they were originally going to go to Universal because Cameron cozied up with Universal when Fox originally balked at the idea. Like they were like, hey, he was like, I want to make the Titanic, and Fox was like, I don't know about this. So Cameron was like, all right, screw you, I'm going to go to talk to Universal about it. It's just sort of like to get negotiation leverage with Fox. And also, but the problem was when they were going to go to Universal had a movie called Dante's Peak coming out, which starred Linda Hamilton and was produced by Gail Ann Hurd, who was Cameron's ex-wife. And his current wife was acting in the movie. Oh, this guy.
Yeah, this guy.
So, but the problem was Fox had that Dante's Peak is a volcano disaster movie. But the problem is Fox also had a volcano disaster movie. You'll never guess the title. It was called Volcano. And that starred, I think, Morgan Freeman, or was that Deep Impact I'm thinking of? Anyway, but they were competing for each other. Because that happens all the time where like a guy will pitch a movie to the studio and the studio goes, no, actually. And then the guy leaves and they go, well, actually, we can make our own thing without him. So then the idea goes to two studios at the same time and then they race to see whatever. And what happened was Universal like fast-tracked the production of Dante's Peak and just fucking released it before Volcano and ended up making more money than Volcano. So Fox was like, fuck you, we're not going to make you a partner on this movie. Go fuck yourself. And so they went to Paramount, who ended up getting the domestic distribution rights. And I think they put in like, they capped their investment at $60 million, which ended up being a very smart investment because obviously the budget went 2 times higher than it was supposed to, or $80 million higher than it was supposed to be. And they were bragging around Hollywood at the time. Like, yeah, thank God we capped that investment, you know what I'm talking about, that kind of thing. But they also get to pick the release date of the movie, which would be a problem later.
In October 1995, Cameron hired casting director Molly Lynn after working together on Terminator 2 and True Lies. After looking over hundreds of actors, she returned to Cameron with the name Kate Winslet.
Molly Lynn, she discovered Edward Furlong for Terminator 2. We talked about that in our James Cameron episode where she was, in the middle of casting and then this punk little kid was like, watch it, lady. And she was like, whoa, 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 say that again.
Say that again.
That kind of thing.
Disrespect me again.
Yes. So
Sorry.
What was that?
It was my phone, sorry.
Danny was just playing fucking YouTube videos on his phone. Is that what you've been doing when I talk during this podcast?
Yeah.
You just like micro-watch YouTube videos?
I scroll a little bit.
You've been looking at 25 Titanic facts you didn't know.
Yeah.
So Cameron was apprehensive about casting Kate Winslet because she was known as Corset Kate because she was doing all these period dramas recently. She did Sense and Sensibility. She did Jude the Obscure, and she was in Kenneth Branagh's Hamlet. So he's like, he goes, I don't want to think that this is lazy casting. Like, he wasn't really enthusiastic about the suggestion that Molly Lynn gave him. And she's like, just fucking go in and meet her. She's great. Just go in and meet her and just watch her. And he goes, all right. So he meets with her, and he's like, yeah, whatever. And then he goes, hey, do the scene. And she does it and with an American accent because she's British. And he goes, that was good. He goes, do it without the accent. Just don't worry about that for now. And she goes, okay. And then she does it with, with her regular accent when she's not thinking about it. And she does the scene. He's like, holy shit. Mm-hmm. And he goes, okay, I'm going to put her in my pocket. I'm not going to give her the role now, but let's fucking. And then the other suggestion that she made, of course, for Jack was Leo. And Cameron, he goes, I saw him in Gilbert Grape, where he played like a special needs guy. In the book, it was written in the 90s, so they don't say special needs, they say another word.
Yeah.
And he goes, and he was pretty good in that, but like this isn't really that kind of role. I don't know. And so they go, just fucking meet him. And he goes, all right, fine. So he has a meeting with him. And when he gets to Lightstorm, Leo's already there. Lightstorm, his production company offices. Leo's already there. And he looks around and all the female workers at Lightstorm are in the meeting. He's like, what the fuck are they doing? Why are they here? And then Leo walks in. They're all like, oh, hi, Leo. They all wanted to meet Leo.
Yeah.
And he goes, Leo walked in and charmed the room, dude. He even had Cameron like twirling in his hair. Like, really? Oh my God. And he goes, oh, this kid's great. Let's see what he can do. So a couple days later, he schedules, him and Leo and Kate to meet and do a scene together. So then, Leo and Kate meet each other and he goes, all right, let's read this scene really quick. And Leo goes, wait, we're going to read? And he goes, he thought it was just another meeting. And he goes, yeah, we're going to read. And Leo goes, I don't read. And Cameron walks up to him and sticks out his hand. He goes, well, thanks for coming. I'll good luck and whatever. And he goes, what are you talking about? He goes, you're not going to, offer me the role if I don't read? And he goes, no, why would I consider you? You're going to film this movie for, let's say, 5 months. Then after that, I'm going to spend 1.5 years, 2 years editing this goddamn movie while you're out doing 5 other things. I'm not going to screw this up just because you didn't want to read. Mm-hmm. And Leo's like, this is fucking bullshit, dude. And he's like, fine, I'll do it. And Cameron describes him like literally dragging his feet with the script, being like not wanting to do it at all. And then Cameron calls action. He just fucking turned into Jack.
Just becomes
lasered in, dude. And he was like, all right, I got to give him the role. So after that meeting, he calls Kate Winslet up and goes, also, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So like a couple in between him talking to Kate and Leo, he's in his like a Humvee somewhere, like in Mexico. And he gets a call from Kate and she goes, hey man, what are you doing? And he goes, oh, I'm just looking at other actors. I'm on this way to this audition. And she goes, what are you talking about? What the fuck you mean? He goes, what? And she goes, you don't understand that I'm going to be Rose yet? Like, how do you not get that?
Yeah, he would.
And he goes, the fact that like she had that initiative to be like, what the fuck are you talking about? Obviously I'm Rose. He's like, that's the kind of thing we needed on this movie. So I decided then I was going to cast her. And then after that meeting with Leo and the reading that they did together, he called Kate upstairs, like, you got the part. And she also said right before they left and went upstairs, she goes, even if you don't hire me, you better hire Leo.
Oh, that's cool. That's nice.
And then her and Leo became best friends. Mm. So Leo, he wanted Leo now. And now the tables have turned. So he wants Leo. And Leo's like, yeah, I don't know if I really want the role. Because Leo saw himself as wanting to be like an actor's actor. He wanted to do like these hard roles. He wanted a challenge, right? He didn't see a challenge in Jack. Because Jack was just like sort of a normal guy. And he goes, and Cameron tells him, and he goes, listen, man, like the only reason you don't think this is a challenge is because you don't see the challenge that you have ahead of you. And he goes, if you look at all the roles you've done, every single one of them, you use a crutch. Like whether it's like if you're using a prop or eating in a scene, that just makes the scene easier for you, right? But if you look at guys that you're trying to be like fucking Jimmy Stewart or Gary Cooper or Clark Gable or Cary Grant, those guys didn't need a crush. They didn't need some kind of ailment or like twitch to get their, character across. They just fucking stood there and were good enough to just do the character while doing nothing. Yeah. And that's the problem. That's the challenge that you're going to have on this movie. Jack doesn't have an ailment like that. He's a normal guy. Jack is a guy who can walk up and shake somebody's hand and Xerox their soul. And you have to pull that off without a crutch. And then Leo was like, holy God damn it, you're right. A lot of people saying, God damn it, you're right.
Yeah, God damn it, you're right, Mr. Cameron.
It's definitely me not putting words in your mouth.
There's a lot of, it's funny that it seems like there's a lot of this going around in this whole film where people are like, I don't really know. I don't really want to be a part of this. And then obviously it was like one of the best decisions they could have ever made, made in their lives. Yeah. But I mean, even with we can get into this, but with My Heart Will Go On, which is one of the most legendary songs made for this, Celine Dion didn't even want to sing it.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Well, dude, nobody. There's so many things in this movie like even the opposite, where everybody was like, "Yeah, we definitely need it," and then it didn't work, and they cut it out. Right? We'll get to that. We'll get the Celine Dion thing. We'll get to. But I forgot about that part that she didn't want to do it. So you reminded me of that, which is good.
You're welcome.
Shut up. But the studio didn't really want Leo, because I remember when we talked about in our, I think it was the Scorsese episode, we talked about how Leo didn't become a star until Titanic, where Romeo and Juliet and Titanic, let's say, where he was sort of like that kid Lucas Hedges who was in Manchester by the Sea and a lot of other Oscar-y type movies that the a general big audience wouldn't be exposed to, but he was very well known in the industry as a very good young actor. Leo was the same thing before Titanic, right? But he wasn't like a box office draw. He wasn't a star. He was an actor, right? And then the studio's like, oh, we don't want Leo. We really don't want him. And then Romeo and Juliet came out, and it was sort of like a small hit. And then he got really popular. And then the studio was like, we fucking love Leo. What do you mean?
We never said no.
Yeah, that was October 96, Romeo and Juliet came out. Which is ironic because Romeo and Juliet is how he pitched Titanic to the studio.
Did we say he was a fool? And did you? What's that thing where he's like?
No, we didn't call him a weak, spineless fool. We called him sweet, stylish, cool. Yeah. That's a deep cut iCarly reference for anybody watching. Also, most of our audience is like 35 to 45.
Wow. Okay, so they might not get the iCarly references, would they?
I don't know.
Doesn't
Let us know if you understood that reference. If you have kids or something. What else we got? Billy Crudup. You know who that is? He played Dr. Manhattan in Watchmen, the movie. He was also the Flash's dad in Justice League, but not the Flash movie. He's also in the morning show. He's a great actor. They offered him the role of Jack.
Oh, wow.
Like straight up fucking offered it to him. And he said, I don't want to be a movie star. I want to be an actor, which is why I'm going to go star in the Flash and Justice, whatever. No, he didn't star in the Flash. He started Justice League. He's great. I'm not besmirching his name or anything. They also, Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise were also considered. Well, they weren't considered. Like James Cameron was going, yeah, Brad Pitt. It was just when you're making a movie, there's suits who are like, how about this guy, huh? Right? Tom Cruise's agent contacted Cameron and was like, hey, how about Tom Cruise? And he did not return his call. Chris O'Donnell and Matthew McConaughey were considered for Jack. Do you know who Chris O'Donnell is? Yeah.
I think so.
He was Robin in Batman and Robin.
Oh, okay.
And then Matthew McConaughey, of course, Interstellar. We know him.
Yeah, that's one I could see working.
Matthew McConaughey was offered Cal after they cast Leo, and Cameron offered McConaughey the role of Cal that went to Billy Zane. I think he could have. I think he could have pulled that off, but I like Billy Zane way too much as Cal. Billy Zane is so fucking good in this movie. There's my favorite line of the whole movie that I remembered it since I was like 4, is when Lovejoy goes, yeah, we can't find Rose anywhere. And Cal, he goes, this is absurd. He goes, how many places? There's a boat. There's only so many places she can be. He goes, Lovejoy, find her. It's like, it's so fucking, he's so fucking good. And like every line is like perfectly like,
yeah, he's really good.
Yes. But Matthew McConaughey said no. He rejected the role of Cal because he wanted to go star in Amistad, Steven Spielberg's movie. That's a great movie by Steven Spielberg where it's, it was, let's say 1830. I don't know exactly when it was. It was a true story. There was a slave ship that like rebelled against the guys running the ship, and it showed up on shore, and legally they're like, we don't know what to do with these slaves. And it wasn't abolishing slavery trial. It was more of just like, let's try to get these guys free trial. And John Quincy Adams was their lawyer. He was played by Anthony Hopkins. In the last 20 minutes of that movie, like it was like they've rewarded themselves for making a 2-hour good movie that they added 20 minutes of just Anthony Hopkins doing a ton of monologues at the end. There's one scene where he just goes on like a 10-minute monologue and he's like, we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men and women created, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but it's also great. Like it's not bad. You know what I mean? That's a great movie. You should watch that. What else? Casting Molly Brown. Molly Brown played by Kathy Bates. Do you recognize that character? Molly Brown's the one who gives him the tuxedo.
Oh yeah,
the unsinkable Molly Brown. Who goes in the shit, and she's you talked about her in the Cameron episode where you talked about how the guy who was on the lifeboat with Molly Brown was like, out of all the lifeboats I get put in with Molly Brown. I think you told me that last time, so you know who she is. Cameron offered that role, Molly Brown, to Linda Hamilton when they were on the Keldish, like the night he proposed to her. And he goes, will you marry me? And she says, yes, I'll marry you. And he goes, will you play Molly Brown? She's like, no. And they can
Clearly not the right role for me. I mean,
yeah. And he goes, well, my wife or Molly Brown? And he goes, Molly Brown. He's like, oh, thank God. They considered, before Kathy Bates, they considered Reba McEntire. Do you know who that is?
Yeah.
Remember the show Reba? A single mom who works too hard, who loves her kids and never stops.
Dude, we're gonna get copyright.
With gentle hands and a heart of a fighter.
I'm a survivor.
The 35 and 45-year-olds will definitely know that one, dude. What else we got here?
You're gonna see like a dip in like viewership, right?
That's the straight drop. But Kathy Bates ended up getting the role, of course. For Brock Lovett, Bill Paxton's role, Mally Flynn approached Sean Connery and Gene Hackman, but they didn't end up getting them for it. They originally pictured this guy as older, and it was like right before they were filming. They still didn't have a guy, so James Cameron just goes, "All right, Bill Paxton, my best friend, will you do this movie?" And he goes, "Sure." And Bill Paxton was hot off of Twisters and Apollo 13, so he was sort of his own leading man now. Whereas like when he was in Aliens and shit, he was just like a regular actor / Cameron's friend. You know what I mean? But I just imagine Sean Connery as Brock Lovett, where he's like, "I was saving this cigar for when I found the diamond." And then he throws. But also, I liked it because in the movie, Brock Lovett and the granddaughter have like a romance sort of thing like brewing. They don't kiss, but they give each other looks, and you know they're down.
Yeah.
But I just imagine that with her and Sean Connery. Where he's like, you know, sometimes with women, you give them the last word and they want the last word and they're not happy with the last word. So you just give them a little smack. You ever see that video?
Yeah.
Gene Hackman, Lewis Abernathy, the guy who with the like, it looks like the Watchman shirt with the happy face with the bullet hole in it. The big guy with the glasses and the beard. Who's like, this is how the Titanic sank, and this is it's smack down, boom, boom, boom.
Oh,
that guy.
yeah.
He was just
like
James Cameron's friend who was like a scientist. Yeah, he was. Yeah, he was just James Cameron's friend who was like a scientist who was on the kill dish helping them.
That sucked, lady.
Yeah. That really sucked. That's the lead scene, right? So James Cameron's like, hey, I want you to be in the movie, and he's like, okay, I'm not an actor, and he goes, don't worry about it, you got it. You're gonna look great. And he's like, all right, fine, because he goes, if you want to cast me and fuck up your movie, then go ahead, that kind of thing. So he took 2 weeks of acting lessons and then flew to Nova Scotia and Halifax where they were shooting. Gloria Stewart, who plays Old Rose, she retired from acting in 1939. She was in a movie called Old Dark Horse, but the movie she was most known for was The Invisible Man, where she starred opposite Claude Rains. I forget what that movie was about.
Wait, what?
I forget what The Invisible Man was about.
You're an idiot. Isn't there like a new Invisible?
In 2021, 2020, I forget. It was all right. But she retired from acting, and then
she is so good in this. She's
pretty good.
I mean, obviously it's different, but this time when she first sees her like naked picture, it goes to her eyes, and I'm just like, that's so good. I don't know why, just like the eye reaction that she has, I just like I made me tear up.
Yeah,
I was like, Jesus.
Well, also since you know the story and seeing that must be such a poignant moment where she's like, oh my God, like seeing that. But also she was pissed because she was like, this is my big return to the screen, and Cameron's like, we have to make you look even old, like. We have to make you look like crap.
Yeah,
because you're supposed to be 100 years old. So she's like, all these people are going to see the movie and think I got so old. Also, she ended up living to being 100 anyway.
Wow.
She died in 2010. She was born in 1910. She pulled the Jimmy Carter.
That's nuts.
So, and then also Cameron researching for the role of Rose, he wanted to talk. There was no survivors left. Eva Hart was alive. I don't know why he may have not talked to her. I'm sure he maybe reached out to her. She was like the one survivor left of the Titanic around that time who was conscious when it happened and actually remembers it, because a lot of them were just kids who didn't really know. But she was like sort of cognizant enough where there's a clip of her on YouTube. It's like 20 minutes and she just describes, her point of view on things. And she's like such a great speaker. She died in February 1997, so she didn't get to see the movie. But Cameron goes, I bet it would have been dramatic for her. But he still wanted to get, what it felt like to know somebody or to be somebody who was like 102, whatever, for the character of Rose. So we met this lady, Beatrice Wood, who was an artist. and she was a, what do they call them? The pottery lady. What do they call people who make pottery?
Pottist? I don't know.
But yeah, she did pottery and stuff, and she had this great life, and she was an artist. And Cameron met with her a few times to sort of, get a good gauge for how Rose would act and stuff like that in her old age, which is also pretty interesting.
The production of Titanic. Filming began in Halifax, Nova Scotia in July 1996 aboard the Keldysh, where they would shoot the present-day portion of the movie. Production immediately fell behind schedule due to weather problems.
So the original cinematographer for the Titanic was a guy named Caleb Deschanel. He was a cinematographer on like The Natural and maybe Amadeus, I think. He's been nominated for 6 Oscars. He's never won. But also his daughter is Zoe Deschanel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just throwing that out there. And so, but when they were filming, because Cameron liked his work in The Natural. And he goes, I want Titanic to look like The Natural. But then when they were working, obviously Cameron's a very hands-on director. We talked about how on the set of Aliens, he was working with a British crew, and Cameron would just like take a light and move it, right? Like before they did, and they were like, this motherfucker. But
this bloody,
yeah, right.
This bloody lot.
All right, we get it.
I'm sorry,
we get it. It's okay. My sister-in-law is British. We can make fun of him. So, but they saw it as a sign of disrespect that he was moving their shit. But he was like, I didn't think of that. I was just trying to get because how I work. And so he's very hands-on as a cinematographer. There's a lot of cinematographers who are used to working with directors that have come from the theater, and a lot of the times, directors who come to the theater tend to just work with the actors, and then they go, yeah, whatever you want, DP. Like, they're just whatever, who cares? And so the DPs, Caleb Deschanel was used to having sort of full control over like where the camera's put and how it's lit. But Cameron was like, no, put it over here. Just make it a little bit more, of a, lower angle, and then we'll add another kicker light. And Deschanel was like, what am I even doing here? I thought I was the cinematographer. And Cameron's like, dude, shut up. I'm making these conversations up, by the way. And after they were done filming the present day stuff, like the last night before they left, Cameron goes to John Landau and goes, oh yeah, tell Caleb that he's fired before we leave too.
Dang.
And he fired him. And then he hired Russell Carpenter, who was the cinematographer on Terminator 2 and True Lies.
Were they just not getting along, or
yeah, it was like, imagine if you were the cinematographer and you saw me as like intruding on your craft.
Yeah.
Similar. But also at the same time, from Cameron's perspective, I'm viewing you as a cinematographer who won't let me fucking get what I want in the shot. Let's say it like that, right? So we have both of their perspectives in the. It wasn't like you son of a bitch. It was sort of like, this isn't working. Fire him. Anyway, so Cameron casted the Anatoly Segalovich as himself. He hired all the Russian guys as himself. Louis Abernathy, of course, played not himself, but a version of himself. He was called Louis, but he wasn't Louis Abernathy. And also, we talked about this on the last podcast that we did for James Cameron. And if you haven't heard this, Danny hadn't heard this story until the podcast. So if you want to see his reaction, go to the Titanic section and watch that. And if you don't know what the chowder incident is that occurred on August 8th, 1996, which was their last day of filming the present day stuff, if you haven't heard about this, I envy you. And I wish that I hadn't told Danny so I could tell him again on this podcast. So basically, August 8th, 1996, their last day of shooting, they're getting a shot of Gloria Stewart. And they have a stand-in for Stewart because she doesn't have to sit there for like 2 hours while they light and whatever. So they have a stand-in. And all the guys looking through the camera, and all of a sudden he sees the stand-in's eyes just roll back to her head and she passes out. And they're like, what the hell? And Cameron's like, what's going on? They're trying to wake her up. And then all of a sudden Cameron's like looking at his hands like, what the hell is going on? It's like that scene in Man of Steel where he discovers his X-ray vision. He's like, what the fuck is going on? And so he's like, maybe like the first thing he thinks is, oh my God, we all ate that mussel chowder. Maybe that was bad. I'm getting like some kind of poisoning. I got to go to the bathroom and throw this up. So he goes in the bathroom and like jabs his finger down his throat, trying to throw up. And he like sort of does, sort of doesn't. But his blood vessels pop, so his eyes are all red. He looks like the Terminator, and he comes running out, and all the crew's gone. He goes, it was like an episode of the Twilight Zone. There's 90 people in the room, and all of a sudden they're all gone. And he goes, I go outside, and I see all the, a few of the guys on the set, the crew members were splitting the crew into the good crew and the bad crew. The bad crew being the ones who were freaking out from whatever poisoning they were getting from the food, and the ones who were orchestrating everybody together who didn't eat the chowder, right? And 90% of the crew was the bad crew. It was like 75 people, right?
Just all throwing
And,
up.
Yeah, so they're like, there's just like vans and vans of people. Like, we got to go to the hospital. Like, this is getting crazy. Bill Paxton also ate a couple. Bill Paxton walks over, and Jim's like, "Did you fucking eat the chowder?" And he goes, "Yeah, I had like a bowl or two." Why? He's like, "Get in the goddamn van."
Yeah, go.
And so they all get. It's like 75 people getting to the van, and they're in Halifax. They're in Canada, and they just go to this little hospital that is, like a couple. It's not like a hospital. It's like a little hospital. And all of a sudden, these vans of people show up, and 75 crazy people just show up, start going like, "Yahoo!"
They're
Like
all just tripping.
going nuts, doing the conga line. They're like, they put them in rooms, and the people kept coming out of their rooms and like dancing and shit. Like, get back in your room, goddammit. And there's one point where Cameron's like sitting on the cot, just like freaking out, and he sees the a production, like assistant director, production assistant, Christy. Her name was Christy, and she's talking to the doctor, going, "Yes, Donald, whatever, and this Carrie, this lady," just giving him all the names, so they can account for somebody, so somebody doesn't run into the woods and they don't not notice. And then Cameron just looks at her, and he takes out his walkie-talkie, and he goes, "Hey, Kirsty, get back to me on the radio, over." And then she goes, and she is looking right at him. They're right across the room, like you're sitting on over here, and I'm here, 5 feet away from each other. And she looks him right in the eye and goes, "Yeah, what's up, Jim?" And he goes, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Yeah, I'm just giving the list of all the names to the doctors so everybody's accounted for and stuff like that." And he goes, "Don't you realize you're talking to me under the walkie-talkie? I'm sitting right here. You're just as fucked up as we are." And she just like breaks her brain, and she takes a pen and stabs him in the face.
Dude.
Stabs him in the cheek. And then she's like, they grab her like she's like the men in white coats are taking her, and she's like, "You motherfuckers, get off of me!" And they like take her away, and Cameron's holding his bleeding face, laughing. He's like, like the Joker.
Yeah.
And they're like, "What the?" So then the doctors start giving everybody charcoal. So they throw it all up. So like they get whatever out of their system. And Bill Paxton's like, "Jim, man, this is crazy. Like, let's just fucking go back to our trailer, and we'll just pound some brewskis and sleep this thing off." So that's what they did. They just went back got hammered. And then they woke up the next morning and goes, "That was crazy." The police got involved. They did a toxicology report, and it turned out it wasn't food poisoning or seafood poisoning. Somebody took a pound of PCP,
dude,
and put it in the chowder. PCP is like, I don't know if it's a psychedelic, but it's extremely psychoactive drug. It's like analogous to LSD and meth, let's say.
I feel like it is like a combination of the two.
It's probably the best
way
to describe it. Yeah, that's just what I've heard.
It's so fun. That's just what I've read.
So, and they're like, "Who the hell did this? Like, why was somebody?" And also, there's children on the set. There was a little girl who got
crazy.
Who got contaminated. Gloria Stewart. I mean, she's 86. Like, she could have died.
Did she get it?
No, she didn't. Oh. But I'm saying, if she ate it, she could have, because she's very old at that point. If she freaks out and her heart starts to whatever.
Yeah.
So the police do an investigation, and they never found who did it. There's some theories, like Jim talks about. He goes, "I've heard people say it was somebody who I fired, and they were trying to get back at me. I don't believe that." He goes, "What we think it probably was. It was somebody who had a beef with the caterer, and of course we fired the caterer. The caterer was like a wedding caterer. Dude, it wasn't honestly, for movies. Yeah. They were kind of. That's pretty crazy."
On September 9th, 1996, Cameron arrived at the Fox Baja set outside of Rosarito, Mexico. On September 10th, he attended a ceremony with the mayor of Rosarito, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Tom Arnold, Bill Paxton. Oh, wait. Arnold Schwarzenegger is not the mayor of Rosarito. I thought you were saying... Okay, sorry.
You thought it was saying the mayor of Rosarito?
Yeah, I was like, wait,
yeah, that was his first introduction to politics. That was before he became governor. He was like, "I got to do this trial run in Rosarito."
Okay. Tom Arnold, Bill Paxton, and the governor of Baja. Cruz had 100 days to build the 40-acre facility that sported 5 sound stages, the world's largest outdoor filming tank, the world's largest indoor filming tank, and the world's tallest sound stage.
Everything they built for this movie was like the world's tallest or biggest or longest, whatever, biggest. But the Baja set or the Baja set, I think it's Baja. You think it's Baja.
Baja Blast.
We'll put a poll.
Taco Bell.
Yeah. Oh, you're fucking. You might be right. Yeah. It's. I hate that you might be right, and your source for being right might be Taco Bell.
Yeah, exactly.
That makes me sad. Anyway, so it was the first movie set built around that area. I think maybe in Mexico since 1930. And they said it was built like a gold rush town. All of a sudden, all these people came in, and they just poured. It was like a 20 or 30 or $40 million budget for
Yeah.
the studio. So like, Titanic cost $120 million at first. Obviously, it went up and up later. That was the original production budget, but that number excluded the 20 to 40 million that it cost to build this set, to build a studio. They're basically building a studio.
But at the end, like the studio still is kind of an investment towards other movies too. At the same time, like you can't.
Yeah, of
just
course.
say
Like I'm not going to say that. But but it was built for this movie. But also, because I was reading about how this was done, and I couldn't picture, like, they're saying like, oh, it was built this way and there was this here and this here, but it was hard to visualize. And then I was reading this book, it's James Cameron's Titanic. If you're watching, I'm pointing at it right now. It's like one of those big, thin picture books, right? But there's text in it. And that was a really good book, and because it had a lot of production stills, and they have this picture of like an aerial shot of the set, and it's just a giant dirt patch for miles and miles, and then right in the middle you just see the Titanic by the water, and then like 10 warehouses and like all these, and what they did is that the Titanic, I mentioned how there was slices cut out of it, and it's 10% shorter, but it's a 1-to-1 scale, and what they did is they landlocked it, so let's say there's the ocean, then there's a beach and dirt, and then there's like a tank that they built, and then they built the Titanic ship on like in the tank.
Yeah.
Right. So the water doesn't touch it. But then later, when they had to film the sinking stuff, they put water in the tank. But when they were on the deck at the top and they were shooting in the horizon, let's say Kate Winslet and Leo were like walking on the starboard side of the ship, which is the left side, because I did my damn ass research.
Which is the only side that they had.
Well, they had on the top of it, they had every side, like they had the full deck. Okay. Mm-hmm. But in terms of the hull, they only had the left side and maybe some of the hull on the left side, but not the whole starboard side on the left side, right? Mm-hmm. And then they had the full poop deck as well. I got it in. I finally said poop deck.
You said it twice already.
Well, you said it the first time. What was I saying? But I was reading and they're like, so they tilted the set. I'm like, what do you mean they tilted the set? Like the whole thing? Is it parts of it? And the poop deck scene, they tilted because they built another version of that separately on another part of the studio, where it was like, let's say a 100-foot chunk of the ship that they built, and they were able to turn it 90 degrees. And we'll get to them filming that, which is crazy. But then I saw pictures, and it's like, no, they took the whole 775-foot set and they tilted it.
Yeah.
And then filled up the water tank so that people can actually jump off the ship into the water and it looks like it's sinking. And I'm like, holy shit, that's insane. Mm-hmm. And you'll like this. Of course, it wasn't only because James Cameron talked about, or somebody on the visual effects angle, I saw in a commentary somewhere, they were talking about all the different methods they use for the visual effects, where it was never they were just using one thing. Where James Cameron told him, he goes, Jim, why are we doing so many different things? Why don't we just stick to this if it works, right? So if they use the ship and then just green screen the background, why don't they do that for everything? And James Cameron says, well, if you do the same trick over and over again, the audience is going to figure out how it works. Mm-hmm. So if we do, the ship with green screen once, and then the next shot when we show the ship, we do the miniature with, with a composite of Leo and Kate on a green screen, people see differently. If we do a miniature of the boiler room, and with like a green screen in the background, and then we do a miniature as the background, and then like something CGI in the you know what I mean? Yeah. So they would always change it up. So they were building a lot of miniatures, different miniatures. That's like some were like the size of a yacht, some were like the size of this room. The one that was the size of this wreck was probably just went on the ceiling, and they put actually the miniature of the wreck when they were filming all the submersible stuff. That wasn't on the ground. They put that on the ceiling because it was like, oh, well, we can hang a camera from the ceiling, or we can just point the camera up and put it on wheels. So it was much easier.
That's smart.
But a lot of the parts of the miniatures that they built of the Titanic were built in the same hangars where parts of Howard Hughes' Spruce Goose was built,
really? That's
which we talked about in our Scorsese episode.
Wow.
So there's sort of a parallel where he was building the Spruce Goose, and everybody's like, this is so big and gigantic, this is going to be a disaster. This will never fly. This will never be a good movie, Howard Hughes. And then, of course, the same thing happened with James Cameron, where everybody was saying that it was just a complete disaster. Oh, Titanic sinks again, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And then it became the greatest movie of all time.
Well, also it happened with the Titanic, but opposite. Everyone was like, this thing's never going down.
Yeah. And then the same thing happens with this podcast. Everybody said it was going to be good, and we blew it. What else? Upside down wreck, compositing of images, and as like I mentioned with the boiler room, right? You watch it, and for 1997, it's like there's nothing. I'm not watching it going like, oh, let me see what the problem is, right? But I'm watching it, and I'm not getting. There's no edges I'm getting caught on. Like I'm not like that. They fucked up that. Like it happens like every once in a while because it's 1997. Like the boiler room, or the engine room, right? Where those fucking giant pieces of metal, boom, 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 and I'm like, how did they do that? So what they did is they found a ship that had the same engine as the Titanic, right? But it was like a third of the scale. So what they did is they just filmed it as a miniature. And then they planned like, okay, we're going to film it this way and this is what the composition is. And then later they took a green screen and then hired, an actor to stand on a catwalk. And then they would insert him into the shot of the miniature. There's all this, there's like layers and layers of composites. So like there's one scene with the boiler room where it pans down, and they had a motion controlled camera where they can get the same motion every time. So they go into the engine room set, and they film like a certain shot of the camera panning, like booming left or was it dollying left. I don't want to use the incorrect camera move term because
starboard.
I know I know somebody in the comments would be like, oh, I can't believe you said pan instead of tilt or something like that. You know what I mean? And then they went on the green screen and got a guy to walk across the catwalk with the same camera move, and then he comes in and out of the frame. Then they get another guy to like stand there and pretend like he's wrenching something, and they do the same camera move. The guy's walking in the background, same camera move, and then they just layer it all on top of each other. It's like, holy shit, and it looks good.
Yeah.
There's none.
That's when they're like, let's stretch the legs, and they go into it the first time. And
exactly, you're exactly right. So, like, when did you watch it? How many days ago?
I watched it yesterday again, but I had watched it once more before that.
Yeah, I watched it a few times for this. Yeah, that's very like it's very a lot of this. When I watched it 2 years ago, and I was impressed with how well the effects held up.
Yeah.
And this time I'm like, yeah, it's just it's like True Lies. I still can't see. Well, now I know how they did everything. Like most of the shots in this, I could tell you how they did it because I like did so much research for it.
Does that affect how you like view it now?
Because just another level of appreciation. Where like I appreciate it as, we'll get to this later. I appreciate it on an emotional level too. Like I'm still fucking crying when I'm watching this thing, dude.
Dude, yeah. What the heck?
But
what the heck is going on? Why can't I stop crying when I watch this goddamn?
But it's funny because like I saw like people when you say you cry at Titanic, I feel like a lot of guys our age, and this is an observation I made up, that I'm making up. Yes. I feel like a lot of guys our age see this as like a chick flick, and it's not really a bro movie. But also James Cameron's a very bro director.
Yeah.
And there's a very blue collar feel to his movies. And I think for a guy who's like, oh, this is just a chick flick, I think there's so much value in this to see it as like, no, this is like the hard ass work they did. They tilt the set, they tilted the set. It's like a giant mix of all these genres where it is a chick flick. It is an action movie in some sense. It is a suspense movie. It's a historical drama. It's a costume drama. It's all these different things. It's fantastic. We're not on overall thoughts yet. We have to stop talking.
I know. Yeah.
Also, we got ahead of ourselves. Filming started September 18th. Wait, what? I just lost my spot. Oh yeah, filming started September 18th. The first thing they shot was Rose and Cal in their suite. It was either when they were just moving in and he was like, Picasso will never amount to anything. I'm definitely not a bad guy. Don't even worry about it. Marry me. Or it was when she goes out and hangs out with Jack in steerage and they have the dancing party. And then Cal flips the table and he's like, you're my wife, God damn it. Like that thing. It was either one of those two scenes. I don't know exactly which one. 2 days later, Leo arrives and his first scene was the paint me like, draw me like one of your French girls, Jack. It's his first scene. He's fucking the first scene he's seeing Kate naked.
Do you think that was on purpose? Because his reaction is.
I think there was so many moving blocks in this movie where like they only had a 2-week window to get like the sunset, which we'll talk about later. They only had a 2-week window to get the sunset shot where she's like, I'm flying, because it's like, okay, this set here is going to be here for 2 weeks until we have to deconstruct it and build it for something else. Like the shit was always changing. So you had a certain amount of time to get something, right? But Leo, so I don't think anything was like that was planned on purpose to get a reaction out of somebody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I think that would have been moving too much to, maybe trick somebody too little. But he comes in and Kate was like, I have to be naked. I don't really know him that well. And she's like, I kind of wanted to just get ahead of the embarrassment. She said this in the commentary. I wanted to get ahead of the embarrassment, so I flashed him. So what happened was she was naked, like getting makeup by the makeup people in the room, and Leo knocks on the door, and she goes, "Come in," and the makeup people are like, "What the fuck are you doing?" And he walks in, and goes, "Hamana, hamana, hamana, hamana," and he's like, "Oh fuck." And one of the things they talk about, since it was the first day of filming, is Leo was sort of like taken aback where they were filming, and there's the line in the movie where he says, she undresses and he goes, "Get on the bed, the couch."
Yeah.
And that was real. Like he actually flubbed the line. They're like, "Excellent, we got to put that in."
That's perfect.
Yeah, so that's pretty funny. But the picture that they drew, and this is the thing where the flopping the frame. We did it in our movie that I mentioned earlier. When you flop an image, it's like it's such a simple thing, and they use it so much in this movie to great effect. So, for example, Leo couldn't draw; he wasn't a good artist, right? But he had to draw the picture. So Cameron had to draw the picture of Rose. The problem is Cameron's left-handed, and Leo is drawing with his right hand in the reverse shots. So what they had to do is Cameron had to draw a mirror image of the picture, and then they would flop it in post. So it looks like his right hand drawing the picture where her head's on the left side and her feet are on the right side rather than vice versa. It's like little things like that, right?
Yeah. I don't know why that's like something my brain struggles with to understand sometimes.
They talked
how
about
that works.
Yeah, they talked about because the boarding scene, the first scene when he's like, "You can be blasé about many things, Rose, but not about the Titanic. She's truly unsinkable." And there's like there was thousands of people there that day, extras, right? That whole scene was flopped.
Yeah.
So if you look at the dock warehouse that they built in the set, they built that as like a double for like storage, but also as the dock for the boarding scene. And you see in the movie it says White Star ship lines, right? But on the set they reversed the letters. So when you look, okay, so in the movie, and in real life, the Titanic, when it was at the dock, the bow was on the left and the poop deck was on the right. Stop laughing every time I say poop deck. So, but when they built the ship, the bow was on the right and the poop deck was on the left. So they're like, we want to be true to like the time. So they made everything reversed. So all the license plate numbers were reversed, and also all the American cars became British cars because now all the steering wheels were on the on the right side rather than the left because they flipped the image. And then the White Star Line was backwards, and they didn't film it from the left. They filmed it from the right. You know what I mean? The sea was at the right, and then the land was at the left, not the sea at the left and the land at the right. And this is what we're talking about, where it gets confusing to explain when you flop an image. And Cameron talks about how it was a big brain teaser when we were filming because it was like, wait, if she was looking up in this shot with her left shoulder closer to the boat, if we flop that image in the regular shot where we don't flop it, does her right shoulder need to be next to the boat? Like, you know what I mean?
My brain would have given up.
Yeah.
Halfway through.
I would have had a mathematician on the set.
Yeah, I'm sure they.
I don't know if that translates. I would have had like Bobby Fischer, like somebody who has great spatial awareness.
Yeah.
Spatial,
I would
relation.
need someone who understands that better. Like, because even just for me, they're writing the word backwards and then it's still on the building backwards, written back.
Yeah.
It's hard for my brain to swap it around, I guess.
One of the other things about the boarding scene is another one of those tricks that they were doing, where obviously they had this giant 800-foot set that couldn't move, right? But they had to make it look like it was moving without CGI. Again, they could have made it move with CGI, but they were already doing that in another shot. Cameron wants to switch it up to throw the audience off the scent of how they're doing this. So what they did is they got like a big platform on a car, and then they put everybody standing on this car, on this platform. So they had like a guy with the camera, they had like people waving. And then what they did is they just moved the car, and they put the camera on the platform as well. So they moved the car, so everybody's moving right, but it looks like they're stationary and the ship is moving left. That's a very quick. It's like in there for like 2 seconds, but it's so convincing and it's so smart. Another thing that this movie was the first to do a lot of things, but it was also the first to do digital breath, like for cold weather.
Yeah,
because if you look on the boat, they don't really use it that much, right? But once they get to the end where the boat's sinking, and they get into the water, the digital breath is all there. So what they did is they painted the guy's face black in a non-racist way, in a practical way.
Yeah.
And then they had like these black curtains around him and then backlit it like a lot, the breath. And then he would just go and like simulate breath. And then they would film that and then basically just composite it using CG with Kate Winslet breathing or Leo breathing or anybody else. And it's very, very convincing. You never question it for a second. So another thing with the composites that I think I could notice when I watched it the first time before I did all the research for this, I was like, what's going on there? Why does this look weird? Is Cameron, the studio was like, just don't build the first class lounge set. Just figure it out. Just do something, right? So that's the only set they did. There's a first class lounge. It's like a big room. And it comes in the scene with Rose when she looks at the girl with her mom. She's like sitting there like, oh shit. Like, I hate my life. And then she looks over at the girl and the mom's like, no, you gotta sit proper. And the girl puts the napkin on, whatever. Like, so that scene they're not anywhere. The whole scene's on green screen. You can sort of tell now, but I'm sure back then you wouldn't have questioned it. Maybe. But what they did is they shot, because they couldn't build it. So they got a miniature of the first class lounge because they couldn't build the set. Cameron promised the studio he wouldn't build it. And they got a miniature and they filmed that. And then they got Kate Winslet, Frances Fisher, Molly Brown, whoever it was, sitting at the table. And then again, with the motion controlled camera, like they did in the engine room and the boiler room, is they had the shot start, left, and then they kind of went down and pushed in on her. And they filmed those actors. And then they got a lady and a guy sitting at a table behind them separately, filmed them with the same camera movement, a guy walking in the background. They did it like 20 times, all these people. And then they stacked all those composites on top of each other, so it looks like there was like 40 people in the room. And then behind that, as the background, they put the shot of the miniature, the motion control shot of the miniature they did. So they were able to get that room without building the set. And that shot's not, I don't know if that, that's probably part of the movie that's aged less good than the others. But I don't know if the shot of the girl and her mom was filmed on a physical set, but I can't tell if it wasn't. Yeah. So that shot of the girl and the mom works very well if they were doing that same method, which I maybe suspect they were. But the shot of Kate and everybody else, it still works. I'm not sitting there going, this is fucking bullshit, but I can still tell something's going on.
I feel like for me, it's just interesting that of all the things that he did build for this, why was this the one thing where they were like, don't? Well,
because there was one scene in it.
Oh, okay.
It's really the only time it appears in the movie.
Eccentric, yeah, I guess so.
And it was going to cost $450,000 to build. So they were like, and they were trying to cut costs as every moment they could. What else? Also, we talked about the tilting poop deck scene. They had a lot of trouble. Like, how do we get the camera in the air? Because the boat or the ship set is like 150 feet in the sky. So how do we do this? And they got these construction cranes. And it was called a West ball. It was basically like a camera gyro thing. And Cameron, the operator, the cinematographer, would be sitting on top of this. There's footage of like Cameron's just sitting on the end of it.
On the end of the huge crane.
Yeah, and the things, and that's how they got all the shots of the boat. Like they were able to get one giant shot of the boat and like move around. But they considered with the poop deck scene, they were like, before the cranes came into the picture, they considered filming it with blimps. Like just fucking attach the camera to the bottom of a blimp and it sort of just hovers and we'll just do it that way. I can't imagine them shooting that scene, because you've seen the footage of them shooting that scene and all there's blimps in the sky too. Yeah. Instead of cranes or whatever. Because the way they film that is they would strap everybody, because it was like, let's say it was I mentioned it earlier, like it's a 150-foot section, 150 or 100-foot section, let's say, of the poop deck. And it was built on this hinge, and they can go from 90 degrees or they can go to 180 degrees to 90 degrees. So it's just straight up and down, right? Yeah. So they were filming all the stunt people where like a lot of the actors were strapped in. The people who weren't stunt people were strapped in, and the stunt people were actually falling off the thing. And they made all the like the hard pieces of the boat set rubber. They called it a Nerf set. So all these people were falling and hitting this thing that looks real. And they talked about how if you get one guy to do a stunt 100 times, like if he does it once or twice, he won't get injured, right? But if he does it 100 times, the chances of him getting injured are almost certain at that point.
They just go up every time he does it, or if she does it. Anyone.
But the problem with doing something like this is you're doing 100 stunts at once. Because if you look in the behind the scenes, like all these people are falling, and you're like, how do they choreograph? Like what order they fall in? And everybody gets a number. And then like the assistant director just goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and when you hear your number, you just fall. You just have to... So if there's like 30 people doing stunts like that, and they do it 3 takes, that's 90 chances to get injured. Somebody's gonna get injured, and they did have injuries. They had I think it was like a broken ankle, broken rib, and a broken cheekbone. And after that, Cameron went to Digital Domain and was like, listen, this isn't cutting it. Like we got some of it, but we need you to do the rest with CG. And so Digital Domain was able to just motion capture people falling and shit. And they did it that way. But also on the poop deck scene, John Landau, the producer, he was trying to convince everybody that it was safe to go on there. So he's like, I'll have my wife and child strapped on there to like show everybody that it's safe. And then there was a cable that they needed to get the poop deck back down to like 180 degrees. And it broke first day they tried filming with it. So people were strapped into the poop deck that was straight up and down for like 3 hours. And he's like, my fucking wife and kids are up there. This looks bad. This looks really bad. So that's that. What?
No, just him being like, I put my kids on this thing and it's broken. No, there's, again, with the behind the scenes, there's some takes where you see some of the stunt people. Like there's one where one of the women, she like falls and she does like a cool backflip off the wall. And then one of the guys catches her and saves her.
Really?
I think that might have been the one where it was like less tilted. It might have not been that one.
Yeah.
But it's just like she was going hard. She just hit her knees. Like the impact that it took on her knees to just stop that.
Yeah.
Because you pick up speed so fast on that. And it was some of the things I'm just watching. This had to be one of the most dangerous sets in general.
It was, but Cameron... Like, even though we talked about how Cameron's like, fuck you, get the fuck off my set, like he's choking the executives, he would never hurt somebody on purpose. Like, if somebody got hurt, he genuinely was empathetic and was like, shit.
Yeah.
You know? Especially if you're working on such a big scale production, it's easy to, like, not have empathy for people because you're just, this is too big or whatever. But he was very, because as soon as people were getting hurt, he just went to Digital Domain. It was like, I don't want people getting hurt on my movie set. But also at the same time, he had these moments where, like, they were filming the scene where Leo and Rose see each other for the first. Remember, she comes out without the hat, and he's like looking at her, and Fabrizio is like, doing the John Cena to him to be like, "Hey, hello, Earth to Jack." And also the moment the acting in that is so great because Rose comes out and she sees Jack, and then she looks away, and then she looks back again, and that little look she does back again, it's like it just stuck with me for some reason. Yeah. But they were talking about should she have a hat on, because Cameron's like, all right, just she walks out, and he's like, this isn't right, take the hat away. And Cameron Deborah Scott was the costume designer. And she goes, no, she needs the hat. She's a lady. If they're seen without their hats in public, it's like frowned upon. Like it's like, it's shameful to like the first class passengers. And Cameron's like, yeah, but the whole thing about her scene is like she's rebelling against this life. She just, argued with her. She just embarrassed her, her mom and Cal. She doesn't give a shit. And the costume is like, no, we need the hat. We need the hat. So Cameron just took the hat and threw it off the ship. He's like, all right, go get it. And she's like, all right, fine, you win, whatever you want.
She's like, that was my grandmother's hat.
Oh yeah, that would be rough. He's like, all right, fine, I'll go get it. But like speaking of Kate Winslet, the shot of when they kiss for the first time, when she's like, I'm flying, Jack, right? There's there's a great mix of green screen. And also, not the volume, like, what the volume is that they use today, where it's like a giant screen instead of a green screen, where it actually shows a picture of Gotham City in the background. Yeah. And then they put Robert Pattinson in front of it. They used it in The Mandalorian. If you use it well, it looks very, very good. They did something like that. Of course, they didn't have a big screen, but they had a giant canvas with, like, the sunset that they wanted on the wall. Maybe they got it from the day of when they got the sunset for real. But then they used a combination of that with the canvas with it painted, and then they had a green screen with like artificial lighting, and then they had like the stuff they actually got on location, and it all blends together perfectly well, right? But I mentioned before, they had 2 weeks to get the sunset that they wanted when they get the shot of them kissing with the actual sunset, and they had 2 weeks to get that, and every day they're like, it's too cloudy, not gonna happen, we're not gonna get it. Every day. And then finally, it was at the last day of them being able to get that sunset shot. Cameron goes, Russell, what do you think? Is the sunset going to come? He looks at the clouds. He goes, nah, definitely not. And then Cameron goes, well, get everybody over here. Like, I have a feeling. And he goes, okay. And then 15 minutes later, the sun comes out. And they go on the walkie-talkie. And they're like, get Winslow over here now. So she's like running down the ship, like changing her wardrobe with the costume designers. And she's running. And they're setting everything up. And they didn't have time to like rehearse the focus pull or anything. And Cameron talked about how he goes, this is really, you're not supposed to do this on a movie set, but, we're all setting up, and then Kate sees the sunset coming up, and she just goes, "Shoot!" and everybody kind of stops because like you're not only the director says cut and action and shoot.
But she's like,
and everybody looks around and he's like, "What the fuck are you waiting for?" Like,
listen
shoot,
to
let's
her."
go.
Yeah.
And then they got it, and the first take they got was completely out of focus because the focus puller didn't have time to rehearse.
Yeah.
And then the second shot they got was either reversed. The first one was the good one, and the second one was the bad one.
No, it was the first one was bad.
Okay, so then the second one they got, the first 4 seconds was out of focus, and then after that it was in focus, and they did the kiss. And
it kind of works.
what do you mean it kind of works? I get bricked up every time. I'm gonna cut that.
Oh, it works.
I'm gonna cut that out. But speaking of them kissing, Kate Winslet and Leo, obviously they became very, very good friends on this in like a non-romantic way. Not that it's any of my business. But she talks about they would always pull pranks on each other. And one of the pranks, they agreed before kissing scenes, they said no coffee, no onions, no garlic, and whatever else before a kissing scene. And Leo goes, got it. And then before every single one, he would go and do all of those things. He would like just eat a clove of garlic and then bite into an onion and just drink coffee and be like, let's do it. Which I thought was pretty funny. And also we talked about like, the tilting and stuff. So when they tilted the actual, 775 foot set, and that the sliding that all those people are doing, when it's sinking, and there's people just sliding hundreds of feet. Yeah. So how they did that is they actually were falling to a certain extent, but they were also being pulled on like a hidden cable, and they also wore on the back or the front, depending on what orientation the guy was sliding at. They put this plate under their life jacket or into their life jackets, which had like ball bearings.
Yeah. I wonder if there's any of those around anywhere. I would love to.
Yeah, just for research purposes. I don't want to ride them down like a skateboard ramp or anything. And they would just slide down the ramp as they got pulled, which I thought was interesting.
I think like you were like, I would have a mathematician on set. For that specific scene where they're tilting the whole entire huge replica, the mathematics behind that, because they're like purposely sinking it on purpose. Like they have to add a certain amount of water in the back to make sure it's just buoyant enough to stay at that position, but not fully sink. So they have to get
so it wasn't like an actual boat. Like it didn't float on water.
I know, but they still were like technically making it go down low enough so it has the effect of sinking. Or has the effect of the water like rushing in.
Right. Well, you never saw the actual big set on tilt on screen because it took like days to do it because the thing weighed more than Titanic. Because they go, how does this thing weigh more than the Titanic? And he goes, we just kept putting stuff in it. Like so, there was one point in the because we're getting now to where the production got out of hand. There was a point where Fox is looking at all the what's the accounting, like the balance sheets or whatever. They're looking at the balance sheets, and they go, "How are you spending this much on lights? How many fucking lights do you have? 8,000? There's no way you need that many lights."
Yeah.
And so Fox got a lighting expert to go down there and like sort of do like an audit of the whole set and like determine how many lights they need. And he showed up and was like, "Yeah, you don't have enough lights."
Oh, really?
Yeah. So they got more. So there was stuff like that. They just kept putting. So it was heavier than the actual Titanic allegedly, but also the sets, because I was like, wait, really? I was thinking like, did they do it this way? They like the dining room and the ballroom or the grand staircase. Those sets were not in the actual big giant boat that they built. It was in the sound stages, so the thing was hollow, and to make sure and when they lowered it, like how they built it is they built the top deck and then put all of those chimneys on the top, right? And then they sort of like jacked it up where they lifted one side and then put a little log under there. And then under every scaffold, they would just lift it like 1 inch at a time.
Yeah.
And then they would build another story, lift it the same way, build another story, almost, like that. So I think the thing was pretty anchored into whatever hydraulic system, because they had these hydraulic systems that were like hundreds of feet long. It was insane what they were doing. And at one point, actually, we'll get to that. Do you have anything else to say about that? When you were talking about the boat sinking, am I understanding you, or am I?
I think so. I think the only thing you didn't really understand was that they obviously are in water, so they had to fill it up a certain amount. And
right.
I think I saw something where it was like they had to control the amounts, like the level of water that was going into the part that was under the water to give it that, because it's gonna interact with the water, and it's gonna either do one or the other. So they had to keep it at that right amount, because it's enough water to, even if you have like something else affecting it, the water, you still have to account for the water.
Right. There's probably an added resistance that the water. Yeah. Also, I was talking about before, I forgot to mention, when the people were sliding down, at one point the cameraman was like, Jim, I don't know if I want to slide down with the guy. So Jim was like, all right, I'll do it. And that's the thing where he's never a guy, like there's sort of types of directors where they're kind of, I don't want to call directors snooty, but there's some guys who just like don't do any work. They just tell other people to, and whatever. I'm not indicting anybody, that does happen. But Cameron would always just be like, there's a scene with the iceberg, right? They got a huge 100-pound block of ice that they needed to chop up. And they're like, all right, we need somebody to chop it up. And Cameron just took the axe and just started chopping it. Everybody's like watching him like, oh shit, maybe we should. So then and everybody starts chopping it. And then there's like the smallest guy ever, who doesn't look athletic, just starts chopping at it wrong. And Cameron's like, I can't fucking let this guy. And he just took his axe and just started fucking chopping.
Yeah.
And people would say, like, as a joke, they would say, he's gone. Wait, did I mention that Cameron ended up filming the scenes of them sliding?
You were about to.
I keep getting to it, and then I get distracted. I'm sorry for those listening. But people, they would see Cameron do shit like this, where he would just be chopping the ice or like doing stuff, and they would go, he's gone Kurtz. And that's a reference to Apocalypse Now, a movie that you haven't seen because you thought the title was Apocalypse Later, where Kurtz, played by Marlon Brando, Martin Sheen is hired to kill him because he's an army soldier, or Marlon Brando plays a Marine who, was sent on a mission to kill somebody or whatever, and then he went native, as they say, and like started his own little colony of Vietnamese, and like became a villain. So like instead of saying he's gone native or whatever, they said he's gone Kurtz, right? And the same thing happened with the Abyss. Remember where I said like they were just sending guys in like try to wrangle this thing, dude, like holy shit. And the same thing was happening with Titanic. Now they were sending guys to be like, hey, listen, this is getting out of hand. The budget's getting crazy. Things are brewing. Things like that are brewing in the background. And so keep those in mind for these stories that I'm about to tell. So one of the things that they started to realize when they were filming is they were filming everybody getting in the lifeboats. And while they were getting everybody in there, the davits, which are those big white metal arms that are holding the pulley ropes, they started bending. And they're like, oh shit, like we don't know. And then they made like a sort of like a revelation about the actual Titanic where they go, this is the same construction plans that were given. Like we got these from the company that had the plans for the davits. These are the same exact davits they used on Titanic. And we know that a lot of the boats were being only filled by like half, right? And this might be the reason why, because they saw the davits bending and we're like, I don't know if we could put more people on there. Because Thomas Andrews, the master shipbuilder who designed the whole thing, in the movie, he says these things were tested in Belfast to withstand the weight of 70 men, but he was talking about the boats, not the davits. The boats were fine.
The davit,
So that, and I just thought that was interesting, where they accidentally stumbled upon making an actual, a possible conclusion for the actual history that happened. But this is leading into a story about Stephen Crane. Stephen Crane, yes, he was the stunt coordinator, and they were filming with the lifeboats. And there's a scene that occurs, I think, is sort of cut out, where there's a boat full of women. That I think is it Billy Zane, the one that he gets in? Who cares? So a boat full of women turns over, right? And the stunt is that they have to flip it up while men are like clamoring on it, and then all the men get on the boat, but they kept fucking it up. And every time they fucked it up, it would take 2 hours to like do another take. And Cameron was getting pissed, like Steve, you said this was fucking possible, man. Why aren't they doing it? It's like this is costing us, $500,000 today right now because we can't goddamn do the scene. And then again, they try it again, and he's like, what the fuck are they doing? He goes, Steve, you said you can do this. What the hell? And Steve just goes, go fuck yourself. And he goes, what did you just say? And he goes, you heard me.
Damn.
And then Cameron goes, you're fucking fired. Get off the set.
Oh, shit.
And then they stop filming. And then once people realized that Cameron fired Crane, Landau comes, I think it was Landau, he comes over to Jim and goes, listen, all the stunt crew just said they're going to walk if you fire a crane. He goes, let them walk. He goes, we got lifeguards here. They're not going anywhere. There's a million guys and stunt guys in LA watching Jerry Springer right now who would love to get some work done. We can hire them. Fuck it. And they're like, dude, it would just be so complicated if you do that. Like, please, like, dude. And so they made an agreement where in private, John Lando had to like bring Stephen Crane on the set and be like, what do you say? He's like, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
and Cameron's like, okay, fine, whatever. So I mentioned, the production getting out of hand, and also in the trades, it wasn't just like an internal private thing that this production was getting crazy. Everybody knew about it. Everybody in the industry knew about it, and everybody in the general audience essentially knew about it because there was press. There's like on-set reporters who were, printing these stories like the Stephen Crane, go fuck yourself. They were on the set seeing all this shit happen and all these things go over budget. And they were also, Titanic is a disaster. The budget's going up and up. The budget must be 120 to 180 million dollars, that kind of thing. And they were also comparing it to a movie called Waterworld, which starred, I forget who directed it, but I think it starred Kevin Costner. He might have directed it actually. I'm not sure because he did Dances with Wolves, which won Best Picture and was 3 hours long. It was a Western and it made a bunch of money and won Best Picture. But then he made like all these bombs. Like I think it was Waterworld he directed. I'm not sure if he directed that, but he also did The Postman, which also actually opened around the same time as Titanic and it bombed. But that was a huge disaster because it was filmed in the ocean. It was Waterworld. It's if Earth was all water, like a post-apocalyptic thing, right? So this guy, a good like scene that kind of sells that movie is a guy finds a piece of paper, and he's like smelling. He goes, "It's paper. I got paper. Tastes like paper. Smells like paper." Like that kind of thing. And that was just a giant box office bomb. Apparently, it sucked, and the production was a nightmare. I never seen it, so I don't want to say it sucked. So everybody was comparing it to Waterworld, and Paramount was, like I mentioned earlier, they were bragging to everybody else in the industry and to like the reporters, like, good thing we capped our investment at $60 million, right? Because now Fox was, was responsible for filling in all the extra money that was going over budget, and they were talking about in the book, why did this cost so much? Why was there a miscalculation on the scale of double? And they said because nobody else had done this before. It was just estimates. Like we can't just look up how much it cost to build a Titanic and sink it and have all these sets and sink the sets, because the way the sets were built, like all the like dining room, the grand staircase, every set that they built was on top of a water tank. So they would film all the dry scenes, and then when they had to do the sinking scenes, they would just lower the set into water on an angle, and all that water would pour in. Nobody had the fucking plans to do that. They just had to make it up. They were inventing all this stuff.
It's literally the most advanced real practical effects and the most advanced CGI mixed all together into one, which both are two incredibly expensive things. So
anyway, so all this different stuff was going on, and we're talking about this pressure that was building on Cameron. This thing was getting out of control. Louis Abernathy, who I talked about, who played, the guy with the beard and the glasses, who's like, yeah, this thing's fucking sinking, bitch. Remember that scene where he's showing her the animation? And also, what a dickhead. Yeah, if you know that maybe he thought she was a liar at the time, but obviously she might be a survivor, and you're like, this thing careens into the ocean, slams. Anybody that is in there just dead. Yeah. But he had a quote. He goes, "You go into New York City, and look at one of those buildings, and then take one of those buildings and just stack it on Cameron's head. That's what $200 million. That building is $200 million. That is what Cameron has on his head. Yeah, and he's making this movie. And I don't. People always talk about Cameron very well when they talk about the movie. Like nobody ever says, "Oh, he was in over his head" or anything. He seems to have taken it very well. Maybe he had some bursts of anger that kind of came from the pressure, but it was never like people never said that he can handle it, right? But there's stories of him being like, there was one, he was having dreams about getting the decor wrong, like nightmares of him being like, oh my God, we got the lamps wrong, shit. And he would wake up and be like, oh, right? Yeah,
because there's so many small
things that he had to, and also sometimes he would just paint the set. Like he would, because he would just see something and be like, well, maybe I'll just help him. I don't have anything else to do right now. But he talked about, there was one time somebody goes, there was one time we just saw him walking, marching down the set, just fuming. And he's like, this is fucking bullshit. God damn it, that son of a bitch. I'm gonna fire him. And they go, Jim, what's wrong, Jim? What's wrong? And he goes, fucking bullshit. And they go, dude, just tell us what's wrong. It takes like a few minutes. And he's like walking down. And they're like, tell us what's wrong. He goes, that door is supposed to open in and it opens out.
Oh my.
And they're like, dude, we'll fix it. Like, tell us that. So that was the type of pressure where like it wasn't the example of him being a bad director. It was just the pressure might have been getting into him in those types of situations where he may have overreacted, become impatient. Again, I have no idea what it's like to be him. I'm not indicting him or his behavior. I'm just trying to get a sense of what it was like to watch him direct on the set. So this is a good. We talked about that. We opened with this with Titanic in the last podcast. And this book, The Making of Titanic and James Cameron by Paula Parisi, also opens with this. So James Cameron, they're filming the. I think it's the poop deck scene which we were talking about. And obviously that's going crazy. It's very difficult. And Cameron's like, Jesus Christ. And he goes in his trailer and he's eating like this shitty food. It's lunch for him, but it's 2 a.m. because they're filming nights.
Yeah.
And he's like, this fucking sucks. And he's just trying to have like his 20 minutes of peace. And then Bill Mechanic walks in, who was, I think, was he the president? Yeah, he was the Fox president. And he walks in and he goes, Jim, we are dedicated to this movie. We are dedicated to this being a good movie. But here is a list of scenes that you need to cut. And
at this point,
yeah, he's like, you need to cut this. You need to cut this. We're committed to this game being a good movie. Cut this. And he just basically says, if you want me to cut these scenes, man, we can cut them, but you'll have to fire me, and you'll never fucking fire me because the only way to fire me is to kill me. Get the fuck out of my trailer. Don't come back, you piece of shit. Like that kind of thing. And also he knew in that moment, he's like, there's no way he's going to fire me.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody else who can do this. There's nobody else who can just come into this production and just carry it.
Yeah, especially
the
just
amount of
all
time
the
that they
working
need.
part, all the moving parts of it to come in, it would be a nightmare.
Exactly.
To even try to learn it.
Yeah. So then Bill Mechanic visited Cameron again at his house. And obviously, and Cameron did have empathy with the studio. Like, he wasn't like, fuck you, you gave me the money already, idiot.
Yeah.
Like, he was still like, fuck, I'm doing this with their money, right? And he didn't want to feel like on Charlie Rose, he says, I didn't want to make them think I lied to them to get them pregnant.
Yeah.
Where, I lied to them so I can get their money. So he goes, what I did, Bill Mechanic goes like, listen, this is crazy. We got to wrangle in this production. And Jim goes, I'll give you my back end. So I will make no money from this movie, which was like a big deal. That does not happen. Nobody gives back money in Hollywood. And also, he's going to make the fucking movie for free. And Bill Mechanic goes, yeah, that would mean something if the movie was going to make any money. And James Cameron's like, what the fuck did you say? And he goes, and he goes, get the fuck out of my house.
Yeah.
Get out. Because James Cameron found that so disrespectful. But also at the same time, like, we know that Titanic's the biggest movie of all time now. Mm. It's a 3-hour costume drama. It's a romance. Jim Cameron's doing a romance. What? Who's going to watch this? They were hoping, like, best case scenario makes $400 million. Also, his back end deal that he was giving up, if this movie makes $400 million, he would get somewhere between 10 and 20 million. So that's what he was giving up.
Yeah.
And Bill Mechanic goes, no, sorry, pal. And then he storms out, right? So, but James Cameron said he offered it, and Bill Mechanic never, like, accepted it or rejected it. It's, like, sort of still in the air. And Cameron just remembers that he doesn't have his back end deal anymore. Okay? We're going to get to that later.
Okay.
But one of the things that came out of all these discussions and Cameron cursing out Bill Mechanic and giving him noogies and shit and stuff is they hired this guy, Marty Katz, who was a sort of like, a Hollywood Mr. Fix-It type guy, except he didn't kill anybody. That's actually a perfect way to describe him because people said he looked like Joe Pesci. And he sort of looks like him, yeah. So just when I'm talking about the story, I'm going to say Marty, but just picture Joe Pesci in your head.
Okay.
So he comes on and he was basically sent in to wrangle the production. And he wasn't like a Harold Schneider on The Abyss or a Roger Birnbaum or Bill Mechanic, where he's like, these guys were going in and being like, dude, we can't keep this guy under control. Marty Katz was very smart, and he knew that he's like, there's no way I'm going to just go in and change his mind.
Yeah.
Right. So what he did is he hired a bunch of production managers to take the workload off of John Landau so he can focus on doing stuff with Cameron, because John Landau wasn't really I'm not saying it was John Landau's fault, but he wasn't delegating enough, and he needed help in terms of, just increasing his reach without having to be there and be conscious of whatever they were doing every second of the day. And I think the one, let's see, what was the one thing so the one thing that he made Cameron do, the one compromise that Marty Katz got out of him was, I mentioned how they're tilting the 800-foot set, right? They had 2 angles of that set being tilted planned, right? So they had angle 1, which they would tilt it at 3 degrees, and then, they would get everything filmed for angle 3 by Christmas. And they would break for Christmas, and then during Christmas break, the crew would, put it to angles with a 6 degrees on an angle, and that was angle 2. And then for any other degrees after that, they actually, to exaggerate the angle without having to raise it up, what they did is they just tilted the camera and then digitally manipulated the horizon in the background and the water line as well, which is very smart. Marty goes, so just cut angle 1 because it's going to take us like 36 days to, fully jack this thing. But if we just go straight to angle 1, it'll cut a lot of time out. And he goes, well, what about all the, the third degree, the angle 1 stuff that's supposed to be at 3 degrees? And he goes, just fucking take the ship and then just tilt the camera a little bit. Yeah. And just have everybody, and he's like, fine, like, we'll do it. And you cannot notice. There's no scene in this movie where I'm like, they're going, whoa. Like, you never notice. So that was a very good call by Marty Katz, and he should get credit for that. Oh, I didn't talk about that. Victor Garber. I should have talked about this in pre-production. But Victor Garber, who plays Thomas Andrews, he's a great actor. He's one of those actors, like, you don't really know his name if you're a casual moviegoer, but you've seen him in a lot of stuff. He was in, like, Legally Blonde and stuff like that. He always shows up. Yeah. He almost didn't get the part because the casting director, whoever it was, Mally Lynn or one of her assistants, sent in a tape going like, Victor Garber, this guy is awesome. Like, he should be Thomas Andrews. And then they watch the tape, and it's like a guy in a bow tie, and he's like, well, I'm the master shipbuilder, and he's terrible. And they're like, what the fuck? Did she really drop what does she see in this guy? She really dropped the ball. And they go, yeah, Mally, what are you talking about? And she's like, what do you mean? He goes, what's with this bow tie? He looks weird. He has a weird nose. And they're like, what, bow tie? He wasn't wearing a bow tie when I recorded him. And they found out they just got sent the wrong video.
Oh, it was just some other guy.
Yeah, it was Brian Atteen who auditioned for Full Metal Jacket. He's like, hello, good day, Mr. Kubrick. No, it wasn't that guy. But yeah, so it was just some other poor guy who sucks at acting apparently. But filming wrapped on March 22nd, 1997, which was what they started they started filming July in Halifax and then ended in March. How many months is that? We need a mathematician.
Yeah, we need a. Can't put
you in the comments figure it out. I'm hired to talk about movies, not do math. But the final shot toasts that. So Cameron, the final shot in the movie that they did was with Bernard. Actually, it was a stunt guy playing Bernard Hill's character. Bernard Hill played Captain Smith. He also died in 2024. Now the final shot in the movie was the camera, Captain Smith's, the fucking
captain's quarters.
Whatever the with the wheel.
Yeah, the captain's quarters.
Yeah, the captain's quarters or whatever. Getting blown in with a bunch of water at the end, and he drowns. Nobody wanted to do it. The camera. So Cameron went on the camera. He got scubaed up and stuff, and then they went in there with the camera. Stunt guys in there, and they just put all this fucking water. And just blow it in, and that was the final shot of the movie. And he goes, yeah, the water just came in, everything turned black. I was like, what the fuck's going on? Did I get the shot? I hope so. And then Russell Carpenter's like, yeah, we got the shot. He's like, oh, thank God. And he comes out, everybody's clapping, and then they do a toast. They go, thank you, everybody. Like, that's a wrap. Let's, woo, yeah. And then he gets in the car to go home. Also, when he would commute, so he lived in Malibu. So he wouldn't take a car home every day. He would go on a helicopter, because driving with the car would take like 3 hours. So he went on a helicopter and just by helicopter flew to his home. And he had a helipad installed at his house. Nice. And he would just take an hour. Yeah. But this time it was a car, because I guess he was in no rush. And before they even got out of the studio driveway, he was already asleep in the back of the car.
Yeah, that's just like the end of. Yeah. I thought you were going to say, he's like, I hope I had the right lamps in that one shot.
He's like, yeah, we got to reshoot that.
The post-production of Titanic. Cameron and editors Richard Harris and Conrad Buff sorted through over 1.5 million feet of film and began editing their own chunk of the movie. By May 1997, it was clear that the movie wouldn't be ready for its July 4th release date.
So I believe Richard Harris, that editor, worked on Terminator 2 and I think maybe True Lies, and then Conrad Buff Conrad Buff worked on The Abyss, but then he became a director in his own right. But James Cameron was like, "Bro, I need your help," and he was like, "Got it." And I found two different conflicting reports of where James Cameron learned to edit on the Avid. The Avid was like sort of like the first digital editing platform where people were using, like the Moviola was like an analog editing machine where you actually had to cut the film and shit. But this is when film started to get used on a computer, the editing software. And I saw somebody said Cameron was taught, like Harris taught him when they were editing True Lies how to use it. But I also saw that the first time he used it was editing Strange Days with Catherine Bigelow. So it could either be one of those two things. But he at this point he knew how to do it.
Probably a little bleed over.
Yeah, maybe yeah. But so what he did with these three guys, he goes, "Hey, I'm gonna edit the first chunk of the movie. Conrad, you're gonna do the middle chunk, and then Richard, you're gonna do the last chunk. And then after we get all those three chunks together, I'm just gonna go through a bunch, and then we'll figure it out." And so he would, during the day, he would do all like the visual effects and post-production stuff that he needed to do, and then at night he would just edit, and that was sort of his schedule. But now the question of the release date had to come up because it's fucking May, and the movie's supposed to come out in July, and he's like, "There's no what? We just started editing," and so they had the problem was he was dealing with Fox executives who were like the primary partners and makers of the movie, but Paramount got to decide the release date because the movie's not going to open in other countries first. Like usually movies, or at least to a certain extent, like it's not going to open in Japan 2 months before it comes out in the U.S. right? So usually things come out in the U.S. first, or at the same time as international. International maybe a little bit late. There's always some weird rules I don't really know. Like sometimes a movie. I listen to this podcast, The Weekly Planet, and there are two guys in Australia, and they go, "Yeah, we're going to review Blade Runner in 2 months because that's when it comes out here."
Yeah.
So it's like, what happened? So I don't know exactly the specifics of that, but Paramount had final say over the release, so they had to convince Paramount. And Cameron was like, "Do you want to, release a good movie, and maybe get a, because the whole thing is like, do we at least." Okay, from Fox's perspective, they were like, "We don't expect us to make money, but we just want to make sure we have a good movie." Paramount was probably a little bit less like that, where we're like, we'd rather make a little bit of money than have a good movie. I'm not saying they didn't want a good movie, what I mean? But he had to convince them, like, okay, I don't want to release a compromised movie. If we stick to the July 4th release date, we're gonna release 85% of the movie that we wanted to make. The other 15% we didn't get to do, right? And they already had stuff made up. It was they had posters like in theaters that said July 4th. It was like the whole of Titanic. And it said "Collide with Destiny" or something like that.
July 4th, yeah.
That's
what
July
I was going
4th.
to ask.
So, which again, like they were like, "Is this a summer movie?" Like we don't know what it is again. And James Cameron, recommended December because they were thinking like, should we do it, July 21st? Should we do it, August 3rd, August 8th, whatever? And they were like, "No, just fuck it, just make it in July." Because James Cameron said like, people in December, they're with their families. It's a very romantic time of the year. Yeah. And I think people are open to having a more emotional experience. And I think we should release in December. And also November was like the Oscar release date. I think Dances with Wolves, which I mentioned earlier, directed by Kevin Costner, starring him, won like 9 Oscars. And it was released in November. And I think Bill Chernin or somebody was like, I mean, we'll release Titanic in November if you think it's going to win 9 Oscars. Yeah. Which it won more of. We'll get to that. Which I thought was just a funny little ironic line. So around this time when they said, all right, we'll do it, we're going to move it to December. Cameron was at like the Fox studio or whatever, and he ran into Rupert Murdoch. Do you know who Rupert Murdoch is? So, he was in the movie Bombshell. You know who he is. So he was basically like the CEO of Fox. They made a miniseries with Russell Crowe about him called The Loudest Voice. And so he owned the studio. And Cameron saw him and he goes, "Hey, I guess I'm not your favorite person right now." And he goes, yeah, how's the movie coming along? Murdoch says. And he goes, "It's going to be good." And he goes, "Listen, James Cameron, this movie better be a damn sight better than good, okay?" And he's like, "All right, fine." He goes, "All right. Now I'm going to go sexually harass some women that work for me." And he goes, "What?" He goes, "Just you'll know in 20 years. Just look it up. Just watch the movie Bombshell." He's like, "All right, fine. I'll write it down." And so that was like the kind of pressure. It was sort of like, I remember my favorite screenwriter is William Goldman. and he wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He wrote The Great Waldo Pepper. I think that's the title. And he wrote fucking All the President's Men. He won an Oscar for it. And when he was writing it, it was like his Titanic where he was writing it. It was like a disaster, and all of Hollywood was like, he's fucking the script up, because it was a very topical thing that needed to be made. All the Watergate story, and he was in the Pentagon or somewhere, and or like at NBC, whatever it was, and he saw Walter Cronkite in the hall. And he's like, Walter Cronkite, like it's an honor to meet you. And Walt Cronkite just goes, I heard you're having script troubles. He's like, fuck. It's like,
how does everyone know about that? Because
it was the biggest. It was like the script that was kind of circulating in Hollywood. There's a big drama behind that, which is William Goldman wrote a great book called Adventures in the Screen Trade. Adventures in the Screen Trade. It's great. You should read it.
Did the script get like leaked or something?
All right, skip through this if you don't give a shit. So here's what happened. So he was writing it, and he could, because it's such a complicated story, and he's like, how do I, like, should I, when do I come into the story? Do I show their backgrounds first and then go into it? What do I do? So he was trying all these different things, and they're like, yeah, we don't know. I don't know about this. And he was having trouble. And then at one point, because Robert Redford was a producer on the movie as well, I believe. And Carl Bernstein was, I think he was dating or married to Nora Ephron. You know who Nora Ephron is? She wrote and directed all these comedies like Sleepless in Seattle. When she wrote When Harry Met Sally. She's a very influential writer-director. But she was married to Carl Bernstein, I think, who played Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman played him. And William Goldman gets a call, and he goes, hey, it's Robert Redford. Can you come over? And he goes, okay. And he walks into the room, and it's Carl Bernstein with Nora Ephron and Robert Redford sitting in a room with a script in their hand. And he goes, Bill, I just read a very interesting script that was written by Nora Ephron. Nora Ephron wrote a script for All the President's Men.
Oh.
And Goldman's like freaking the fuck out because he's been working on this thing for like a year and a fucking half, like stressed about it. And so that was like, sort of a thing where,
pissed.
Yeah. But then they ended up going with his screenplay, and he won an Oscar for it. And he said, if you told me when I was hired to write the script, or when I was approached to write the script, that I would win an Oscar for writing it, I still wouldn't have taken it. I don't want to ever. That was the most stressful time of my life.
Yeah.
So I remember when we were talking about Eyes Wide Shut, we talked about Show West, which was like an exhibit for movie theater chains to see the trailers of movies that are coming out, and they needed one for Eyes Wide Shut after Kubrick died. And they, right before he died, he made that trailer. It was like, baby did a bad thing.
You love doing that.
And because it's funny, because having that in a Kubrick movie is so funny. But that was the trailer that he cut, because everybody says, oh, they fucked up the marketing campaign after he died. They tried to make it look like a sexy movie, but he made that original teaser trailer before he died, right?
That's
anyway,
what he wanted.
So Show West in 1997, they needed a trailer for Show West. And so Cameron cut this thing together. It was like 5 minutes long, and it was basically like a chronological, 5 minute cut up of the movie, and that showed Rose. It would like be like some action, and then show Rose being like, it's been 84 years, and then some action back to Rose. He was the love of my life. And Steve Friedman calls Ray Sancini, and she goes, hey, did you see the trailer? And he goes, yeah, I just saw the trailer. I just threw up on my shoes. He goes, what the fuck? Why is that old lady? This is supposed to be like an action movie, I thought. Jane, why is there an old lady narrating this thing the whole time? And they were like, oh, I thought it was good. Like that. So then there was big discussions over like how they should edit the trailer. And I think they just cut out a lot of, like they put Gloria Stewart in the beginning and then at the end, and they just cut her out of the middle, and it played a little bit better.
Yeah.
At Show West. Cameron originally wanted John Williams to do the score for the movie. And, John Williams, of course, did Superman, Star Wars, literally every score you've ever heard. And he was busy because he was doing Jurassic Park 2 for Steven Spielberg. So he's like, fuck, I can't get. But he had the same agency, John Williams, as James Horner. James Horner is a composer who did the score for Aliens. But the way they kind of collaborated on Aliens was sort of like they were under a time crunch. Cameron didn't have as much clout as a director as he had back then. Yeah. James Horner wasn't really happy with what he sent in as the score. Cameron wasn't happy either. So Horner, they weren't like, there was no animosity between them, but they both understood like, yeah, we couldn't get what we wanted out of each other, right? But then Cameron goes to James Horner and has a meeting with him, and when Cameron was writing the script, he was listening to the music of this musician singer called Enya, Enya. She was it sort of had like this Irish folksy vocal type feel, and he was listening to that. And he was like, I wish I could use that, but I kind of can't or whatever. And he meets with Horner, and he goes like, yeah, what ideas do you have for, for the music or whatever? I don't want something that's too orchestral or, like violins at, a sad moment that's too obvious, And he goes, honestly, and like Horner's sort of embarrassed to say it. And he's like, honestly, like I kind of, when I think about the music, I kind of just think about Enya. And Cameron stands up and goes, bullshit, someone told you to say that.
Yeah.
And he goes, what do you mean? And he goes, holy shit, you're hired. Because then now they were on the
sick.
exact same page because they knew exactly what the sound of the movie needed to be without ripping off Enya, you know what I mean? But the one thing they disagreed on is Horner was having trouble trying to find a musical piece that could end in the credits. He's like, how can I create something that can put a cap on everything I just wrote? And he goes to Cameron and he goes, what do you think about a song? And Cameron goes, well, you want to put a song at the end of my movie? And he goes, yeah, well, like, why not? And he goes, would you put a song at the end of Schindler's List? So he goes, fuck, he just owned me with facts and logic. I guess we can't have a song. But then he went home and was like, you know what? I think we can maybe pull something off. So then, what you mentioned earlier, he went to, what was the guy's name? Was it Will Jennings? Yes, Will Jennings. It was Will Jennings. And with Will Jennings, wrote the song, My Heart Will Go On. And then he came up with like a melody for it. And then he was like, who can we get that can do it or whatever? And they're like, how about Celine Dion? Also, this is all behind James Cameron's back. He doesn't know about this. And of course, like you said, she was like, I don't know, like a song for a movie.
Well, he tried to play it for her, and because he plays the piano, and Celine Dion literally, she loves saying this in interviews. She's like, he's a good, talented piano player, but he cannot sing. So like he tried to sing it for her, and he's like singing it, and she said she was standing behind him going like I think her husband's Renee or something, and she's like, I'm not singing this one. This sucks. I can't do this. So her husband literally stopped James Horner and was like, you singing this right now is not helping you. Just make a demo and she'll come and sing it. And then she apparently went in and James Horner or someone there explained Titanic to her, like explained the whole story to her, and it got her super emotional. And she's like, "Stop! I'm gonna cry. Let me just go do this one take, and I'll come back and we can talk more." And she went in and did the take, one take. That's the take.
Just fucking dominated. Just nailed it.
That's the take.
One rip.
One take, and that's like the most legendary
song
take.
like a song of her career too. Like one of the biggest songs.
Yeah. She still sings it.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
And it was also, I guess, serendipity when like things kind of work out because she also had an album coming out in the fall, so she was going to be very popular at that time as well. And so then anyway, like you said, they recorded the song, and James Horner comes back to Cameron, and he goes, "Hey, Jen, can you listen to this thing I have for the credits?" And he goes, "Yeah." He's like scared because he's like, Cameron told him not to do a song, and he's about to play him a song, and Cameron's sitting there. He goes, "Yeah, sure. Let's just go into my office. Let's fucking we'll listen to it." And then like 30 seconds in, he goes, you made a song? And he goes, just listen. And he goes, all right. And then he listens to the whole thing. And James Horner's like, what do you think? And James Cameron just goes, restart. And he listens to it again, like maybe 2 or 3 times. And then he goes, it's fucking phenomenal.
Yeah.
He goes, who'd you get to do this? And he goes, Celine Dion. He goes, oh, she's big, right?
Oh, dude. How do you like... Celine Dion is one of those people who's just on there's fame, and then there's another like mystical level of fame. I feel like she's up there.
Yeah, I wasn't familiar with Celine Dion's game.
She's got game, dude. She's a legend.
I guess that's why they call her Celine Dion and not Celine Dioff.
Ooh, all right. You got me with that one. That was good.
There's some dads watching that fucking love that one. Honey, come look at this. These guys are crazy. So Speed 2. The first Speed 2 was with Keanu Reeves and Sandra Bullock, and the premise of that movie is a guy puts a bomb on a bus, and once the bus reaches 55 miles an hour, it like triggers like the bomb ticking. And he goes, if he calls Keanu and he goes, hey pal, if this bus goes under 55 miles an hour, it's gonna blow up. So the whole movie is them like they're fucking doing GTA jumps off off the off ramps on the highway and shit. You know what I mean? But then they did Speed 2. I think Sandra Bullock was in that one, but Keanu Reeves didn't come back. I don't know the premise of that one. I don't know if it's with a boat. You know, you have to you must stay above 25 knots or else the boss, and then they just go straight in the ocean for like 2 hours. I don't know, but that was a giant movie. The budget for that movie is $106 million. And they told when they were discussing the release date, they're like, "We'll do July 4th." And then they go, "But we also have Speed 2 coming out June." He's like, "You're gonna put another boat movie in front of my Titanic movie?" And they're like, "Sorry, pal, like we got to do it." And he's like, "Fuck." But that movie came out and it bombed. It cost 120 million and it made 106 million worldwide.
Oof.
So that bombed. So now the pressure was on Titanic to really perform because now all their big movies were kind of just like taking shits at the box office. And they had their first test screening in June 1997. And also, nobody knows if the movie's good yet. They don't know this yet.
That's wild.
It was like a few months before they realized it was good. Mm-hmm. They're like, all right, well, at least it's a good movie. Now we're proud of that. But James, somebody in an interview goes, when was the first moment that you knew this movie was going to work and that it was good? And he goes, in June of 1997, we had a test screening. And about 45 minutes into the movie, I really couldn't get a gauge on the audience reaction. And the scene came up where Kate and Leo, Jack and Rose, are walking. And she's like, "Thank you for saving me the other night." And he goes, "Do you love Cal?" And she's like, "Excuse me?" Mm-hmm. And she's like, "Good day, sir." Like, it's a terrible question. And then they shake hands. And he goes, "All right, we'll see ya." And she's still shaking his hand. And then they both realize, like, oh, they're still holding hands. And he goes, and the lady behind James Cameron goes, "Oh, you say you don't like him, but you're still holding his hand, aren't you?" And James Cameron goes, "Fuck yes, dude, holy shit!" And that's when he knew the movie was good. And that's one of those. It's sort of like the fine line between flirting with a girl and being creepy. I don't know where the line is of like talking in a movie theater and being an asshole and being funny or being good. You know what I mean? It's an art that's lost on me. I don't know.
Well, if it's that, like, that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
It's more about the, on your phone and
that's
farting
true.
But if you're just like kind of, if you throw in like a cheeky line like that.
If you're invested in the movie, yeah, it's not like, yeah, I guess so. What else we got? So again, and also this was like one of the first big movies where internet discourse was like sort of a big deal. It's 1997, but there's still an internet. There's no YouTube or Google or anything, but there's still a lot of people on it. And there was this guy, Harry Knowles, who had a website called like ifitaintcool.com or something. And he was like sort of like a blogger type guy. He was like the first influencer. He's like the caveman influencer.
First Director Dossier.
Yeah. So yeah, he was basically like one of the first like internet influencers, except he was a nerd and not like some hot girl or whatever. And he had these guys. He was like, "Hey, they're doing a screening of Titanic somewhere. Like, figure out where it is." He heard somehow that they were going to do a screening of Titanic, an editorial screening in Minneapolis. And he goes, "Hey, see if you guys can get into the screening somewhere. Just find out where it is." And then like all of these guys like went all over Indianapolis and 25 guys got into the screening. And so now he had 25 guys who could tell him if the movie was good or not on the internet. Mm-hmm. And they go in there, and the movie, everybody loves the movie. It's like there was 25 the guys that went in, 23 of them came out like raving about it, and the other two guys were like, I don't know. And from that moment on, the whole discourse about Titanic changed from this is a huge disaster, glub, Titanic sinks of its own weight, this is going to be ridiculous, James Cameron's a dickhead, and it went to, actually, the movie is the movie good? Actually, yeah, it's pretty good, yeah it's okay. Awesome. And on the internet, and it was the first time like the internet discourse like really affected a movie, at least maybe not box office wise, but in terms of like the media, perception of, the movie, which I thought was very interesting. But also one of the reasons Cameron knew that the movie was like they really had something on their hands is because if you look at the ratings of the test audience's favorite scenes, the sinking of the ship was number 6.
Yeah, it's like they're.
So he goes, they were invested in the emotional stuff, not like because all the studio was thinking was like, yeah, you better get past the emotional stuff so that the audience can enjoy the sinking scenes. Like they were thinking that was going to be the thing that people liked because that was just what James Cameron was previously associated with. Yeah. But then these people come out like crying, and they're talking about my favorite scene was the Jack I'm Flying scene, or it was the dinner scene. Yeah. Where he talks with all the, he's like, oh, now I'm here with you fine people. Cheers. Like, that's that was a huge moment when they were like, we got something awesome on our hands.
When people are, and even just, I mean, I don't know if we want to get into that right now. Should we get into like what is your favorite scene? Like when you think of it, because since we're talking about it already, we might as well just say.
Let's see. I could tell you James Cameron's favorite scene. It's when Leo sees the dolphins.
Yeah.
Honestly, because I watched it 2 years ago and I cried fucking.
Yeah.
And then I watched it with my parents and I cried. I had a hood on, so I was like, fuck. And but then I watched it this time and I got but since it was like my third time watching it in like sort of a recent time, and I've been exposing myself to Titanic, not in a disgusting way, for like 40. Yeah, I just take the DVD and I just open my robe. But I've been so invested in Titanic for the last few days that when I watch it, obviously my emotions are kind of stunted a little bit because I've been so immersed in it.
Yeah.
But then the fucking ending shot, and I'm still just crying.
Yeah.
So I would say that's probably my favorite scene. Because I'll get to that later about how I have a nostalgia for it. But do you have anything else? Do you want to get to deleted scenes?
I would say mine is.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Like, I mean, it probably is like one of those things that changes every time. But mine at the moment, after the last watch, where it hit me the most was when all the musicians are like, "All right, well, I'll see you. Good job. All right," and then the violin player just stays, and then they all like turn around. They all just like join back in. For some reason, that just hit me so hard.
And actually, you know what? That you just brought up, because right after that is when they show Izor. No, what's her? Bella and Isidore Strauss, who were I think that's their names, on the bed when the water's rushing under the bed and they're like cuddling on the bed.
Yeah,
that crying.
Hit me too.
They owned the Macy's store in New York. And they died in the Titanic.
Yeah.
Those are real people. And then the mother, when she's like, and then they lived for 300. I remember seeing that when I was little and going like, that's rough. I'm going to talk about how my perception of watching this when I was little a lot when we get to overall thoughts, because I was like 5. And it's had a tremendous impact on me on just like human emotion and behavior. And it was my first exposure to a lot of certain ideas. Anyway, but the lady, the Irish mom in that scene, when she's like, we'll be fine. Once they let the first class people on, we'll go up. She was it Gonzalez or Ramirez or Martinez from Aliens? The butch girl, where she's like, "Hey, are you supposed to be a dude?" And she's like, "Yeah." No, are you?
Yeah.
That girl, and also John Connor's foster mom in Terminator 2. That's the same actress.
Wow.
She's like a chameleon, dude.
Yeah. I would have
never
guessed that.
So yeah, I didn't know until James Cameron said it in the commentary. So she's an impressive actor. I'm gonna insert her name right now.
Jeanette Goldstein.
So, you want to get to deleted scenes?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So one of the first things they cut, there was 6 minutes of extra sub stuff that they cut just for time. Because that thing goes on. If you look at the beginning, it goes on for a while. Jack and Rose don't really meet until like 40 minutes in, I think.
I know. Yeah.
So one of the things when I watched it the other day, that kind of stuck out to me as like sort of like a jump, that was kind of not, I guess, jarring in a little bit, was when Rose is at dinner, and it's one of the first times they pan in. She's like, I felt trapped or whatever, and they push in on her, and everybody's talking at the table, and she's like, they don't talk about anything. Like, they're not talking about anything real. And she's just sitting there looking at her food, and then it cuts to her like crying and running down the deck. Even then, I'm like, they definitely cut something out there, right? But then I see what they cut out, and I realize, okay, now I know why. Because it's not that it's bad or anything. They were right to a lot of the stuff they were right to cut out. Where right before that, she goes into her room and she's trying to get her dress off, but there's nobody there to help her, so she like just can't get it off, and she's like, ah!
Yeah.
And she like starts throwing stuff and just trashes her room. But it kind of gets a little silly where they kind of there's a shot where they hold on her for too long, and she kind of just looks like, But they were right to cut that out, I think. There's some modern day scenes where Lewis, the guy I mentioned with the big beard, who's like, listen, lady, this is how the ship sank. So it cuts back to her going like, and it was when Jack and Rose, he saves her life, and then he goes, hey, come to dinner, and he's like, okay, cool. After that, they cut back to the modern day again, and Lewis goes, you were gonna kill yourself by jumping off the Titanic, and he goes, bah! He goes, lady, if you just waited 2 days, you wouldn't have had to do it.
Yeah, that's like.
And it's like, dude, shut up! You're an absolute dickhead.
Yeah,
he's like smashing chips in his mouth, throwing them in, being like, yeah, what bullshit. And then she's like, fuck you, and then she leaves, and they have to be like, Rose, like, no, come on, like, keep telling us. And then Bill Paxton and the granddaughter go out on the deck, and he's like, and the guy's like, he goes, Brock, the partners are fucking, are chewing at our bits, dude. We gotta, like, we're over budget, we're over schedule, which would be a huge parallel to what James Cameron's going through on the actual production. And then he just talks about how, like, I need to find this goddamn thing with the granddaughter. But they were so right to cut it out, because I hate in movies where they do, like, I don't hate when they do like present to past flashback type thing. But what I hate doing is when you're so invested in the flashback scenes as an actual story, and then right in the middle somewhere, the narrator goes, I'm sorry, I have to take a break. And then, like, all the characters hang out for like 5 minutes until you get back into the story.
Yeah.
That has never worked in a movie where they're like, no, come back. Oh, we have to convince her to keep telling us a story. Nobody ever wants that. If there's an example of that working, put it in the comments. But I can't stand it, and they were so right to cut that out in this movie, because it's like, what's the point?
It feels like just a stumble in the whole flow of things. You're already flowing at that point. You don't want to just like take a break.
Exactly, basically. Like it's just taking a break for no reason. So they were so right to cut that out, and the way they cut to the present day stuff works so well, I think. What was the next thing? So right after they dance in the steerage scene, when they're all dancing and stuff, and Lovejoy sees them, he's like, son of a bitch. Leo drops her off at her suite, or Jack drops Rose off at the suite, and then, like, they're singing a song, and that the song that they're singing ends up being the song that he sings with Rose when she's like, I'm flying, Jack. And he's like, Josephine, my Josephine. And it's also the song that she sings when she's floating on the door right before the lifeboat comes, and she sees that Jack's dead. And so that was just, another setup to those two scenes. And then they also see a shooting star. And I think there was a deleted scene later in the movie where she sees one that was also a reference to, but then they cut that out because they cut out the first instance of the shooting star. They were right to cut that out. They didn't really add anything. It was kind of just more of them. And also, there's sometimes I see deleted scenes, I'm like, they shouldn't have cut that out, but most of the time, they're right in cutting out the delete, like what
taking out the shooting star and stuff, or
right. Like, well, usually when you see a deleted scene, you can usually know I can deduce why they cut it out. You know what I mean? It's very rare that I'm like, they should have kept that in. The only time I saw somebody, I was listening to, I think it was like Bill Simmons was doing a podcast with Paul Thomas Anderson, and Bill Simmons is like right-hand guy he goes, there's one deleted scene in Boogie Nights that I wish you didn't cut out, and it's when Dirk Diggler wins the porn awards for like the second time, like right before New Year's, and there's a deleted scene where it cuts to like slow motion of everybody like looking up at Dirk clapping, and it's like 20 seconds. He's like, we should have just left it in the movie, dude. And I tend to agree, but also, like, I didn't direct the movie. I can go fuck myself.
Yeah.
The gymnasiums. There was in the gymnasium where he's like, Rose, you were the most amazingly amazing woman I've ever met. They're in the gymnasium.
You're the goat.
Yeah, you're the goat. They're in the gymnasium. There's another scene earlier when they introduce it where Cal is on the rowing machine, and then Rose like punches the little punching bag, which I thought was, it's just a little scene. I liked how she punched it. I talked about how the Californian was true, and how the guy, he was like, hey, there's icebergs ahead. And he goes, shut up.
Yeah, shut it.
They filmed a scene of that for Titanic in this movie, but then they cut it out. Molly Brown takes over the boat. There's a scene where Molly Brown is sort of warring with the sailor, being like, we have to go back for them. And he goes, no, they'll suck us. They'll drag us in. We have to get away. And it's like her yelling. And it's just an extended thing of that. And she's like, come on, ladies, let's row. And they start rowing. Chief Baker Dugan, or Jugan, whoever it was. So this is a real guy. In A Night to Remember, there's a scene where the boat's sinking and the chief baker just goes in his room and gets hammered. He just starts pounding them, dude. And then the whole movie, he ends up just helping people. He's like throwing chairs overboard and shit. And he ends up going down with the ship. And he ends up getting on the same life raft that Light Toller was on, where I said it was one of the collapsibles that was overturned, and Light Toller was bouncing everybody, like leading everybody. That guy's a hero.
Yeah.
Chief Baker Dugan was also on that boat. He survived on that boat. And so he was a witness that was like, can attest to everything that went on. Also, he was drunk, so I don't know how, and everything started spinning. He was like, was that the boat or was that you? But and this is a thing I loved in the commentary that Cameron talked about, where he goes, I think we overplayed the suction that they were talking about with the Titanic went down, is going to suck you down.
Yeah.
He goes, I think we overplayed that. He goes, because if you look at the end when they're on the back of the poop deck as it's going straight down, Kate looks over at the baker Chief Baker, he's the guy in all white with the mustache, and he's taking a slug of whiskey in his flask. That's him. He's drunk. And in the background of the movie, you could see him helping people. Like I think Kate falls over at one point, and he helps her up, and he goes, "Oh, there you go, miss."
Yeah.
And he's like throwing chairs overboard. And when they went down, he goes, "This is it," and Jack and Rose go into the water, you could see him stand up next to them, and in real life, he like rode the Titanic out and stood and stepped off of it as it went into the water.
Wow.
And he didn't even get his hair wet.
That's crazy. Yeah, imagine.
I mentioned earlier. Remember, I said there was a scene that it was $1 million and they cut it out.
Mm-hmm.
So it was the Lovejoy chase. So in the movie, when Cal takes the gun, do you know about this?
Wait.
The deleted scene I'm about to say, because I saw you know. Okay.
No.
So Cal takes the gun and starts shooting them. And he goes, "I hope you enjoy your time together." And then he goes, "I put the diamond in the coat. I gave the coat to her." And then it cuts to just they give up on the diamond, right? And Jack and Rose are running through the halls and they see the little boy, the Italian boy, like, That kid acted that scene amazing, actually. If you think about it, remember the kid I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know.
But
The
in between those two scenes, there was like a 5-minute scene that they filmed where Lovejoy takes the gun from Cal and goes, "Get to a boat." And he goes into the water and puts another mag in the gun and starts chasing Kate and Leo through the dining room. The big dining room set. It was one of the biggest interior sets they had, and they flooded it. It cost $1 million to film, and they cut it out of the movie. So what it was is they're like hiding in the dining room. It was one of those scenes where, the villain has the gun, and he's walking around the room, and it's all quiet, and he's trying to find them. It's like supposed to be like the very suspenseful scene. It goes on for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's way too long, right? It's like it's one of those scenes where it's like, come out wherever you are, like that kind of thing.
Really...
Yeah, and that was the scene that the studio, nobody in the studio said like, "Oh, maybe we should cut that." Nobody even thought about cutting that. That was like a big set piece that everybody wanted in the movie, and people in the test screenings, they didn't buy it. They were like, the ship's already sinking. Like, how many guns? We already saw Cal shooting them with the gun. Yeah, sure, it's fine. But we're like, this goes on for way too long. It's 5 minutes, but it's cool because you get to see the whole set like actually flood.
Yeah.
And they cut it out, and the scores just went up. He's like, "Okay," because it was 5 minutes. He cut 2 minutes out of it, and the scores didn't change. And the audience was still not buying it. And they just cut it out completely, and then the scores went up. And that was the big. And that was David Warner as well, the guy who was in SOS Titanic.
Yeah, I mean, I get that makes sense to me. Even just the lead up to that, like I could feel myself being like, okay, this is a little much, because in your mind it's like the ship is sinking. There's so much going on. Is he really gonna spend this much time like shooting at them, chasing them?
Yeah.
Like I feel like I would be like, all right, forget it, I'm out of here.
Well,
Most people do when they try to help her, and she like punches the one guy. And he goes, "To hell with you!"
Hell with you.
Yeah, and he just gets the fuck out of there.
Well, you mentioned like you literally see, and Billy Zane sells it so well, where he shoots them, and then he realizes, he goes, "Oh shit, yeah, that's right, the boat's sinking."
Yeah,
and then he goes back up. Right? If that scene went on any longer, it would be like the Lovejoy thing, where you're like, "Oh my god, like yeah, the boat's sinking," right? But I think just one mag, and then he goes, "All right, see you later," and then he gives up.
Yeah,
I think that works. And also, if you look later in the movie, because how that scene ends is that Lovejoy goes to shoot Rose. He sees her and he goes, "Bye bye, hasta la vista, baby." I'm quoting Terminator 2. She was Terminator 2. He goes, "You'll know in 60 years." And then he goes to shoot her, and Leo like punches him, and they get in a fight, and Leo beats the fuck out of him, and then they leave, and he gets all bloody. And then later in the movie, when the ship's breaking in two, you see Lovejoy like right where it's breaking, and his head's all bloody. And that's from the deleted scene. But when you see it in the movie, you're like, "Oh yeah, he's just been on a sinking ship. He got fucked up."
Yeah, it doesn't matter at that point.
So that was interesting. After the boat sinks, there's a scene where Rose and Jack are on the door, and it's a really it's a scene that's like sort of not superfluous, but it adds a layer to the conflict in the situation, but like it's not necessary. Where Jack and Rose are on the door, and the guy walks over like he floats over, and he goes, "Any room on that door?" And Jack goes, "Get back," and he goes, "There's no room for you. Like she's on it." And he's like, "All right. Cheerio, thank you. I'll look elsewhere." Like it was like one of those things where he's like, the guy's dying and he's still proper. He's dying and he's like, "Oh, I understand. Yes, I'll go find another one." Like that kind of thing. I thought that was interesting. And want to talk about this deleted scene has a connection to when you went to the Titanic Museum. Do you want to bring that up?
Yeah. So when I went to the Titanic Museum, it's literally at the same spot where they embarked, or
Southampton,
no, from Ireland.
Belfast.
Belfast. It might have been, yeah. I
Mhm.
can't remember the exact.
It was built in Belfast, so it makes sense if it was there.
So it was where they left from Ireland, and you can literally stand on the dock where those people, like the last time they touched the land was that dock. But they give you a tour of like what it was like in the quarters and all different spots, and they give you a person. They assign you a person. And at the
Who was
end,
on the wreck?
Yeah, who was on like
on the ship, yeah.
And at the end you find out if you survived or not. And my person was a man who disguised himself as a woman and got on one of the ships. But then I think what happened with him was that they found out that he did that, and he just like his life was ruined when he got home. I think it was like a Japanese guy. And like even that wasn't like, when he got home, they were like, "Why didn't you go down with the ship? What's good with you?" And then I think the rumor was that he disguised himself as a woman, but I don't think there's actual proof of that actually happening.
Oh, okay.
But he was just like in that culture. They're expected, like the man, like, why are you a man and you survived? Like, what's wrong with you, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
that's relevant to this deleted scene because there's a deleted scene where the guy who played Mr. Fantastic, Ian Gruffold, he's the guy who's like, "Keep checking them. Isn't anybody alive out there?" They're all switching. He goes, "That's it. These women are going to go to this boat, and all the women on my boat are going to go to this boat, and we're going to make room for another boat." So as all the women are getting up, he checks one of them, and he pulls it back, and it's a guy. He's like, "Get over there, you piece of shit. I mean, you can dress however you want. I respect your gender identity, but you're a piece of shit for being a coward." Yeah. So he said that. That was actually true. He said that in 1912.
he said covered all his.
Yes. There was another extended sequence when they were boarding the Carpathia, where in the movie she opens her eyes in the boat and you just see the Carpathia, and then she's walking on there. But in the movie they show her like climbing on, and then they show like Bruce Ismay getting on, her mother getting on, Molly Brown getting on, and there's a scene that's like sort of focused on Bruce Ismay where it's like slow motion, and as he gets on the ship, everybody's just looking at him. Because they all know that he sort of did like a cowardly thing. Like, you're the owner. This is sort of, they didn't know it was his fault, but they're like, "You're the owner of the ship. You're a man. How are you here?"
Yeah.
And then he, in real life, he just went until he was like, "Is there any private quarters where I can go sit?" And they said, "Sure." And this sailor brought him down to this private quarters, and he just spent like a day and a half on the journey back to New York, just in a catatonic state, just going crazy.
Yeah, I
just
would
going
imagine.
nuts. Yeah. And then he lived the rest of his life as everybody hated him. The last deleted scene is the deleted ending. And you quoted it earlier. And so in the movie, of course, it goes to Bill Paxton at the end, and he's like, I never got Titanic, man. I was going to smoke this when I found the diamond, and he throws it away. And then Susie Amos, the granddaughter's like sort of smiles at him or whatever. And then it cuts to Rose, and she throws the thing overboard. But this was the original ending in all the test screenings, and they wasn't testing well. And he goes, "We needed to wrap this thing up." And the original ending was Bill Paxton is like sitting there, and then Susie Amos goes, "Hey, want to dance?" And you're like, "Oh shit, they're gonna get together." And then they have the whole dialogue about it. I didn't see it, man. Like, I didn't get Titanic, And then she goes, "Hey, well, maybe do this," and then they flirt again, and then they do a double take. She sees her grandmother, and she says, "Oh my God." And they see her, and they're like, "Rose, don't do it." She's about to throw it over, and then like Lewis and the other guy show up, like and then they're like, "Don't do it, Rose. Like, I need that diamond." And she's like, "You don't understand. It's all about love and giving and receiving." And he's like, "Okay, but just let me hold it."
Yeah,
and then
just grab that.
Yeah, and then she throws it in the ocean, and then what you said, Lewis goes, "That really sucked, lady." And then Bill Paxton just starts laughing and like run, the performance is fine, but it's just, I think it's just sort of a cheesy scene that I think they knew it didn't work.
Yeah.
And also people, it sucked. It's like, that's why it's not in the movie. And then they did a little reshoot where they did a reveal shot of her revealing the diamond in her hand. Also, they didn't go back on the Kelders to film that. They just put they just got like a little kiddie pool of water and put it beneath her hand and put a railing there.
Yeah.
And then they filmed a reaction shot of her looking at it and throwing it in. So, and I think it works way better. So one of the last things they had to do for post-production was the sound, of course. The picture's locked. and they went to Skywalker Sound, which is George. It's like a ranch with all these different housing units where they have the world's biggest soundboards. I think I don't know if they still are, but they're probably the world's best sound studio. I don't know much about it, but Cameron went there to do Titanic, and the people who worked there, the engineers, they were like, "How did you like working with Cameron?" And they're like, "He was tough." And they go, "How tough?" And they go, "He's tough in ways that would compromise our professionalism if we talked about it."
Oh, okay.
And what I think it might have been sort of a thing. I don't know if he was a dick to them, but he had a workload that they weren't ready to handle. Where it was sort of like what we talked about with the cinematographer that they had for the Halifax scenes, the present day scenes in Titanic, where originally they had Caleb Deschanel as the cinematographer, and Caleb Deschanel was like, "Let me do my work." I'm the cinematographer. I want to choose where the camera goes, and I want to do the lighting. And Cameron was like, "No, put the fucking camera here, and then make the lighting this, and wrap some light around his ear or whatever." And so it might have been something similar like that, where they're not used to a director coming in and just being so hands on. Or he was just a dick. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Yeah, or like them saying it's compromising. Like you never want to say, if you're in that kind of business, you never want to say like we couldn't handle that workload.
Yeah.
Like if we said like, yeah, he brought in too much stuff for us to do, we couldn't handle it. That would be, you don't want to work with someone who's saying that.
But so Cameron, he brought his computer with the Avid on it. They say he brought his Avid. I guess it's a computer. It's on a Mac computer, the software, the Avid, the editing software we talked about. But so I guess he brought a computer with that software on it to the Skywalker Sound while he was staying there. And so at one point they were editing with the sound, and he pushed the editing bay that they had. It was the biggest. What was it? It was the biggest sound editing bay in the world at the time. And they pushed it so far that the thing crashed.
That's correct.
And then they restarted it, and it crashed again, to the point where they had to call experts. Like they had to fly in experts, and they came and like, "Yeah, we're gonna have to reset it." And Cameron goes, "How long is that gonna take?" And they go, "Probably like 30 minutes." And without saying anything, he just like jogs out of the room, like leaps up the stairs like 3 steps at a time, and then goes into his room on the Avid and starts re-editing the movie. The picture's locked, and he's switching in. Like even if the picture's locked, you can still switch out shots. Like let's say that he has 14 frames of the drawing, he can put 14 frames of another drawing in, but no more or less than 14 frames. You know what I mean? So he goes up there and just starts, changing those drawings around and shit. And then from the entire post-production and probably the entire production, Cameron had one day off, and that was July, I think, 26th. And that was his only day off to marry Linda Hamilton.
That's
because they were supposed to get married when the movie released July 4th, but of course it got pushed to December, and he was like, "Well, let's get married," and so it was July 26th.
I never understand like how, like someone in that line of work, when you're gone that much, how do you maintain a relationship?
I think the director, like being a director, has the highest divorce rates in the country.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure that's true.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're just never home. Once you're in a movie like that, that's your life. You are that thing. Yeah. So it's kind of a.
I mean, he's been married 5 times.
All right.
We didn't get to it on the last podcast. I'm not trying to stick my nose in business that's not mine, but this is true and it's film history now. So get over it. He was married before in late 70s, early 80s, before he was a director. And he had like a white picket fence and a house, and he was like a normal guy, just a truck driver. And then he goes on Howard Stern, he goes, "Yeah, that marriage didn't really turn out well when I said, honey, I need to borrow the car, the Visa card. I need to buy some lumber to build a set." And she was like, "I'm out of here." And then of course he met Gail Ann Hurd for Terminator, and she produced that, and she also produced Aliens with him and The Abyss. They were married, I think around Aliens maybe. And then he divorced her around the time of The Abyss, and then after that, from like 89 to 91, 92, he married Catherine Bigelow, who directed Strange Days. She also won Best Director and her movie won Best Picture in 2009 for The Hurt Locker. And of course, Avatar was up for the Oscars that year. And also, after they were divorced and not married, Cameron was still helping on Strange Days. Like Strange Days came out in 95 while he was married to Linda Hamilton, And then in 2009, it was Avatar and Hurt Locker were like the 2 favorites to win Best Picture. and people were saying like, what do you think? What do you want to happen, Jim? And he goes, best case scenario for me is that Catherine wins Best Director and Avatar wins Best Picture, because of course I wanted her to win, and I just want my team to win for Best Picture. Like if I win for Best Director, it's like I win again, okay, but I just want my team to win. But then Hurt Locker won. I thought that was a very good answer, but Hurt Locker won both times.
Yeah.
And then after he divorced Bigelow, he started dating Linda Hamilton, married her in 97, of course, and then they got divorced like 98, 99 somewhere, and then he married Susie Amos, who plays the granddaughter, Rose's granddaughter in this movie, and they've been married ever since.
Okay.
Not that it's any of my business.
Yeah.
Sorry, James Cameron.
Air it out.
But you're a historical figure now, so it's up for grabs.
Yeah. Sorry, James Cameron, when you 100% watch this whole episode. And
I'm sorry you keep
back to
marrying
us.
hot ladies.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry, poor guy.
The release of Titanic. On November 1st, 1997, Titanic's world premiere was held at the Tokyo International Film Festival, where Cameron and his team were relieved to get a glowing reception from the audience.
So I got to bring this up because it's important. So the author of this book, The Making of Titanic, and James Cameron, Paula Parisi, in the book, I'm reading it. It's like page, like let's say 170, and she goes, and on the plane ride to Tokyo for the premiere at the festival, Cameron was reading these articles about Titanic, and he read one called "Glub Glub Glub, Will James Cameron's Titanic like sink or swim" or something like that, and it was by Paula Parisi. Like she's typing her own name, like by Paula. She didn't say by me. She just goes by Paula Parisi, and he reads it, and he was furious because it mentioned, like all his. She said it made his blood boil. It mentioned the $1 million scene that was cut, the PCP. Yeah. It was like it was mentioning all the sensationalist stuff behind the production rather than but it's been good getting good tests. Like he was like so pissed about it, and she also wrote. Also James Cameron was always very nice to me. We're like friends now. I was on the production. I was visiting the set a lot, and she goes, like I interviewed him for something, and I said, "What's your next movie?" Like trying to get a scoop or something, and he goes, "Oh, I can't really tell you, or I don't know yet, but when I do, you'll be the first person I call." And then she goes, like fast forward 2 years later, and I get a call from him, and she goes, "Hey," he goes, "Hey Paula, it's James Cameron. I'm on a satellite phone in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on the set of my new movie Titanic." And she was like, "Hey, he fucking stayed true to his word. He called me." So that was pretty interesting. But Cameron's speech at the premiere. So Tokyo, he goes to Tokyo, and I don't know why they chose Tokyo Film Festival.
Yeah, I was gonna say
because it's not the biggest festival, but maybe they wanted. Because I know that Paramount, had the domestic rights, so maybe they wanted to have a worldwide. Fox, if they had the choice of the premiere. Me and Danny accidentally touched shoes.
I'm going over.
Maybe if Fox wanted to maintain control over the release, they're like, "Oh, well, let's make this a worldwide thing or an international thing rather than a U.S. thing, so we can get more money." Even though Paramount put less money into it, you know what I mean? But he goes to the premiere, and they're all Japanese. It's a Japanese crowd for the most part. There's some like a lot of like U.S. based. Like magazines and shit, like send reporters out there like, fuck, we have to go to Japan now to review this movie. Yeah. So they can get like the scoop on it. And the whole crowd was like, "Leo, oh my God, Leo DiCaprio." And it was him and James Cameron. And James Cameron gets up, he goes, "I know you're not here to see me.
Yeah.
I'll let Leo talk in a second." He goes, "But there's 2,500 people in this screening right now, which is almost, which is a little bit more than how many people were on the Titanic. So like, I just wanted to do like a moment of silence or something like that." And they did a moment of silence, and they started the movie, and they got glowing reviews.
All right. On December 19th, 1997, Titanic was finally released in theaters. It received great reviews from critics and an A+ cinema score from audiences. It opened at number 1 with a weekend of $28 million.
So it beat Pierce Brosnan, James Bond, Tomorrow Never Dies. That's the one where he's like hang gliding on the giant wave. And I think that was the James. No, that was. What was the one in 2002? Oh, that's Die Another Day. I might have been getting them confused. 2002, there was another James Bond, but this is 1998. I think Tomorrow Never Dies when he's in the tank and he like adjusts his tie when he shoots through it like a wall with a tank. I don't know. I forget. But anyway, the studio expectations financially, they were like, we were expecting like $400 million by the time when we knew the movie was good. we were expecting 400 million, and we're like, okay, we're not going to break even theatrically, but you know, we have the VHS market, we have home video, we can make them a lot of money on. We have TV rights, we'll probably make money eventually on it. So they were like, I can't believe we got out of that alive, right? And then it opened number one, and it stayed at number one until April. The last weekend, it was like March 27th to 29th was its last weekend at number one. So it's basically like 3.5 months, which is super impressive. This doesn't really happen ever. And and he was talking about in an interview when the movie came out, or like maybe a few years after, and he goes, one of the laws of gravity, one of the laws in movies is if your movie opens, let's say it opens at 50 million, it's going to go down the second weekend. Like, the law of gravity, it's like a law of gravity. It never goes up. Yeah. But then the second week it came and we went up. Well, yeah. And then we went up again. And I think up until Valentine's Day, they went up. From like 30 to like 36 million, from 28 to 36 million. So, adjusted for inflation, so the movie's $200 million budget, and it ended up making 1.8 million worldwide. It was the first movie to break $1 billion. And it didn't just break $1 billion by like $2. Yeah. Did it by fucking another 800 million. And 600 of that was domestic, and so 1.2 of it was worldwide or international. But if you adjust that for inflation, it would be, if Titanic came out today, it would be a $393 million budget that made $3.5 billion worldwide, which is never going to happen anymore. Yeah. I saw Gone with the Wind. I was trying to, because I think this is like, if there's anything that you can compare Titanic to, it's Gone with the Wind. And that was what, 1939? And I looked up, that movie made according to Box Office Pro, it made 200 million domestically and another 200 million worldwide. I don't know how they got the worldwide numbers, especially in 1939, but I'm skeptical of the worldwide number, but let's say it made 400 million worldwide in 1939. It's fucking like $9 billion. Yeah. I don't know. That cannot be true if you adjust for inflation, right? Yeah. I'll just give it 200 million. Let's say it just definitely made 200 million total, not 400 million. It still made 4.5. So, and also like, people say like, oh, why don't people go to the movies? And also that was when there was like 50 million people in America. Now there's like 300 million and movies aren't making that much. Of course, it was because movies were like sort of still in the new thing. There was no air conditioning, so people were like, oh, I'll go to some air-conditioned movie theater right now. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. There's a lot more excuses to go to a movie theater back then than there were today. Definitely. So you can't really compare just based off inflation. There's a lot of other variables. Teenage girls was probably the most famous demographic of this movie because they just kept going back and back and back. And they would have parties where it would like sleepover parties where they would just play the music from Titanic and cry together. Yeah. And that's a big, this is a big cultural moment.
That was just the girls doing that. Like we don't. Yeah, I definitely didn't. We're not going to do that after this podcast.
No way, dude. But all the demographics, it wasn't just teenage girls. It was all demographics. Like guys like us were going. Moms and dads were going. Grandparents were going. And because all of them it was like the most 4-quadrant movie of all time. It was like a 6-quadrant movie. But also I mentioned Cameron's back end deal and how that would come up again. So in the interview James Cameron did a great interview with Howard Stern where it was just a really fun conversation. It wasn't the most educational conversation, but it was just very funny. I just thought it was enamoring. And my dad showed me the clip originally, where it was Cameron talking about how he won't make money from Titanic. It was like a 2-minute clip, and then I found the 30-minute one. I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. And in that, he goes, I make no money from this movie. And I go, what do you mean? It was before the movie came out. And he goes, I make no money from this movie. I'm like, what are you talking about? You're the director. And he goes, I gave up my back-end deal. But so he vocally gave his back-end deal to Bill Mechanic, but I don't think it was ever written down legally. Nobody signed anything. Yeah. So legally, he still had the rights to the back-end deal, which he ended up getting. I think after probably it made like its first $1 billion, he was like, hey, guys, you actually...
Give me that.
Yeah, I never gave it to you. I just said I would, and you've rejected the offer. So let's say if he made... Because we mentioned earlier, if the movie made $400 million, he would get $10 to $20 million. So, so 4 times... let's say 4.5 times that is 1.8. 4.5 times 400 million is 1.8. So then let's say if he made 15 million, he would have made $60 million. from the gross of the movie. If he was let's say he would have gotten 20 million for 400, then he would have gotten 80 million, or above 80 million. It would have been more, like 85 million, 65 million, let's say, right? So somewhere between 50 and 85 million that he probably got from the movie, and maybe more.
Mm-hmm. On March 23rd, 1998, at the Academy Awards, Titanic went on to win 11 Oscars after being nominated for 14. However, Cameron's acceptance speech for Best Directing would be a speech that would live in infamy.
So, we said it was nominated for 14, and it won 11. So by winning 11, it tied Ben-Hur for the most Oscar wins.
Mm-hmm.
Lord of the Rings, was it The Return of the King or Two Towers, would later tie the record in 2002 or 3. But that hadn't happened yet, of course. And then La La Land, or the most nominations, 14. Titanic tied All About Eve with most nominations, and then also La La Land later got also 14 in 2016. But this is a list of what it won, of what Titanic won at the Oscars. It won Best Film Editing, Best Visual Effects, Best Sound Effects Editing, Best Cinematography, Best Sound, Best Art Direction, Best Costume Design, Best Original Dramatic Score, Best Original Song, Best Director, Best Picture. I thought he won a screenplay credit, but apparently he didn't. I guess Good Will Hunting maybe won. So he goes up there for the director, and he makes like a nice speech. He goes, I have so many people to thank, but a lot of them have either won or been nominated for awards tonight, so I think they're covered. And then he goes, I want to thank this person. And then he goes, I think, I'm so jubilant and excited right now. I guess the only thing to say is that I'm the king of the world. Woo! And like the audience like claps. And then Warren Beatty presented it. And so Cameron leaves, and Warren Beatty escorts him off stage and like passes him on the back. And they get backstage, and Warren Beatty goes, what the fuck were you thinking? Why would you do that? Because I see that and I'm like, oh, he's quoting the movie. He just, he's using like a fun quote to tell that he's excited. But I guess other people thought it was cringe. That he was going like, woo! And we're thinking it was more of like a narcissistic, like, I'm the king of the world.
Yeah,
baby.
yeah.
Which is like, obviously it's not. It was weird. Like it was controversial. Controversial. Like it was, cringe. It wasn't It wasn't like a political statement or anything like. So it wasn't controversial, but it was sort of like, some people didn't like it.
Yeah.
Which I don't really understand. So we're almost at overall thoughts. So I have 2 more bullet points. Obviously Titanic's legacy. Everybody knows how big of a movie it is. I have a lot of nostalgia for it because I sort of became sentient and conscious around like 2004. That was the first time I remembered what the year was 2004.
Okay.
And I remember, I don't know how old I was when I started watching this movie, but I think I got a lot of its impact from a lot of the impact of the 90s culture I got from my older sisters or my older siblings because, I just watched what they watched and I would listen to their conversation. And we would always watch, movies like Titanic or something. I would always watch Spider-Man by myself, but sometimes they would watch Titanic and I would watch it. I remember seeing it multiple times. I don't remember an instance where I sat down and watched it once, but I remember every scene.
Yeah.
And I remember my reactions to every scene. And, I remember we were watching King Kong once, and it was very formative years where I'm like, oh my God. And when you're a kid like that, everything.
The Jack Black one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when you're a kid like that, like everything hits so hard because it's the first time you're experiencing anything like that. Like it's the first time I'm experiencing death is watching Titanic, right? Anyway, so it has a big, long-lasting legacy, and that kind of moment of like lightning that is struck in culture, I have a nostalgia for, even though I wasn't even alive, because it was still around when I was growing up, and I think it still is to a certain. It's like the same electricity that Barbenheimer captured. I think Barbenheimer probably captured it on a less of a scale than Titanic, because Titanic was like the dominant thing in culture for years, probably. Yeah. And Barbenheimer, culture's moving faster these days, so that was more like a couple months. But one of the first things I remember about Titanic, I could not find it. If you know what I'm talking about, also if you're still listening, thank you for listening, and we're glad you're enjoying it.
Oh yeah.
This is about to get good. What do you call it? But one of the first times I remember, because I remember the ending to Titanic that she throws the diamond in there. And I remember we were watching the skit, and I asked my parents, like, was it Mad TV? Was it SNL? And they're like, maybe it was Second City. I'm like, no, I couldn't find anything on it. It's like a skit where she, Rose goes out there, and she goes, oh, I got to let go, Jack, or whatever she says. And then she throws the diamond in the water, And then she sits there a moment and goes, damn, and then jumps in after it. And I cannot find it. If you know what I'm talking about, please let me know. I saw another SNL skit. It was with Bill Paxton because I guess he had a movie coming out 2 years after Titanic. So he hosted and he plays Brock Lovett in the scene. And Rose is like, and that's how I lost Jack or whatever. And Louis Abernathy, the guy who's playing Louis Abernathy, goes, listen, lady, that's a terrible story. And they start doubting that she's lying. Or that she's telling the truth, and they all think she's lying. Even the grandmother just starts, or the granddaughter starts slapping Rose.
Yeah.
And they just start beating the shit out of Rose. And it's not the funniest skit in the world, right? But and it ends with just them beating the crap out of Rose, and then it cuts to James Cameron in an editing bay, and he goes, "Hey, what you just saw was the original ending for Titanic, and of course, we had to cut it out of the movie." But one of the reasons we we originally, filmed it for the movie is because we thought it would be very, very funny to watch an old lady get beaten up. And then he says something like, "But Jim Cameron out," and then it stays on him. And you're like, "What's he doing?" He goes, "Oh, thank you." And he takes out a cigar and he puts it in, and then he takes a burning $100 bill and lights the cigar with the $100 because he's loaded now. And then Avatar came out, and he got 3 times as loaded probably. Okay, before we get into overall thoughts, we talked about how. The sponsor, Amber and Key, they're inspired by the cinema of the VHS era.
Yes.
Fucking Titanic is right in the middle of the VHS era. My sister was born in 2006, and I almost had a heart attack one time because I said, I go, Julie, you've seen that movie. We had a VHS of it. And she goes, what's a VHS? And I went, but this Titanic VHS, I think you found and you got me, right?
Oh, yeah. That is the one.
It's fucking pristine condition. This thing is older than us.
Oh, yeah, that's
this is 1998.
Wild.
I mean, I was born. We were both born.
I bought that for 50 cents at a.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
it's perfect. It's never been used. You can tell actually, because with VHSs, you can tell if they've been used because if you look at this one VHS was disc 2 or disc. Need VHS. Tape,
right.
Tape 2. So if you look in tape 2, all the tape is on the left side of the
not even
thing. So people. Well, they watched it.
I know.
And then they never rewound it. But if you look at the cassette 1, look at this.
Oh, there's
it says, get the Titanic video cassette you just purchased free when you switch to Sprint on Sense Day, long distance.
No.
I'm going to show this to the camera. Here, hold my mic.
That's wild.
This is what the original logo looked like.
This is what the original logo looked like for
Sprint.
For Sprint.
I just thought it was a crazy artifact of movie history.
Yeah.
It was such a strange collaboration, but also it's perfect condition. There's not a scratch on these tapes.
This isn't even
opened.
opened.
It's not opened.
Don't open it.
I'm not going to open it. But yeah, I'm going to cut me cleaning this up.
That's okay. It's kind of wild that I bought that at.
What if that was a crazy find?
I remember when I found those, it was with Goodfellas and I have to give you those ones too.
Also, you know what's crazy? Because obviously there's 2 tapes because it's 3 hours long. Even for this this collector's edition DVD that came out in 2005, which this is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Even the DVD is 2 parts. It ends and it goes stick in disc 2 to watch the rest of the movie. Mm-hmm. But I get such a nostalgia when I look at this because I just think about the time and obviously it had a big impact on me. And I didn't even know until recently. So overall thoughts, and then I'll just say this really quick, and then I'll let you. I'll finally let you
speak.
Talk. So, I watched this when I was little all the time, and since I was little, I think I did see it as a chick flick, where I'm like, oh, it's a romance movie. I want to watch Spider-Man, that kind of thing. But I remember watching it, and I wasn't. I realize now, because I watched this for the first time really as an adult in 2022, and I watched all of James Cameron's movies. And then I rewatched all of his movies for the podcast we did, but I didn't watch Titanic because I was like, I can't with that movie because I cried the whole time when I watched it in 2022, and I'm like, holy, I didn't know this is one of the best movies of all time. And when I think about the movie now, I had this whole movie in my head, and it made such an impression on me when I was little, and I didn't even realize because I just watched it when I was little, and I was learning so much about human behavior and actions and. These dramatic moments these people went through, and I don't want to say they scarred me, but I remembered all these scenes so vividly, and then I kind of just didn't think about them for let's say 14 years, or 15, and then I watched the movie. I go, oh my god, because I remember watching this. I remember when the one thing I remembered about it most is when the guy jumps off the poop deck of the thing and he hits the propeller and he does like a cartwheel.
Yeah,
I used to laugh so much at that. But then the rest of the movie, even when I was little, I would see the final shot going, I don't fucking care. Like I would be embarrassed that I was crying at the movie when I was little because I was like, I want to watch Spider-Man. But I remember looking like when the kids, because this is the first time I was seeing life and death situations. Like Spider-Man, it's life and death, but it's like, cartoonish. But this, I was like, oh my God. I remember the guys running out of the boiler room and the one guy gets trapped in there. I'm like, what happens to that guy? And they're like, he's stuck in there. And I feel like I learned a tremendous amount of what it's like to be a human being when I was very young watching this movie. Mm-hmm. I have a great nostalgia for it. And I didn't realize how much of a fan I was of this movie. I'm so about fucking Titanic, dude. I love it so much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I didn't know you were. No,
I didn't know until I rewatched it.
Yeah. Mm. That's like the big thing about what we're doing with this is, for me, going back and really watching these movies, because I feel like I say this probably every time, but I watched Titanic when I was younger, definitely, probably piece by piece, because the way my dad would flip through TV, he'd watch 15 minutes of something, switch. So I probably had watched it piece by piece throughout the years. Maybe not the whole thing, but then, I mean, we did the full James Cameron podcast like 10 months ago, and I got into this. And obviously, like, it's different because I'm watching all the movies, so I didn't get as emotionally attached. But this last time, dude, it's like I was crying at when she first sees because it hits me now. Like, obviously, that's a scene where if you're watching it the first time, you're like, oh, I wonder why she's reacting this way. But seeing her reaction to that the first time, like, I'm like, what the fuck is happening? Why? Yeah. Like, why is it already happening? And then, obviously, the scene we talked about before where the musicians come back and play, I'm just, like, sitting there, like, in full tears. Just, I don't know. It was weird. I don't know why. Like you said before, where James Cameron was like, people are more romantic at this time of year. I feel like
that's true. We did watch it like January. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I watched it at this time of year, and I'm like feeling more emotional, I feel like. But I don't know.
That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I like, it's weird how the more I researched this movie, the more my consciousness went back to just when I was a kid. I'm sorry to bring up me being a kid again, but I can't emphasize how much enough that it was like such a learning experience. Like I remember at the end when Rose, and also I'm crying and I don't want anybody to know. Like I actively remember holding back tears and being like, it's not fucking that sad.
Yeah, it's not that sad.
And I'm like, but when the final shot where Jack turns around, and I remember asking my mom, I'm like, wait, what is this? And my mom goes, she's in heaven, and I'm getting choked up about thinking about it right now.
Yeah.
And she goes, she's in heaven, I'm like, why is she young? And she's like, because you look young when you're in heaven. And I'm like, I'm figuring out this stuff. Like, I'm figuring out what heaven is for the first time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I get emotional, like, just watching that scene. I guess it's like more of a personal thing for me, but I have such a nostalgia for it, even though I didn't really grow up watching it. I mean, I don't know. I can't, it's a sort of like a somber sense of nostalgia that you get, like, thinking about, like, like just growing up when you're young, that I can't really put my finger on, which is why I'll continue to other things. But we talked about, now that I'm interpreting this movie as an adult, there's a lot more stuff that I can see, past the experiential, and emotional layers of the movie where I'm looking at it like thematically. And this is something that we brought up in the James Cameron episode, so I'll get through. I won't try to spend too much time on it here, but basically, James Cameron, I saw an interview with him where he talked about this, and it kind of illuminated another aspect of the movie for me that I really appreciated. And James Cameron was talking about how he goes, we talk about all his movies, like, dealt with the apocalypse, like the Terminator, like, there's a future apocalypse coming, bro, you better stop it. Terminator 2, of course, the whole thing is about Judgment Day and the apocalypse coming. Even The Abyss is about a nuclear, impending nuclear war and tensions between, the U.S. and Russia, more so in the director's cut than the, theatrical cut. I prefer the theatrical cut of The Abyss. And, Aliens has a nuke, but it's not really about the end of the world, I guess. I'm sure there's some interpretations that, one can say it is. And then True Lies, we talked about how, because the Soviet Union collapsed in 1981, the Cold War's over, his movies are all about nuclear war because the fucking Cold War was going on.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how does he pivot? We talked about this where he sort of was half successful in pivoting to a new existential threat in True Lies, where it was like, yeah, it's like instead of nukes, but it's like terrorists with nukes. And I'm not going to pretend like I understand the scaffolding of that sociological idea of like, well, like there was WMDs in Iraq, but that was fake, but that was a cultural moment. And stuff. I don't know. I'm not going to, but it wasn't, the True Lies wasn't a completely successful existential threat movie as well as his other movies were, right? Am I being clear on that?
Yeah.
And we talked about how the global consciousness, the global consciousness anxiety that was preoccupying everybody's brains was no longer nuclear war. It actually turned to like climate related stuff. James Cameron pivoted to the climate thing in Avatar, and the Avatar movies are focusing on that as like the apocalyptic idea, let's say. But in the middle of that, he had True Lies, and then in Titanic, he still had to do an apocalyptic movie, but he didn't have climate change or nukes to do it with, right? So he just took a more general approach and said, if the end of the world does happen, it's not going to be a dramatic big bang like a nuclear, war. It's not going to be, this climate or weather, disaster. But he said it's not going to be a climactic moment. It's going to be, it's going to happen because of a banality at the end of the world. It's going to be because of a small human oversight or like some, human arrogance or overconfidence where it's going to be this little thing and then just slowly, it's just a slow burn, rollout of the end of the world. And you see that in Titanic. In Titanic, you could say that Titanic is the Earth and is human civilization. And it is, it is in a metaphor, but also, I guess, symbolically, or it's a microcosm for the Earth, because you have the boiler room, right? And there's guys like chucking coal in the engines and shit, and you say that, okay, these are the guys who are working at like the bottom of the production chain, where like they're just making electricity and fueling civilization. They're fueling civilization, the whole fucking ship. Yeah. And they're just out there in the boiler working hard, trying to keep the machine going. That's like coal miners and or whatever. And then you have the third class, which is like let's say the lower class, the poor people, and then you have in the bottom of the ship, and then you have the middle class, which is the second class, and then you have the first class, the people who are in high society, whatever. You see the classes of human civilization stratified on the decks of the ship,
literally laid out in front of you.
And then you have this fucking overlook or oversight where there's a small leak in the ship, and it just one by one the ship starts to sink. And I think when doomsday preppers picture the end of the world and how that's going to play out, like sociologically or mechanically, how people are going to panic, I think that Titanic, it probably shows a microcosm of that, like perfectly, right? People are just scrambling. They're trying to get to the end of the boat, trying to survive for as long as possible. It's the most dramatic moment of all time. It's so good. And in the same way, and he also constantly, Cameron, switches to like wide shots in the to show like how alone they are in the ocean. And I said this in the last podcast, and I got a fist bump for it. But in the same way that that Titanic is just this one ship that seems big, but in the scope of the ocean is very small, and how it's just fucking stuck in the ocean. And if it starts to sink, humans have nowhere to go and they're trapped. Yeah, it's the same way to show how if Earth. Goes. Earth is a big thing to us, but it's a small thing in the ocean of stars that we're flying through, Definitely. And that if that thing goes wrong, we have nowhere to go. You understand? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think. Sorry to interrupt a little bit. Even just the thought of like the way that it takes them a little while to really grasp the scenario that they're in. Like there's people, the guy is literally staying, like the ship's going down, and the guy's like, this ship's unsinkable. What are you talking about?
Yes. If they go through all...
There's still people,
yes.
And they're standing on the deck, or like, I always find it, one thing I always pay attention to is like the goofy nature of like everybody standing in the stairwell, and they're all like chit-chatting, they have their life vests on, and they're like probably making fun of it, and then who's the guy who plays the ship creator or
master shipbuilder? Thomas Andrews, Victor Garber,
and he's like walking through.
Thomas Andrews was the character, the real life guy. Yeah.
He's just walking through stunned while everybody's just kind of chit chatting. It's like you're talking about the end of the world. Like if something really does start to happen, there's gonna still there'll be clear evidence of something happening, and there'll still be people like kind of on the fence,
Right.
or like just thinking, it's not real.
It's like if COVID became the big thing that ended us, it's like people would be having dinner while on the TV. They're going, there's 2,000 cases, 100,000 cases, 50,000,
Yeah.
whatever. Like that, where the numbers just keep, even though 100,000 is more than 50,000, but the numbers keep climbing on the TV in the background. It's like sort of the same thing where the fucking ship is getting sunk and the compartments are getting filled with water. These people are still like, I'd like a hot glass of tea when I get back to my room, like that kind of thing. That's a good point.
Yeah.
But it's just, I think, but also it's like I said before, it's the ultimate dramatic, like, and you can't credit James Cameron for like coming up with this idea for like, oh, it's a sinking boat, it's perfect, right? But you can credit him for the only fictional part of the movie, which is Jack and Rose, or let's say the only fictional characters, mostly Jack and Rose. I guess Cal and Lovejoy aren't real and shit like that. But he goes, if I'm going to set this romance, like, how do I make this like the biggest? How do I make this conflict as intense as I can? And he goes, well, if you look at the people who were going to survive, right, the highest demographic to survive, the demographic with the best odds to survive were first-class women. They had a 9 in 10 chance of surviving. First-class men had a 50% chance of surviving. Third-class women had a 50% chance of surviving. Third-class men had a 1 in 10 chance of surviving. So Jack's odds were the reverse of Rose's odds. She was definitely going to live. He's definitely going to die. And that's the ultimate. It's the ultimate dramatic situation, and it's fucking heartbreaking. The whole movie. I can't. I'm sorry I keep bringing this up, but I learned so much about just human being. Like, I remember when, everybody's getting on the lifeboat, and I'm so young. I'm like 5 years old, and everybody's getting on the lifeboat, and the two girls and the mom get on the lifeboat, and she goes, Daddy, you're not coming with us. And she's like, I'll get you on the next boat. And she's like, but we're saying goodbye. He goes, it's only goodbye for a little while, just a little while. And I remember being like, wait, what is? And I remember figuring out like, oh, he's gonna die. Yeah. And it's the first time that concept, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I just
and like seeing that moment, like the last moments a daughter has with her father, that kind of thing, where it's like, you kind of get the sense that the daughter even understands the gravity of the situation. At least one of them does, because she's crying, and it's like, just I think that's one of the things that hits me is like that, like thinking about the moment of the people on the ship in real life, like the moment they said, "I'll see you on the boat," and then they never saw their like husband again or something.
Right.
Like that just kills me to think about.
I think one of the reasons I have such an introspective feeling about it is probably because like with every movie to a certain extent, like if it's a comic book movie, you fucking imagine yourself as Captain America and like beating people up in front of a bunch of ladies because that's cool. And you're like, fuck yeah, dude.
That's just you. You
that's just
want me. That to happen so bad.
But so when you watch a movie, you always insert yourself in the movie and go, what would I do? But I think Titanic, it's a great movie that shows you that shows you like all the pathways of ethics and instinct and morals and stuff, and it basically allows you to walk through those aisles and go, oh, what would I do in that situation? More so than any other movie, where I can put myself in those people's positions, more so than I do watching another movie, for example. And that's the best way I can describe it.
I get that.
And
I feel like it also does shine a light on what the right thing to do is in a situation like that.
Right.
Like by juxtaposing Jack with Cal, Jack and Rose, they just save the kid, and then he goes up and he like looks at the kid and he's like, ugh. And he just and the kid's crying in the corner, but then the only time he saves the kid, but only because he knows it'll get him on a ship.
He only acknowledges that kid. He only doesn't even empathize. He only acknowledges that kid is alone when he realizes that he can use the kid to get on board the ship.
He used that kid as like an object.
Yeah, he doesn't give a fuck. I do, and we're talking about like what would I do in that situation. It also shows you. It's such a genius thing because in the first half, it's all these people like posturing like, oh, this is who I'm a good gentleman and stuff like that. And then you see just like sort of the, the constraints of like, the accepted behaviors just kind of break down and it's a free for all.
Yeah.
And then you get to see who these people really are. Because there's that whole screenwriting thing. It's like, you have to show, characters express who they are through their actions, not their words.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, of course that's true. But in this, it's like, yes, of course. It's the whole movie, everybody's talking. And then in the last half, it's action time, baby.
Mm-hmm.
And you see who people are. You see cowards. You see heroes. You see confused people like Captain Smith. Conflicted people like Captain Smith.
Yeah.
You see heroes like Jack, in women who don't want to leave their husbands behind or their lovers behind, like Rose. And I think this might be a dumb thing to say, but I feel like it covers such a spectrum of human behavior just in this one little ship.
Yeah.
I can't emphasize enough how much I fucking love this movie, dude.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think that's genius. And also, there one of the parts of this movie that makes it so dramatic is we might have talked about this before, but Alfred Hitchcock, there's a popular like theory, I guess, or idea that he was like one of the first people to articulate, and it was his bomb theory. And he talked about how he goes, if I show a 2-minute conversation, it's like the best dialogue in the world, right? And at the end of the 2-minute conversation, there's a bomb blows up under the table, and it shocks the audience. Is shocked, and oh my god! And then 10 seconds later, the audience is looking for a new thing. They're bored now, right? But he goes, but if I take the same exact scene and I just show a shot of the bomb ticking under the table, now I have the audience for 2 minutes rather than 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. And Titanic is essentially that whole idea as a whole movie,
thing, yeah.
where in the beginning they show, because obviously the Titanic sunk when you're going into it, but then in the beginning they show you, this is how the Titanic sank. It shows you that the ship sinking, going, and it's basically saying this is the bomb under the table, and this is going to explode at the end, but we're going to make you watch. And it's like
it makes you have that moment of even when they're just entering the ship where you're like, no. Oh.
Yes,
we're about to miss the ship and they just get on. You're like, oh.
And he goes, we're the luckiest sons of bitches in the world. But and that's the genius thing the movie does. But it also makes you happy that you're on the Titanic, like with seeing the dolphins. It lets you experience, because it would have been dumb. I don't know. It would have been wrong or a missed opportunity to like see Jack and get on the ship and see the dolphins, and every time something happy happens, right? To be like, to have this foreboding music like no, right? But they show you how the characters feel, and it juxtaposes with the ending so well. But also, a few days ago I watched the movie again, and then I listened to the Titanic. Don Lynch and Ken Marshall were historical experts on the movie. Don Lynch was an author who wrote a lot of books that Cameron read for research. Ken Marshall also is a historian. He also drew paintings, or painted paintings, and a lot of those paintings Cameron put right in, like the composition that he put right in the movie. Like Ken Marshall has a painting of the lifeboats getting saved by the Carpathia. It's the same exact thing that Cameron shot in the movie. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so I listened to the commentary. That was it was just them talking, and then I watched the commentary with James Cameron, and then I watched the cast and crew commentary. But today, I watched it again, and at the beginning, I had this, not an epiphany, but I noticed something that I never really considered before, where it's like, and it made me extra sad to see this, is because if somebody gets on a boat today, you're going to FaceTime them in 2 hours, and you can call them, and you're going to see them again in a week, because cruises now are just a week, you go in a circle, you don't even go anywhere. If you like cruises, that's fine, I don't care. But these people, you have to understand, they were waving goodbye to these people, not knowing when they were going to see them again. Yeah. And their only contact would be like, some letters or telegrams. And they had one picture of them. She didn't have a picture of Jack. Yeah. She'd go home and her phone would get, ruined, but all the photos would be on the fucking cloud. Yeah, all she had to do was like... which is like, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not saying like, oh, today you could just take a picture of anybody. It's like, no, but it's just an extra, when you empathize with these people, it's just, I can't get over, I have the Titanic fever. The same way that people went to this movie and like, because it's a rare movie when you see it and it just really sticks with you. It doesn't stick in your brain, it sticks in your chest. And you're like, I cannot shake the feeling of this movie. When I saw Marriage Story in 2019, I went to bed that night, like waking up in the middle of the night and sweating, being like, maybe if they did this, they could have worked it out. Like I love that movie. Yeah. I thought it was, and now I'm researching this, I cannot get rid of this feeling in my chest. It's like this somber nostalgia, and I cannot get it out. And I can't, I know I'm sounding like a rambling idiot, but it's only because this movie's so goddamn good. Yeah. All right, what's next?
The Titanic / Olympic conspiracy.
So you don't know about this, right?
No.
So like every moment in history, whether it's like the moon landing or JFK, 9/11, I guess mostly tragedy. Well, the moon landing wasn't a tragedy, but like every event like that where it's like you can, there's a whole industry of media around just those events and the different perspectives around it. And Titanic is, similar because people would always, study hobbyists would study Titanic. You can always put another perspective on it. Like with JFK, it's like, oh, was there one shooter? No, there was two. It's like, well, no, it was the mob. Well, no, it was actually Russia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, it was actually this guy. Like there's 100, different interpretations of that event. The same way there's more like 100 interpretations of a good movie. And with this, there was one that it was this guy Robert Gardner in the 1990s. He put forward this theory that the Titanic was actually the Olympic, and it was sunk on purpose. Because so what it is the Olympic, and I think it was 1912. Titanic was being built. It was like, let's say 4 months away from being completed, and I don't know if that's true. It's somewhere around, it's months from being completed, and they're in, I guess in England, they were sailing in a river, like a bay, next to this Navy cruiser, the Hawk. It was a Navy. The cruiser sounds small, but it's like sort of like a mini destroyer.
Yeah.
Sort of like, if we were playing Battleship, it would have like 2 or 3
holes instead of 4. Yeah.
So something happened where the Hawk was trying to turn and get behind the Olympic. Also, the Olympic is Titanic's sister ship. There's 3 ships. It was Titanic, Olympic, and Britannica, or Britannic. And in the Olympic was the first, Titanic was the second, and Britannic was the third.
My great-grandparents went on a cruise on the Britannica.
Oh shit! Really?
Yeah.
Holy! How? So what year was that?
I don't know. I'd have to see. She wrote down. I'll have to show you the notes. She wrote like her whole diary.
Holy
of it.
shit!
It was sick.
Because the Britannica, we're getting off topic. Okay.
Sorry.
But I'm sorry. That's not your fault. Really quick about the Britannica. Actually, no. I'll save it for later. So anyway, the Hawk turned to try to get behind him, and it went right into the, like 90-degree angle, like rammed it. It's a battering ram that went into the side of the Olympic and had some, created some damage. And the theory goes that the damage was so great that, it was irreparable. And they just, started using this thing in 1911. It's only been a year. Mm-hmm. This thing was making, journeys. So what they did is in the middle of the night, they like switched the Titanic and the Olympic. And they just made the Titanic, they replaced the lettering and put Olympic and then whatever, and did the same thing on the Titanic. And then they went out and they, they doubled the insurance on it like the day before the Titanic sailed.
Oh.
And which, the theory states that was actually the Olympic that sailed. And then they sunk it on purpose or whatever to get the insurance money. And because the one suspicious thing about it that people point to is JP Morgan, he pulled Marky Mark. And because he was supposed to be on the Titanic, and then he canceled like the day before, and people were like, "Oh, that's not," because J.P. Morgan owned the company that owned the White Star ship line.
So yeah,
that's that's but it's not true at all. It's fucking not true at all.
It's not.
So I saw because this guy, I'll link the guy's video in the description. It's because it was a great video. But in the comments, somebody was like, was the Titanic / Olympics sunk on purpose? And it says, short answer, no. Long answer, hell no.
Hell no.
Because basically it was like the insurance wouldn't have even been as much as the ship was even worth. So, and also the damage was easily repairable. They said there was damage there. There was no damage to the keel of the ship, which is like basically the spine on the bottom. And the guy was trying to say like if the keel is damaged, like the ship's fucked. It's like when you get a minor fender bender, but then the frame of your car is out of alignment a little bit and your car's screwed.
Yeah,
but it's not true. Like if they could have made replacements on the keel that would have easily been, repaired. Mm-hmm. And also, Thomas Andrews would have had to been in on it, and like went on the ship and died.
Yeah,
like it doesn't make any sense. Like Bruce Ismay would have had to know, and because Thomas Andrews built the ship, he would of course know that it was a different ship. Yeah, and also it was supposed to be new. And also the Titanic was like months away from getting repaired. Like it didn't even have a fucking engine in it when that claim switch happened, right? So you're telling me the guys like you're telling me they just somehow just fast tracked Titanic to being completed so they can go, switch it with the Olympic.
Plus, think about the thought of being a boating company. Be like, let's drum up some money and this will be good for our business.
PR,
Let's sink one of our ships.
Yeah.
That's the dumbest thing because, like, I'm sure in one way or another their business took a hit after that because, like, I'm not going on a ship for a while if that's, like, the number one thing in news.
They say that those 3 ships were cursed. And also, if you want to know more about that's all we'll talk about because, this is about the movie. I just want to get some history in there because it's fun. But if you want to know more about that, I'll link the guy's video and you can watch that. But the Olympic and the Titanic and the Britannic, those all ships were fucking cursed. They were supposed to be like these ships that would be like, in commission for like 20 years, let's say. And they all of course the Olympic got a crash and got another crash and it was used in World War I.
Yeah.
And Titanic, of course, sank on its first,
maiden voyage.
Didn't even hit the rim. Nothing. It was and then the Britannic was like bigger than those 2. And it's crazy that your grandparents went on a cruise on that or went on it because it was like 1914 it first sailed, and then there was a very small window that it was actually like a commercial ship before it was commandeered by the British Navy during World War I, and it became a hospital. It was like the biggest hospital ship of all time, and within like it was like 1917, 1916. It was very shortly after it got into the war. It was it was either hit by a torpedo or a German mine that was left in the water and exploded, and the thing went under in like 40 minutes. But apparently only 3 people died. But it still
Maybe
sunk.
it wasn't the Britannica then.
Well, there was a fine window where it could have happened if it was like 1916
I have to double
17.
check. I know it was. No, it might have been. It was another ship. It's called like the Queen of
Queen Mary.
Yeah, it was
Yes.
that. It's that.
Like,
yeah.
I think I don't know if this might not be true, but I think they got in that video that I talked about. He interviewed the guy that designed that ship, or had some. I think that might not be true. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
they went on the Queen Mary. It
okay,
wasn't
that
the
makes sense.
Britannica.
So yeah, there's actually a flaw that something I really don't like in this. And when I say really don't like, it doesn't ruin anything. It's just like, they could have done that a little bit. So it's when Jack and Rose have sex in the car. They get in the car, then they start kissing, and she's like, "Touch me, Jack," or "Put your hands on me, Jack," and he's like, "Oh yeah," and then they start kissing, and they cut away to the guys on the crow's nest, going, I can probably smell the ice, mate. He's like, "Bullshit bollocks," right? And then it cuts to Captain Smith and Murdoch, and they say a few words or something. And Captain Smith goes, "I'm all right. I'm headed out for the night." And then they cut back to the car with the hand on the glass, and then it cuts to them. And she's like, "You're trembling." He's like, "I'm okay." And then they cut to the stewards going, "Oh, look, they went that way." And then it cuts to Cal discovering the picture, and then it cuts back to them the stewards going into the garage where they see the car, and then Jack and Rose go out onto the deck laughing, right? I think it should have. I don't know why they broke up the momentum they had with the romantic scene in the car, because they start making out, and you're like, "Oh, the music's building up," and then all of a sudden it cuts away. I think they should have stayed, and then cut. You can jump in time and just cut right to the shot of her putting the hand on the thing. We don't need to have like a transition shot between that. We get it.
Yeah.
And so it's them kissing. She goes, "Put your hands on me," and then the hand on the window. And then, "Oh my God, Jack, you're trembling." And then you can show the guys on the crow's nest going like, "Oh, I can bloody smell the ice," and then show, and then show the stewards going, "They went that way." And then show Cal going, "Son of a bitch," and then show Captain Smith saying, "I'm gonna go whatever," and just kind of don't break up that moment that they were building really well. You know what I mean? Yeah,
I get that.
So, that's another thing. Okay, so this reminds me, how much time do we have left? A few minutes.
5 minutes.
So there's a scene that or a fact that I learned that reminded me of me and you, because James Horner was doing the music for the movie, and James Cameron, he goes, "I needed music for the drawing scene." So James Horner just gave him a temp track to put in while editing. So he just did a little melody on the piano and like just ripped the recording and sent it into Cameron. It was unfinished, but Cameron put it in. He was like, "This is great." And then James Horner goes, no, I'm not done with it. And he goes, all right, let me see what you got. And then James Horner gives him the final thing. And he goes, this isn't working as well as the piano thing you gave me. And I remember, because you're a musician and I write screenplays and we make movies, right? And you gave me this song, like in 2018, you sent it to me. He was like, hey, this is a thing I came up with on the guitar. It's like the saddest sounding thing ever. And then I remember listening to it and go, this is pretty good. And then like 4 years later, I associated it with like one of the scripts I was writing. And then all of a sudden I realized, I'm like, this is what you would hear at like an Oscar, like the best Oscar for original score. Like, I think that score you fucking did is awesome. And I listen to it and it gives me such a fucking, I get it's a heartbreaking music. It's like, it's amazing.
I have to remember
what?
I have to remember how to play that.
You better, because, and you were telling me it's like, because we're talking about putting it in a movie, and you're like, that happens where like sometimes you can't get a better sounding thing than the original recording that you.
Yeah. Called
like,
demoitis.
Right, exactly. So if like if you gave me like a cleaner version of that where you did something different, you know, whatever, I would put it in the movie and be like, why doesn't this feel as good as the original? And then when I put it in the original, I'm like, we got to just do that. The same thing happened with this.
Yeah, it's totally
fine.
You
were exactly right.
I'm sure they did more takes of My Heart Will Go On, and they were just too attached to that first take.
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know, that's how it goes. It's demoitis. You listen to it too much.
My heart will go one, not heart will go multiple takes. I don't know. I fucked it. All right. Oh yeah, I loved Thomas Andrews, because in reality he was. I think it's getting a little too popular that we see somebody from history and go, oh, they're obviously autistic. But I think Thomas Andrews is a good candidate, because they talk about like, oh yeah, he was a genius, and you know he hated talking to people, and when he was on the ship, he just wanted to be left alone and make adjustments on the Titanic.
Yeah.
But in the movie, they got that. Like one of the best moments in the movie is they see Thomas Andrews. It's right after they start playing the violin, and they show like, you know, Strauss, the husband and wife on the bed, and the Irish mother, you know, singing lullabies to her children or whatever. And then it cuts to Thomas Andrews, and he's by the clock, and you see him check his watch, and then he opens the thing and fixes the time on the clock.
I wasn't,
because the clock was behind, or like ahead, or yeah, it was behind. So he's still making adjustments. Like, that's such a great character moment, and it's so tiny. And that's just, and even when he goes, oh, hello, Jack. When he goes, hey, Mr. Andrews, and he's fucking writing down notes in his note. He was always trying to figure out adjustments for the ship. Here, this is the part of the podcast where I want to keep talking, and I'm struggling. Billy Zane's great. We talked about how the line that I've remembered from when I was little too, and I remember being like, I remember being like, that guy. He has such a strong, memorable presence in this, where I can't compare him to like another character I've seen in terms of his look and the way he acts and feels. He's such a unique dickhead character in a movie, and just him, like, he knows what he's doing too. That's what's so great about Billy Zane, because he knows that he's supposed to be hated in this. And I don't know if Matthew McConaughey would have been good for like being the guy you're supposed to hate. And you know, this isn't a dig at Billy Zane, but Billy Zane was perfect at it. Like, we talked about it earlier. That line where he goes, "This is absurd. I mean, it's a ship. There's only so many places you can be. Lovejoy, find her." It's like that. How do you? Because also, you know how hard it is to do there's 3 lines to that line that require like a reaction in real life. Like, this is absurd, and you go, and the other guy goes, yeah, and you go, it's a ship, right? But like, if you're an actor and all the pressure's on you to just say 3 blocks of line like that without like sounding bad, I don't know. That's a hard part of acting to me. The delivery of that. But also,
like that, the gravel he gets on his voice, which it's like usually not. I don't know. I definitely get what you're saying.
Yeah,
like, it's one of those lines that sticks out for some reason. I don't know why.
I loved it. Every time he says something in the movie, I'm like, he nailed it. I laughed out loud when I saw it. It's what else did he do that was really good? Or even just the little thing, the little looks he does, where she goes, "You unimaginable bastard," and you see him go like,
yeah,
and he just doesn't give a fuck. He just ignores it. Or even when the little look he gives when she's smoking in the beginning. Also, there's a historical. I mean, Cameron talked about this, how it was just on purpose. But the cafe that they were at the beginning didn't serve food. They just served like little finger food and sandwiches, but they were ordering lamb. And he goes, "Yeah, we just made them order like so we didn't have to like build another set." That's not interesting. Anyway, so in that scene where she's smoking and she's like, "You know how I feel about smoking," and he takes the cigarette and goes, "She knows," and he goes, like, does like a little weird, like, every facial thing is just dialed in, just straight up. He showed up day one, dominated, just fucking conquered.
Oh, wait. Well, before, I want to also, one of my favorite, again, like juxtapositions of scenes, which I feel like I want to take and make into a meme, is the shot of him, like Cal, and all the like
First guys.
guys sitting there smoking cigars, and then it immediately flips to the guys like sitting there arm wrestling with all the beers and like smoking cigs and stuff. I feel like I want to take that and make it a meme and be like, sometimes me and the fellas gotta be like this, but then sometimes me and the fellas gotta be like, you know what I'm saying?
That's sort of like a juxtaposition. It should be like girl sleepovers versus boy sleepovers.
Yeah.
I saw one with it was I might cut this out, but it was The Boys, and The Boys, the TV show.
Yeah.
And it was a meme. It was like girl sleepovers, and it's like them on the phone being like talking to each other, like they had the pillows or whatever, and they're watching like a scary movie, whatever it is. And they're like, "Oh my God, did Jason really talk to you? He really said that?" And it was like boy sleepovers. It was Homelander going deep, blow A train.
Yeah.
I mean, that never happened at the sleepovers that I was at.
No, it's funny though.
Anyway.
Just thinking about
So that concludes our episode on the Titanic. One of the most terrible tragedies. I'll leave that in. People deserve a reward for staying this long. I don't know if you call that a reward.
Well, I mean, you did transition into it from like me talking about a thing.
That's
from
true.
The
We
movie,
earned it. It wasn't random.
We earned it.
Remember the girl where he's like, "You're still my best girl, Cara," whatever her name was.
That was.
So she's in the last shot. She smiles at Kate as Rose as she walks into the grand staircase. Wherever they're doing the roll call at the end, she died on the Titanic. There's the deleted scene where her and her family get trapped behind the gate.
Oh my!
And the water's rising. They're like, no. There was also a deleted scene of the dogs swimming in the water. And they're like, we can show all these people dying, but we can't show the dogs dying.
No, that's where Katrina would not watch Titanic ever.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Because I watched Titanic like a few nights ago, and then I went out and just laid on the floor with my dogs, my dog JC, and I'm like, what would I have done if you were on the Titanic? And I'm like, if there was two of you, I'd like carry you.
Yeah.
And I'm just picturing myself trying to save my dogs.
Yeah.
Ugh. All right. So this is the point of the podcast where I want to keep talking about more stuff, but I'm running out of things to say. And you're like, Johnny, give up. It's over. And I'm like, no, wait, I want to talk about it more because I don't know. I spent so much research on this, and I don't know when I'm going to get to watch this movie again because I won't have a good excuse to do it. You know?
So today, that's why never letting go.
I'll never let go. Titanic.
You had to quote that. If they're at hour 4, if they're at hour 5, and they're like, I wonder what's that?
What's that from? That's God, I can't. Even like when they're in the water, the way they did that is they did the digital breath and they just made it all blue and shit. But they put wax in their hair to make it look like it was the ice, and then they put this stuff that like these crystals on their face. But when it hit water, it would crystallize even more. And it look like ice, and then there's so much fucking work that these people do, just so that you don't notice. Like the people who made the models, every single department in this movie, they would do something, and I would watch it in the behind the scenes, and I would be like, I cannot believe humans figured out how to do something this good, how to do that good. It's wild to me.
Yeah,
it's wild to me. So if you worked on this movie, if you worked on this movie and you're watching this for some reason, thanks.
Sick.
Give us a comment.
Give us a comment. Comment below if you worked on this movie.
And don't make a fake James Cameron account.
Yeah.
And then he's like, I am James Cameron, give me $2,000 for Avatar 3. And we're like, okay. All right. Should we call it a night?
I guess so, yeah.
All right.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for watching. If you're here, excellent. You're the man or the woman. And if you didn't make it here, you're still pretty cool. But obviously you wouldn't be listening to that, so I don't have to say that. And the next episode we're probably gonna do a full filmography episode next. I think that's what we're gonna do is just a filmography, 2 deep dives, a filmography, 2 deep dives. So yeah, we hope you enjoy this, and recommend the podcast to your friends. Hope you enjoy it. Leave some hate comments. We do appreciate the good comments as well. Those are very encouraging. But the hate comments just make us laugh and they're funny.
All the people commenting so far have been overwhelmingly positive, and it's always nice to see. So thank you.
It's insane how it's like been like 95.5% maybe.
Yeah.
So thank you. Have a good one.